I consumed an immortal elixir that had been discarded by others as refuse. Although I gained infinite longevity, I did not obtain an indestructible, immortal body. If I were to sustain a fatal injury, I would still perish. To survive in this world of cultivation, I became a vagabond beggar wandering the lands. Yet, in my second year of wandering, I encountered a young beggar who looked exactly like me. He was beaten to death simply for accidentally bumping into a noble. In the third year, I crossed paths with a demonic cultivator. For the sake of his cultivation, he ruthlessly slaughtered an entire town while they were still alive. That demonic cultivator merely cast a single glance at me from afar. But I was nearly crushed to death by that gaze, forcing me to flee frantically for 3 days and 3 nights before daring to stop. Through this experience, I realized that this world is truly far too dangerous. I must increase my strength as quickly as possible. Otherwise, even with eternal life, if I am killed by a powerhouse, it would be an immense loss. But how can I improve my strength? I could not help but open my longevity system. This was a bonus gift I received after consuming the immortal elixir years ago, yet under talent, it clearly stated only one word: none. Thus, the path to finding a cultivation manual was completely severed for me. Consequently, I had no choice but to find a secondary trade first. I wandered along the road until I reached a small, humble place called Fangshi Village. There I saw an old blacksmith swinging his hammer. Clang, clang. With every strike of the metal, the system, which had been dormant for so long, suddenly illuminated. Observing the art of smithing, refining experience, +1. My eyes immediately lit up like lanterns. Even if I cannot cultivate, I can still master life skills. The old blacksmith, Liu, saw my plight and took me in as his apprentice. In the future, you shall be responsible for attending to my burial rites. I immediately kowtowed 3 times, hard enough to echo. From this day forth, I am the young blacksmith of Fangxi Village. There is a saying that once a master takes on an apprentice, the path is set, yet my system has completely lost its mind. While others must toil through fire and sweat to forge a simple blade, the forging process feels like I have breached the game's core parameters. A light tap grants me a point of experience, a heavy strike grants another. Merely touching the flame or the iron ingot sends my experience soaring. A master must spend a lifetime of forging to reach the rank of a high-level blacksmith. I have only been at it for half a year, yet the tools I craft can cut through steel, as if it were mud. Even so, I remain cautious. Although the system notifies me that I have reached the level of a grandmaster refiner, I continue to tell everyone around me that I am merely an apprentice blacksmith. One must remain humble, we must keep a low profile. I do not wander far from home. I simply remain in the village, serving my master. 2 years passed in this manner. I desired a quiet life, but the world had other plans. The neighboring village was slaughtered by bandits. It is said that they spared not even the infants. Our village immediately organized a self-defense militia. Our captain, Wang Xiaoquan, is a man skilled in martial arts. However, the weapon he holds is nothing more than a tattered, rusted blade. If he were to truly face those bandits, he would be marching to his death. I glanced at my elderly, frail master and gritted my teeth. Though I do not wish to court trouble, I cannot stand idly by and watch the villagers be massacred. Under the cover of a dark and windy night, I retrieved the refined iron hidden at the bottom of my trunk and activated my cheat mode for the very first time. I did not use a shred of spiritual energy, partly because I possess none, but mostly because I poured my entire focus into the craft, hammering every ounce of my intent into the steel. A tang saber gradually took shape, its blade emitting a bone-chilling cold. It radiated no fluctuations of spiritual energy. Yet it possessed a physical sharpness that reached the absolute limit. I secretly left it at the doorstep of Wang Xiaoquan's house. I left no name behind, choosing to remain in the shadows and shun all fame. A few days later, the bandits arrived, and the entire village hid deep within the caves behind the mountain, trembling in fear. I dragged my master into a corner, playing the part of a coward. But half an incense stick later, Wang Xiaoquan returned, drenched in blood. He clutched that very tong saber in his hand, his expression one of utter disbelief. They were dead. Every one of them had been slaughtered. The villagers rushed down to ask him what had transpired. He replied, trembling, for this blade possessed a truly ominous power. I had swung the blade once, and that bandit, along with his horse, and the iron armor he wore, were sliced clean in two. The incision was smoother than a cut-through tofu. More than 10 ferocious and bloodthirsty bandits were shredded by him alone, as easily as chopping vegetables. Hiding in the corner, I offered a faint smile. Do you understand now? Is this what one would call molecular level cutting? This is the true power of a master-level blacksmith. In the blink of an eye, 30 years have passed. To those who possess eternal life, 30 years is but a flick of the finger. But to a mortal, this is already half a lifetime. Mr. Li Teiyu grew old and hunched, and eventually passed away. Yet I remain with the same appearance of the youth I was years ago. To avoid being labeled a demon or a monster, I began cultivating the disguise technique from the system. Every day applying makeup, drawing on wrinkles, dyeing my hair white, pretending that I too was aging. On the day of my master's funeral, I knelt before his grave and kowtowed 3 times. Master, oh master, may you depart in peace. I promised to provide for you in your twilight years and lay you to rest, and I have fulfilled that vow. You are the first person I have seen off, but you will certainly not be the last. After handling the funeral arrangements, I became the new proprietor of the forge. However, the villagers began to gossip about why I never seemed to age. I knew it was time to move on to new territory. To avoid exposing my status as an immortal, I am forced to change my identity every few decades. And so, on a night of heavy wind and rain, the blacksmith Zhang of Fangxi village vanished, and in his place appeared a traveler in Linyuan village, 100 miles away. I returned to my old trade, taking up the hammer to forge once more. This time I took in a young beggar as my disciple and named him Yi Fan. This boy was no ordinary soul. He was born bearing the destiny of a protagonist. Although he lacked a spirit root, his reckless courage was exactly like my own in years past. In my spare time, I transcribed the insights on artifact refining that I had gained from the system. I compiled them into a manual titled 5 Years of Refining, 3 Years of Tempering, and threw it to him as his curriculum. Master, this book is far too profound. I cannot understand a single word. Yi Fan scratched his head in confusion, so I tapped my pipe against his crown. If you do not understand, then memorize it. If you can memorize it, then that is your own opportunity. The boy was truly sensible. Through sheer stubbornness and his mortal body, he trained his forging technique to the Grand Master level. Just as I was preparing to enjoy a peaceful retirement, the system suddenly acted up, informing me that my path of refining had reached a bottleneck. I needed to forge a natal divine artifact to achieve a breakthrough into the primordial realm. A divine artifact? I looked at the tattered fan in my hand. This was merely an object I used to fan myself through the sweltering days. Very well, I shall choose you. I gathered all the comprehension I had accumulated over decades regarding the Tao of wind, the Tao of space, and the Tao of karma. I poured it all into this simple folding fan. During that night of forging, there was no tribulation lightning. Was there any dazzling golden light spanning 10,000 zhang? Yet, as I struck the final hammer blow, the fan suddenly hovered in the air on its own. On the surface of the fan, phantoming images of mountains, rivers, and terrain began to emerge. I flicked it casually. Oh? The fan did not seem to cause much of a disturbance, yet the space before me appeared to have been sliced clean in an instant. What I did not realize was that at this very moment the divine realm, located far above the 9 heavens, had descended into chaos. The river of karma in the divine realm. The primordial great god who presided over the river of karma had been drinking tea and playing chess when suddenly, the river of karma that spanned the sky of the divine realm became turbulent without warning, as if it had been severed by an invisible, colossal blade. The deities all spat out mouthfuls of stagnant blood simultaneously. The chessboard was overturned in the process. Damn it. Who was it that severed my connection? This power has transcended the very boundaries of the Heavenly Dao. Could it be that the Creator God has awakened? Investigate this immediately. Even if you have to turn the heavens and the myriad worlds upside down, you must find this ruthless culprit. The entire God realm was thrown into complete chaos. Countless divine senses swept across the sky like a searchlight. Yet the mastermind behind all this was none other than myself, holding that cursed fan and leisurely fanning myself to escape the heat. This fan is not bad at all, it's quite powerful. From now on, I shall call you Old Bai. The kilton within the fan shivered slightly, as if feeling aggrieved by such a rustic name. But yielding to my overwhelming might, it had no choice but to obediently submit and be forged into a divine artifact. My path of artifact refinement has finally reached perfection. On the system interface, the 4 grand characters' primordial divine artifact glowed with a brilliant radiance. Just looking at it brought peace to my spirit, but I immediately realized a grave problem. This young brat Yi Fan is growing up. The way he looks at me is becoming increasingly unusual. Master, why have you not aged at all? Old Wang from next door is 10 years younger than you, and yet he has already withered away. Indeed, my transmutation technique is struggling to conceal my true nature. I must fake my death and escape immediately. And so I meticulously prepared a grand theatrical deathbed scene. That day I summoned Yi Fan to my bedside with a deathly pale complexion. I made myself look as though I were drawing my final breaths. Holding my breath until it nearly suffocated me, I spoke, "My disciple, my time has come." Yi Fan wept bitterly. "Master, you cannot die, and you have yet to see me take a wife and have children." Trembling, I pulled a jade slip from beneath my pillow. It was the culmination of my life's work. "Stop your weeping, take this jade slip. In the future, this smithy shall be entrusted to your care. Remember the essence of the path of refinement. The focus lies in the cultivation of the heart. You must never seek to impose your will or dominate others. Remember the essence of the path of refinement. The focus lies in the cultivation of the heart. You must never seek to impose your will or dominate others." After delivering these final words with an air of profound wisdom, I stretched out my legs and abruptly ceased to breathe. I had passed away. Yi Fan wept, his grief tearing through his heart, swearing on the spot to carry on my legacy. That very night, he held a funeral of great solemnity for me. The entire village came to pay their respects. Lying in the coffin listening to the funeral music outside, I felt a twinge of sorrow. Farewell to this barren land. The path of cultivation is long. If destiny wills it, we shall meet again. Deep in the night, after the funeral had concluded, I crawled out from beneath the earth, brushed the soil from my body, and bowed once to my own tombstone. The blacksmith surnamed Jiang was dead. From this day forward, I am Li Danyu of the Langbei region. I altered my appearance once more, taking on the guise of a middle-aged scholar. I had already pushed the path of refinement to its absolute peak. What should I pursue next? I gazed at the grayed-out medical arts tab within my system, a faint smirk forming at the corner of my mouth. In this world of cultivation, where human life is as cheap as blades of grass, what is the best profession to hold? Nothing beats being a divine doctor capable of bringing the dead back to life. It is both highly respected and perfectly safe. I slung my satchel over my shoulder and took advantage of the night to head toward the prosperous Tianshui city. It is said that many aristocrats and powerful officials reside there. Their various terminal illnesses shall become the very mines of experience I need to grind. As for those mighty beings in the god realm tearing the world apart to find me, let them continue their futile search. As long as I do not wish to be found, not even the Heavenly Dao shall be able to track me down. Under the pseudonym Li Danyu, I opened a medical clinic in Tianshui City. Utilizing the divine precise control learned from years of forging iron, I treated ailments much like one repairs furniture. While others spend ages taking a pulse, I need only a single glance for the source of the illness to be revealed. In a mere 3 years, I had leveled my medical arts to the maximum rank, and I, once an outsider, had become the revered divine Dr. Li. On one late night, trouble arrived right at my doorstep. A woman in black, covered in blood, burst through the doors of my clinic. In her hand, she clutched a jade medallion belonging to the Heiwan sect, saving a demonic sect enchantress. This truly was a cruel twist of fate. I had just intended to cast her away. Weakly, she pulled out a jade slip. Save me, and I will grant you a cultivation manual. Saving a demonic sect enchantress. This was nothing short of courting death. I had just intended to cast her away. Weakly, she pulled out a jade slip. Save me, and I will grant you a cultivation manual. Truly, I Qingjiao possess no other merits, except for the ability to listen to reason. I took out my acupuncture needles and the medical texts used to treat the incurable diseases of mortals, and with swift precision I mended her shattered internal organs. With a steady hand, I used silver needles to seal the chaotic spirit energy rampaging within her. The female cultivator woke up, stunned. She had surely never seen a mortal physician who could mend the body of a cultivator as if patching torn clothing. She left behind the jade slip and the name Lu Ruyan, then fled into the night. I gripped the jade slip, and the system detected a flawed demonic cultivation technique. Eliminating the side effects, it evolved into the longevity-nourishing chi art. Finally, I could embark on the path of cultivation. Although my aptitude was virtually non-existent, this improved technique required no spiritual roots, only time. I barred the doors, and immediately entered secluded meditation. This period of isolation lasted 50 years. To others it is half a lifetime, but to me it felt like the blink of an eye. 50 years of monotonous breathing exercises would have driven anyone else to madness. But as I watched the familiar interface, seeing the experienced bar inch forward, I felt only profound satisfaction. Finally, in the 50th year, the first thread of spirit energy was born within my body. First level of chi refining. 50 years to reach the first level of chi refining. It sounds like nothing more than a joke, yet I do not care. As long as I remain among the living, this experience bar shall be maxed out by my hand, sooner or later. At present, I have mastered medicine to the pinnacle, maxed out my knowledge of poisons, and can even forge artifacts. I am in truth an omnipotent grandmaster. Just as I was preparing to flee to the ends of the earth, the mortal emperor began his schemes. Seeking immortality, the new emperor listened to the rumors of a demonic cultivator and ordered the capture of the common folk to refine human elixirs. A troop of imperial guards, radiating killing intent, surrounded my humble courtyard. The commander, a master-level fighter, kicked down my door. Before his blade could even be unsheathed, I blew a gentle breath. My max-level poison powder drifted upon the wind. The commander had not even finished his dialogue before he collapsed, foaming at the mouth. In your next life, remember not to provoke a physician, especially a physician who practices cultivation. While the others stood frozen in terror, I packed my belongings and vanished into the night like a ghost. While the others stood frozen in terror, I packed my belongings and vanished into the night like a ghost. With the world in such chaos, where could be the safest place? I conceived of a brilliant location, the Imperial Palace. The darkest place is always right beneath the lamp in the cold palace. The Emperor searched the world for me, never suspecting that I was sweeping the floors in his own backyard. Utilizing my maxed-out camouflage technique, I disguised myself as the old eunuch, Little Guizy. This period of hiding lasted another 20 years. In my leisure, I frequented the royal library to read. All I could hear was the constant chime of experience +1+1. I read every book in the world, mastering everything from the arts of zither, chess, calligraphy, and painting, to the mysteries of heaven and earth, until one day a concubine in the palace, carrying the royal lineage, fell ill. I had no intention of meddling in such affairs, until I saw the jade pendant hanging around her neck, with a line of microscopic characters carved on the back. It read, "Gifted to little stone by my master Jiangquan." I stood frozen. This concubine was a descendant of my old disciple Yifan. What an astonishing turn of fate. Seeing the young woman on the verge of death due to palace infighting, I sighed and quietly produced my kit. A silver needle was all it took to save her life. She had truly met the ancestor with the highest seniority in the world. I have taken it upon myself to look after the two of them. The moment I realized my grand disciple was in the cold palace, my heart, which had been content with anonymity for so long, suddenly stirred. Although I did not wish to invite trouble, I could not sit idly by and watch my own bloodline be extinguished. That night I assumed the role of a divine-level obstetrician. With a cry that signaled the beginning of life, a young prince entered the world. At that very moment, the sound of footsteps echoed from outside the palace. The assassins sent by the Empress had arrived. 5 first-rate experts brandished their blades, their killing intent surging. I sighed, handed the infant to the weakened concubine, and turned to face the door. "You seek to commit murder?" I held a broom in my hand, appearing as nothing more than a useless elderly eunuch. The lead assassin sneered coldly. "Old man, get lost." I held a broom in my hand, appearing as nothing more than a useless elderly eunuch. The lead assassin sneered coldly. "Old man, get lost." He took but a single step forward, when he suddenly felt a numbness spreading from the soles of his feet. It was my max-level trap technique. I had dispersed a layer of invisible muscle-softening powder at the doorway. Thud thud, the 5 men collapsed to the ground like dumplings tossed into a pot, unable to even emit a single scream of agony. I calmly dragged them to the dry well, turning them into ash, and took the opportunity to send the Empress a return gift, a dead rat coated in nightmare powder. By the next day it was said that the Empress had gone mad, biting anyone she laid eyes upon. To protect these last 2 heirs, I remained in the cold palace for another 5 years. During these 5 years I swept the floors by day, and tutored the young prince by night. While others teach princes the 4 books and 5 classics, I taught him the black arts and the art of concealing a dagger behind a smile. In the end, the old emperor passed away. In truth, it was only because I found him to be too bothersome. I added a dash of fire-inducing croton seeds into his medicinal elixirs. With his weak constitution unable to absorb the potency, the imperial palace fell into complete chaos. As the princes fought for the throne, I guided the young prince, utilizing my max-level palace intrigue skills. I danced back and forth amidst their schemes. One day sowing discord, the next borrowing a blade to kill an enemy. A month later, those who didn't die were left crippled. My 15-year-old grandson was thrust onto the throne in a state of utter confusion. On the day of his coronation, I watched from a hidden corner. Very well, this realm belongs to my kin now. It is time for this Grand Master to make his exit. Shaking off the dust of my robes, I conceal my contributions and fame. Leaving the palace, I feel that the mortal realm no longer offers any challenge. My mastery of the Tao of arts, the Tao of poisons, the Tao of calligraphy, and the Tao of formations has all reached the pinnacle. It is time for me to ascend to the true world of cultivation and begin my training in the novice region. At this moment, my cultivation has been stuck at the 3rd stage of qi refining for 10 years. Although I possess an infinite lifespan, this progress is far too slow. I must find a place rich in spiritual energy to siphon off their resources. At this moment, my cultivation has been stuck at the 3rd stage of qi refining for 10 years. Although I possess an infinite lifespan, this is far too slow. I must find a place rich in spiritual energy to siphon off their resources. I traveled far toward the east, arriving at the 100 Herb sect, a renowned sect in the world of cultivation. It is a 2nd-tier sect specializing in alchemy. Their combat strength is not exceptional, but they are incredibly wealthy. I did not participate in the entrance examination, as my poor aptitude would surely lead to failure. Instead, relying on my miraculous farming techniques, I applied to become a miscellaneous disciple of the Spirit Herb Garden. Why did I choose farming? First, it is secluded and rarely visited by others. Second, the spiritual energy is sufficient, making it the perfect place to lie low and cultivate. Thirdly, I can grind the path of agriculture to the maximum. Thus, the Baicao sect gained a new elderly servant known as Old Master Wang. My daily tasks involved watering the spirit herbs, weeding, and applying fertilizer. To others, this was grueling drudgery. To me, however, it was a joyous time of accumulating experience. Watering, successful. Agricultural experience, +1. Water affinity, +1. Weeding, successful. Agility experience, +1. Precision, +1. The spirit herbs grew with such vigor it surpassed even the effects of medicinal stimulants. The Xiang flower, which takes others 10 years to bloom, I tended for 3 years before it bore fruit, yet I remained discreet. Every time I submitted the spirit herbs, I deliberately chose a few that had grown normally, while keeping these supreme-grade specimens for myself to consume. It even tasted like chicken. The spirit herbs were refined into pure energy to increase my proficiency. This seclusion lasted for 100 years. The sect master from back then had been replaced 3 times over, yet I remained, guarding the herb garden. Everyone assumed I had long since passed away. In reality, I merely adopted a new identity, transforming from Old Master Wang into his distant nephew. Over the past century, my cultivation was like a snail climbing a slope, progressing at a snail's pace, until I finally reached the 10th level of qi refining. I was only 1 step away from foundation establishment, but this single step was as difficult as ascending to the heavens. With my poor aptitude and no foundation establishment pill, I was fundamentally incapable of breaking through. What was I to do? Forcing the breakthrough would lead to certain death. Purchasing one was too expensive and beyond my means, so I would have to refine it myself. I cast my gaze toward the depths of the herb garden. The flora had been guarded for 300 years. The primary ingredient for the foundation establishment pill, the 7-star herb, was nearing maturity. I looked toward the depths of the garden. The flora had been guarded for 300 years, and the primary ingredient for the foundation establishment pill, the 7-star herb, was nearing maturity. This herb was the lifeline of the sect master, protected by 3 layers of formations and guarded by a foundation establishment stage beast. However, before someone like me, a master of arrays at the perfection level, all of these were merely ornamental. In the dark of night, with the wind howling, I quietly infiltrated the core medicinal garden. The guardian beast was a massive python, its eyes large as lanterns, fixed upon me. From my robes I produced a pill specially crafted for beasts, infused with essence of crane leg herb and hypnotizing grass, and tossed it toward the creature. The python sniffed it once, its eyes instantly glazing over, and it began to roll on the ground, hugging the pill and purring like a kitten. I stepped before the defensive formation, piercing through the flaws of its formation eye with a single glance. How crude. Is this truly the standard of a second-rate sect? With a flick of my wrist, I rearranged several formation flags. I strolled inside without hesitation, uprooted the 7-star grass, planted a common weed in its place, and used a minor illusion technique to mask it as the original herb. The entire process was as smooth as flowing water. Not even a single leaf was disturbed. Returning to my quarters, I took out the pressure cooker I had prepared in advance. Indeed, this was the divine artifact I had refined myself. I threw in the 7-star grass and the supplementary ingredients, sealed the lid, and lit the fire. No need for spiritual flames. No need for alchemical seals. By controlling the temperature with absolute precision, even a pressure cooker can refine immortal elixirs. 3 hours later, I opened the lid, and the fragrance of the medicine surged straight to my senses. There was no explosion, no bubbling residue. Lying quietly at the bottom of the pot were 10 perfectly round, golden transcendent-grade foundation establishment pills. A common alchemist might struggle to refine even 1, yet I produced 10. Such is the golden standard of a master of the alchemical path. I picked one up and tossed it into my mouth like a jelly bean. The immense power erupted within my body. An ordinary cultivator would have surely perished, their body exploding from the surge. But with a physical vessel fortified by infinite lifespan, I bore the strain easily. Break through for me. The spiritual vortex within my body was compressed frantically, until it finally condensed into a single drop of golden liquid true essence. Foundation's establishment stage reached. The spiritual vortex within my body was compressed frantically, until it finally condensed into a single drop of golden liquid true essence. Foundation establishment, feeling the surging power within my body. For 150 years, I have shed tears of respect. Do you all even know how I have lived through these past 150 years? I am finally no longer the lowliest cannon fodder of the cultivation world. I have finally become a slightly stronger, high-tier cannon fodder. But I did not even have time to rejoice. Outside, the alarm bells suddenly rang out. Ning asked. The enemy is attacking. The Fima sect is invading. My heart sank with a heavy thud. Damn it. I had just reached the foundation establishment stage, and I am already encountering a sect extermination tragedy. What kind of cursed constitution is this? Run. I did not even have time to collect the remaining batch of foundation establishment pills. I stuffed them into my robes and immediately crawled through the dog hole in the back mountain to escape. The survival of the sect has nothing to do with me. Staying alive is the only absolute truth. After fleeing from that crumbling Baithao sect, I conducted a profound self-reflection. Why did I encounter a sect extermination tragedy? There is only one reason. I was too close to the cultivation world. What kind of place is the cultivation world? It is a meat grinder. Today you destroy me, tomorrow I destroy you. Even a stray dog passing by would get slapped. I, a mere novice who just reached the foundation establishment stage, am holding a batch of peak-grade foundation establishment pills and an ancient divine artifact. Truly, I am nothing but a walking fat lamb waiting to be slaughtered. To better hide my strength, I decided to go to the mortal imperial capital and become a teacher. This is what they call the greatest hermit hides in the city. Who could possibly suspect that a poor, destitute scholar in the imperial capital, who teaches children with runny noses their basic primers, is actually a powerful foundation establishment cultivator? I traveled all the way north to Shangjing, the national capital of the Daikan dynasty. This place is truly prosperous. Intricate bridges and ornate pavilions. Opulent and decadent. I adopted the pseudonym Zhang Liuni, rented a small courtyard in a dilapidated alley on the west side of the city, and hung a sign, Tam V Bookhouse. My enrollment requirement consisted of only one sentence. Education without discrimination. I guarantee results or I will offer no refund. Unless, of course, you perish. At first, no one came until I demonstrated a technique, uprooting a willow tree with a single hand, though in truth I used less than 1% of my spiritual energy. I plucked the old locust tree, blocking the alleyway by its roots, and hurled it 2 miles away. That was when I demonstrated the technique of uprooting a willow tree with a single hand. In reality, I used less than 1% of my spiritual energy. I uprooted the ancient locust tree that obstructed the alley and threw it 2 miles away. The surrounding neighbors were astounded, viewing me as a celestial being. They scrambled to send their children to learn martial arts from me. I waved them off with a rough gesture. I am a scholar. I only teach the wisdom of the sages. Thus my library opened its doors, accepting few students. Only these 3 would later become figures so ruthless that their names alone would strike terror into the cultivation world. My eldest disciple, Zhao Long, was the scion of a fallen noble house forced into an arranged marriage, his face practically etched with the vow that fortune changes every 30 years. My second disciple, Su Ying, was a princess of a ruined kingdom disguised as a man, her eyes revealing the cold ambition of one destined to become an empress. My third disciple, Xiao He, was a silent and withdrawn orphan, who was, in fact, a half-breed of the demon clan, destined to become the future demon sovereign. Looking at these 3 troubled children, I let out a long sigh. I only wished to live in seclusion, so why did I end up with a collection of disciples who follow the classic protagonist templates? There was no helping it. Sending them away was simply not an option. To impart the Tao of education and literature, I decided to implement a specific style of rigorous training for them. Zhao Long wanted to learn how to fight. I tossed him a copy of an actor's self-cultivation. No, wait, it was The Art of War by Sun Tzu. The highest state of combat is to subdue the enemy without even drawing a blade. Go now and first memorize these 36 stratagems. If you cannot recite them, you shall not eat. Su Ying wanted to learn the art of political intrigue. I tossed her a book. The Theory of Thick Black coupled with 53 volumes of mock exam papers. How can one hope to be an empress without a black heart and a thick skin? Once you have mastered these 2 books, you shall be the greatest sovereign in history. Xiao He wanted to learn how to kill. I looked at this future demon sovereign and handed him a manual on moral philosophy. Killing is the lowest of all strategies. We must subdue others through virtue. Be gone and learn. Each day, I endure the punishment of death 100 times. Thus, the days passed one by one. My mastery of the way of letters surged rapidly. Every day spent teaching, writing, and reading added to my experience points in the way of letters. +1, +1, +1. Tomorrow marks the day the imperial capital suffers from a demonic blight. The days continued to pass, one by one. My mastery of the way of letters surged rapidly. Every day spent teaching, writing, and reading added to my experience points in the way of letters. +1, +1, +1. Tomorrow marks the day the imperial capital suffers from a demonic blight, heralded by a 1,000-year-old malevolent spirit. It specializes in consuming human hearts and livers under the cover of night. It has already claimed the lives of several squads of the Imperial Guard. The entire capital is gripped by panic and uncertainty. That night, this blind demon flew straight into my residence. Perhaps it found my complexion fair and my vitality appealing. It sought to claim me as a midnight snack. I was currently grading assignments for my 3 disciples. Suddenly, I felt the temperature in the room drop by 10 degrees. The lamplight turned a ghostly shade of green, and a pale, withered hand rested upon my shoulder. A sinister feminine voice whispered into my ear, "Young master." With the night so long and dreary, I did not even bother to turn my head. I dipped my brush into the ink and inscribed a massive character, "Cock," upon the workbook. This was no ordinary stroke. It was imbued with the essence of my way of letters. The character shone with the brilliance of Haoran Jingqi, the noble, righteous energy of heaven and earth. A golden radiance erupted from the page. In a single instant, it illuminated the entire night sky. That 1,000-year-old malevolent spirit did not even have time to let out a wretched shriek before it was utterly vaporized by this surge of righteous energy. Not even a speck of dust remained. My 3 disciples stood by dumbfounded, staring in silence. Master. I calmly set down my brush. I blew gently upon the ink on the page and remarked, I made a slight error in my calligraphy just now. I may have exerted a little too much force. From that day onward, the way my 3 disciples looked at me changed completely. They no longer gazed upon a teacher, but rather at a celestial being. Another 10 years passed, and it was time for Su Ying to return to the imperial court. Before leaving, she knelt before the door of the library and kowtowed 3 times, Master, if this disciple can survive and return, I will certainly renovate this library for you, so that you may enjoy a life of prosperity. I remained inside the house, not stepping out once, simply tossing 3 silk pouches to her through the air, telling her to open them only when she reached an impasse. Remember this well. Ruling as an empress is fine, but do not let it hinder your studies. Su Ying departed promptly. 3 months later, within the Great Gan dynasty, the useless Princess Su Ying, once the least favored of them all, relied on the empty fort strategy contained within the 3 pouches, along with the counter-espionage strategy and the borrowing a knife to kill, to seize the imperial city without losing a single soldier. She ascended the throne, taking the imperial title of the Heaven-Sent Empress. Repeated content in source. The useless Princess Su Ying, who was once the least favored, repeated content in source, relied on the empty fort strategy in the 3 pouches, the counter-espionage strategy, and the borrowing a knife to kill, repeated content in source, to seize the imperial city without losing a single soldier, and ascended the throne with the title of, repeated content in source, the Heaven-Sent Empress. The very first thing she did after ascending the throne was to dispatch the imperial guards to surround my humble alleyway, intent on appointing me as the imperial master. Upon hearing this news, I packed my bags and fled in the dead of night. Are you joking? Being an imperial master is a shortcut to an early grave. To be near a sovereign is to be near a tiger. Furthermore, it is far too easy to become entangled in heavy karma. I left behind only a single letter, stating that the world is vast and I wish to see it for myself before departing in high spirits with my old companion, the divine artifact. This time I decided to pursue a more elegant lifestyle. I traveled to the artistic capital Tianji City in the world of cultivation to master the Tao of painting and the Tao of the zither. Tianji City is a renowned sanctuary for those seeking to refine their craft in the cultivation world. It serves as a gathering place for the most eccentric zither masters and painters under the heavens. I adopted the artist's name Tang Bohu and began selling paintings throughout the city. While others used spirit energy to paint, I utilized perspective, shading, and lighting techniques. The painters of this world were still occupied with abstract ink wash paintings. I, however, had already begun creating photorealistic portraits with 4K level resolution. A female cultivator of the Golden Core stage happened to pass by. As she caught a glimpse of the painting, Miso offered a faint smile. The demon cultivators present were instantly mesmerized by it. Why did the figure in the painting look so incredibly lifelike, as if they would step out of the canvas at any moment? I smiled faintly, because I utilized the life manifestation technique. The nun did not understand its nature, yet she was deeply shaken. Without hesitation, she handed me 100 middle-grade spirit stones, eager to purchase that painting. From that day forth, my painting studio became renowned throughout the land. Countless cultivators queued up, begging for my work, and even nascent soul monsters would bring forth their magical treasures, hoping to trade for one of my landscape paintings. This was because they discovered that my paintings contained the essence of the Tao. By meditating upon my artwork, they could overcome their bottlenecks and achieve a breakthrough. Painting Tao experience points. +1 +1 +1. In a mere 20 years, my mastery of the painting Tao ascended to the level of a super ancient divine artifact. What does this truly signify? If I paint a bird, it manifests into the divine beast vermilion bird upon taking flight. If I paint a fish, it transforms into the legendary kunpeng when it leaps from the page. Yet I remain incredibly humble. What does this truly signify? If I paint a bird, it manifests into the divine beast vermilion bird upon taking flight. If I paint a fish, it transforms into the legendary kunpeng when it leaps from the page. Yet I remain incredibly humble. I declare to the outside world that I am merely an artist, incapable of the path of immortality. But in these turbulent times, even if the tree desires silence, the wind refuses to cease. The Tianji City is organizing a grand exhibition of 10,000 realms calligraphy and painting, with the prize being a stalk of heavenheart grass capable of extending one's lifespan by 1,000 years. I have no interest in extending my longevity, as my lifespan is already infinite. However, I am deeply interested in that medicinal herb. It is the primary ingredient required to refine the crystallization pill. Even though I remain at the middle foundation establishment stage, there is no helping it. My aptitude is simply too poor. It took 100 years just to ascend 2 levels. Those who do not plan for the future will soon face disaster. Gathering enough ingredients for the core crystallization stage will never be a mistake. And so, I registered for the final round, only to find my opponent was a Grand Master at the transformation stage, revered as the Sage of Painting. This old man was immensely arrogant, painting a 10,000 swords, returning to origin piece at the transformation level. In an instant, 10,000 strands of sword intent soared toward the heavens, leveling the entire judge's podium in the process. The entire peak was saturated with invincible sword intent. The entire peak was saturated with invincible sword intent. The Sage of Painting looked at me with smug satisfaction. Boy, it is your turn now. Do not say that I am bullying you. If you can withstand the sword intent within this painting of mine, then I shall consider you the winner. I gazed at his painting and shook my head. It was far too crude. The level was far too low, and I lifted my brush. I did not paint swords, nor did I paint dragons. On the paper, I painted a black hole. That is correct. A black hole, as understood in the principles of astrophysics. I poured all my insights regarding the Tao of gravitation and the Tao of space into the stroke of this brush. The moment the drawing was complete, the heavens and earth changed color. The sky, which had been clear and bright, suddenly plunged into darkness, and a terrifying gravitational force erupted from my paper. That 10,000 swords returning to origin painting, before its sword intent could even be unleashed, was swallowed by my black hole, as if it were nothing more than strands of noodles. With a series of rumbling sounds, it was utterly devoured, cleaned out completely. Even the Sage of Painting himself could not stand firm. He nearly lost his footing and was pulled into the painting, destined to become a mere ink-stained figure. What manner of painting technique is this? The Sage of Painting was so terrified his beard stood on end. Paralyzed with fear, he clung to a massive pillar and screamed, "Fellow Taoist, please, pull back your divine ability. It's concede. I concede." Damn it, what in the world is this painting technique? The Sage of Painting, with a deafening roar, he struck the massive pillar. "Fellow Taoist, please withdraw your divine ability." I concede. I concede. I calmly withdrew my brush. As I rolled up the painting, the sky cleared and returned to its pristine blue as if nothing had ever transpired. I took hold of the heaven heart herb and bowed to the judges, who stood there with their mouths agape in astonishment. This was what one might call the abstract school. The entire arena fell into a deathly silence. The following day, a legend began to circulate throughout Heaven's mystery city. A mortal painter named Tang Bohu had summoned a heaven-devouring abyss with a single stroke, terrifying the ghosts and painting saints alike, before departing with the heaven heart herb. I knew this place was not suited for a long stay, so I fled once again. This time I escaped to the shores of the East Sea, preparing to set sail and find a deserted island to enter seclusion and consji to the late stage of foundation establishment. However, upon the shore I encountered an acquaintance, or to be more precise, the descendant of an acquaintance. It was a youth dressed in the robes of a chi refining stage cultivator, currently besieged by a pack of sea demons. Facing imminent death, the sword in his hand was already tattered and wretched, yet at a single glance I recognized it immediately. It was an object I had forged years ago while in Linwan village, a practice piece I crafted for my eldest disciple Yi Fan, the demon-slaying sword. The name was rustic, to be sure, but it was indeed forged by my own hands. Seeing this blade, my heart stirred slightly. That boy Yi Fan must have perished long ago, correct? After all, the lifespan of a mortal is limited. Even if he were a master of artifact refining, at most, he could live for 200 or 300 years. Yet, since this youth carries his sword, he must certainly be his descendant. This is the causality of fate. I let out a long sigh and retrieved an erhu from within my sleeve. Indeed, for the past 20 years, I have not only obsessed over the path of painting, but I have also taken up the path of music. Facing the sea demons of the foundation establishment stage, who were driving the youth to a dead end, I began to play the erhu. Was it a melody of trickling streams? No, it was reflection of the moon on the Irkwan spring, played to bid farewell to an old friend. The mournful sound of the erhu resonated, carrying a sorrowful aura of the Tao that made one wish to be buried and laid to rest immediately. Those sea demons, who were originally fierce and bloodthirsty, upon hearing the music they suddenly burst into tears. Those sea demons, who were originally fierce and bloodthirsty, upon hearing the music they suddenly burst into tears. Boo-hoo, I miss my mother so much. Living is so exhausting. It would be better to just die. This melody is far too tragic. My Tao heart has crumbled. Every sea demon lost their will to fight amidst the melody. Some slit their own throats, while others sank to the bottom of the sea in deep despair. As the brief song ended, a layer of corpses floated upon the surface of the sea. The youth looked at me in astonishment, as if he had seen a ghost. I put away the erhu, walked before him, and pointed to the sword in his hand. Was this sword left behind by your ancestors? It is a family heirloom left by the old ancestor Yi Fan. Does Senior know of my clan? I pondered for a moment without answering, then took the broken sword, and casually flicked a finger against the blade to refine it. Super ancient divine weapon restoration technique. With a crisp, the rust on the broken sword fell away before his eyes. and a dazzling beam of golden light shot straight into the sky. The broken sword, which previously could only be considered a low-grade magic tool, was instantly upgraded to a peak-grade spirit tool by that single flick of my finger. I tossed the sword back to him. "Youth, it is a fine sword. It is a pity your skills are far too lacking. Go back and tell your elders. The master of this sword bears the surname Jiang. Do not bring it out again to embarrass yourself in the future." Having said this, I stepped onto the enlarged old white and transformed into a streak of light, vanishing over the horizon. I left only that youth behind, clutching the completely renewed divine sword, standing dazed in the wind. When he returned, his sect fell into total chaos. For they discovered that the sword bore an extra aura that they could not fathom. It was an aura that only the legendary weapon gods could leave behind. The grandson of the refiner sect's grand patriarch, Yi Fan, seeing that aura, realized on the spot that the one weeping bitterly was the grand ancestor. The grand ancestor is still alive. The old master has manifested his spirit. And so the entire refiner sect began scouring the world, searching for the mysterious artist playing the erhu. The grandson of the refiner sect's grand patriarch, Yi Fan, seeing that aura, realized on the spot that the one weeping bitterly was the grand ancestor. The grand ancestor is still alive. The old master has manifested his spirit. Consequently, the entire refiner sect began scouring the world, searching for the mysterious artist playing the erhu. As for me, I had long since hidden away on a desolate island deep within the East Sea. I began using pressure-based methods to refine my core formation pill. This desolate island was a place where birds would not even land, inhabited only by a troop of monkeys. Out of pure boredom, I began to teach the monkeys the ways of immortal cultivation. After all, my cultivation of humanity requirement had not yet been maxed out. Teaching humans is teaching. Teaching monkeys is also teaching. I named their monkey king Sun Wukong. Just for fun, I taught him how to wield a staff, and taught him 72 transformations, which were in truth just illusions. Yet unexpectedly, these monkeys possessed incredible comprehension. 50 years later, I had actually trained a formidable troop of monkey soldiers, and I had finally gathered all the materials required for the core formation pill. That day I erected a massive bronze cauldron. I took the metal I had refined previously and added the heavenly heart grass, 7-star grass, and dozens of other spiritual herbs. I did not use earthly fire. Instead, I summoned the heavenly lightning. Using my mastery of formations, I laid down a magic array, turning the heavenly tribulation lightning into a stove for my refining. Under the relentless scourging of the thunder, the impurities within the elixir were vaporized in an instant. After 3 days and 3 nights, a golden, perfectly round core began to take shape within the cauldron. I opened my mouth and inhaled. The golden core shot into my abdomen, and a terrifying aura erupted from within my body. The seawater within a 100-mile radius began to boil instantly. The golden core was formed, though it was only yet, by combining the max-level body refinement technique, practiced while forging, and the max-level divine sense, honed while painting. Having trained until now, a single punch from me can shatter a nascent soul stage expert. The seawater for 100 miles in every direction instantly began to boil. The golden core has finally formed, and although it is only at the early stage, when paired with the max-level body refinement technique practiced while forging, and the max-level divine sense honed while painting, I have trained until now, where a single punch from me can shatter a nascent soul stage expert. Feeling the surging power within my body, I tilted my head toward the heavens and let out a long roar. 500 years. I have finally formed my golden core. Although it is embarrassing to say, it took 500 years to reach this stage. Who told me to possess the cycle of immortality? As long as one lives long enough, even the blackest charcoal can transform into a black tortoise. Just as I was becoming lost in my own triumph, the system suddenly flashed a crimson warning interface. Warning. Warning. The host's breakthrough to the golden core stage has triggered a spatial temporal ripple, which has been locked onto by the patrols of the ancient god realm. What in the blazes? I was merely forming my golden core. How could that possibly disturb the god realm? Could it be because of my supergrade divine artifact Laobai? Before I could even react, a gargantuan rift tore open in the sky. A golden eye stared down coldly and ruthlessly at the desolate island below. It was the eye of Heavenly Dao. Damnation, this is trouble. Without a second thought, I grabbed it. Laobai. I shouted to the monkeys that were still practicing their techniques. Little ones, the situation has turned dire. We are leaving. I then activated Laobai's ultimate skill, Spatial Temporal Leap. Although it could only jump randomly and carried the risk of falling into a void, both the Monkey King and I vanished from the spot instantly. The next second, a beam of golden light possessing destructive power descended. The entire desolate island was wiped clean off the map. Over the East Sea, nothing remained but a gargantuan abyssal vortex. The terror of that moment lingered, but I had already carried the monkey, falling into an entirely new and unfamiliar map. I had mistakenly consumed an immortal elixir that had been discarded by others. Though I gained an infinite lifespan, I did not possess an indestructible body. Should I suffer a fatal wound, I would still perish. To survive in this world of cultivation, I became a wanderer, making the four seas my home. While drifting toward a desolate island in the East Sea, I encountered a troop of monkeys. The integration of the fiery eyes, golden gaze, and the golden core triggered a breakthrough. This breakthrough of the golden core caused a turbulent shift in space and time. Targeted by the patrols of the divine realm and locked onto by the eye of the Heavenly Dao, I urged my divine artifact Lao Bai to initiate a spatial temporal leap. I fled in a panic, taking the monkeying Sun Wukong with me. As we opened the new map, Lao Bai vibrated violently beneath my feet, much like an electric fan being unplugged from its power source. The fan blades retracted, and my vision dimmed in an instant. An agony that tore into the very marrow of my bones erupted from my limbs. I had barely managed to curse before my entire body felt as though it had been thrown into a meat grinder, with all sense of direction lost. Top, bottom, left, and right, all blurred into one. Every bone in my body was relentlessly disassembled and reassembled. My internal organs felt as if they had been tied into dozens of knots, and my flesh was ground into a pulpy mess. I know not how much time passed, but that violent tearing force suddenly receded. My entire body was slammed down hard, striking a patch of solid ground, crashing into the earth and forming a human-shaped crater. Right beside me, a furry lump also struck the ground in similar fashion, emitting a low, aggrieved growl. Sun Wukong tumbled 3 times, his messy hair standing up like a bird's nest, clutching his own tail, his eyes darting around in bewilderment. Master, have we ascended to the heavens? Or have we plunged into the depths of hell? I gasped for air, first administering a painkiller to myself, and then following up with 2 sedatives for the monkey. Only then did I slowly sit up. Everything around us was a desolate shade of gray. The sky looked as if someone had taken a giant brush and coated it in dull, lusterless gray paint, with only a few pitch-black fissures drifting across the heights. Like scratches someone had etched onto a pane of glass. The ground beneath our feet was not earth. It was not stone, but rather countless fragments suspended in the air. Varying in size like shards of shattered porcelain, they floated in the void, yet remained as solid as bedrock. In the distance, a mountain had been severed in half, standing solitary in the air, with its lower half long gone. All that remained was the raw, jagged cross-section of the mountain, as if it had been cleaved by a divine blade. And further still, several rivers flowed in reverse from the sky down to the earth, yet the water did not fall, remaining suspended in a tranquil state mid-air, condensing into peculiar spheres of water. At this moment I narrowed my eyes and mobilized my divine sense. The moment my divine sense swept across the area, a sharp pain shot through me, as if countless needles of energy were piercing my sea of consciousness at once. With spiritual energy in disarray, space fractured, and the causal threads woven into a chaotic mess, I realized I had discovered the ruins of a broken realm. This place was a nexus where fragments of minor worlds converged. Having been erased during the primordial era, it had escaped the surveillance of the Heavenly Dao. My eyes brightened, but immediately I furrowed my brows. Escaping the surveillance of the Heavenly Dao meant, on one hand, that it was a blind spot, lying beyond the reach of its gaze. But on the other hand, it also meant it was a scar discarded by the Heavenly Dao itself. Sun Wukong bounded over to the edge of the abyss, peered down once, and was so terrified by the deep gray sea of mist below that his fur stood on end. He hurriedly recoiled and clutched my leg tightly. Master, this place is terrifying. It was only natural to be afraid. Only a place of terror would be devoid of visitors. I patted his head, yet in my heart I dared not lower my guard. In ruins like these, where worlds were purged by the Heavenly Dao, who could say if it was not a dumping ground for something hazardous? If some untethered vicious beast were to crawl out from a hidden corner and swallow us in a single gulp, what then? I first withdrew a small bronze bell and shook it gently. The formation activated, and a microscopic detection array unfolded. A transparent ring of light, centered on me, rippled outward. The scope of the survey gradually expanded. A moment later, the system provided its feedback. However, I discovered several anomalies in the stability of the surroundings. I suspect these to be the ruins of a great Dao. My heart stirred at the mention of great Dao ruins. Such remains typically manifest only under extreme circumstances. For instance, an existence at the level of the great Dao perishing, or an entire world shattered by a single wave of a fan. Instinctively, I reached for Lao Bai at my waist. Sun Wukong suddenly extended a furry finger, pointing ahead. Master, look over there. I followed his gaze, and saw at the edge of a floating continent not far away, a dilapidated divine temple, with only half of its ruined walls remaining, yet it still vaguely exuded an aura of profound power. Solemn and dignified in the center of the temple stood a tilted stone tablet. It was 3 people tall, covered in fissures, as if it could crumble into gravel at any moment. I attempted to walk toward the stone tablet. The first step was effortless. The second step felt as heavy as stepping into a quagmire. The third step, and the entire space suddenly grew thick and viscous, as if I were wading through water. Every molecule of air was obstructing my path. Sun Wukong, my disciple, tried to follow, but after a single step he was violently repelled. He slammed into an invisible barrier. With a flattened nose and a twisted mouth, he clutched his face, aggrieved to the point of tears. I looked back and warned, "Do not move." I waved my hand, and a thin cord condensed from spiritual energy wrapped around his waist. I secured him to a nearby boulder. "Stay here. Guard this place carefully. I will go ahead to investigate." Sun Wukong snorted twice and nodded vigorously. He hugged the boulder tightly, refusing to budge. I turned back around, gritted my teeth, and stepped forward again. I drew closer with each step. The resistance grew increasingly immense. The space around me felt as though it were solidifying into amber. I felt like a tiny insect trapped within hardened amber. Even the slightest movement required the exertion of my entire being. Beneath this invisible pressure, the golden core within my body grew searing hot. A single drop of pure golden essence in my dantian felt as though it were being pulled by some unseen force, slowly beginning to tremble. It was not until I stood directly before the stone steel that the oppressive force vanished completely, as if everything I had just experienced were merely an illusion. I raised my head to observe the steel. There were no inscriptions upon it, only a chaotic web of intertwined cracks. But the moment my divine sense touched those fissures, an ancient, immense will, one so overwhelming it nearly suffocated me, erupted unexpectedly from within the stone, like a colossal, invisible hand clutching tightly at my sea of consciousness. Yet that will seem to pause in surprise, as if it had never expected a living soul to stumble into this place. A moment later, a slow, deep voice resonated within my mind. "Interesting." The hair on the back of my neck stood on end. "Who is it?" "Young one, how did you manage to escape the eyes of the Heavenly Dao?" "How did you manage to escape the eyes of the Heavenly Dao?" My heart skipped a beat. It seemed that my act of using the fan to disperse the previous surveillance had been witnessed by this entity. I forced myself to remain calm, leaning against the side of the stone steel, and attempted to adopt the most nonchalant tone I could muster. I simply waved it on a whim. I did not expect to blow away the eyes of the heavens. To be honest, I feel quite wronged myself. The will within the steel remained silent for a moment, as if it were digesting the information in my statement. After a long pause, it let out a faint sigh. "Indeed, it is that fan." "Do you know Old Bai?" My eyebrows twitched, and Old Bai at my side gave a slight tremor, emitting an ancient hum. It seemed both tense and somewhat excited. "You wielders of that fan, you always bring trouble to the Heavenly Dao." "Wait, did you say you?" Implying there were others before me who wielded this fan? I raised a finger, and the cracks on the stone steel flickered with a soft light, as if remembering a distant past. "Long ago, there existed someone far more powerful than you." Why does that statement sound so jarring to the ears? He cleaved through the heavens with a wave of his fan, severing the fate of those before him, decreeing the destiny of all existence, and purging the corruption to reshape the Heavenly Dao. The Heavenly Dao then took his very image and etched it into the deepest layers of its calculations, treating every action he took as a catastrophic anomaly. This realm, in later times, was erased during one of those failed calculations. This realm in later times was erased during one of those failed calculations. I narrowed my eyes, my expression grave. So this was the lingering will of this world. This place was once a complete minor world, filled with mountains, waters, humanity, and spirits. Until one day, the gods above used us as subjects for an experiment, allowing that fan wielder to act as he pleased, to see if the Heavenly Dao could rectify every deviation. What was the outcome? The result was that the Heavenly Dao rectified the deviation by crushing this world at our very layer of existence, along with all living beings within it. Tani let out a soft laugh. A laugh filled with hidden, shattered fragments of soul. I remained silent. Sun Wukong stood in the distance, watching me, scratching his ear as if he could feel the air itself growing stagnant. I reached out to caress the cold surface of the stone steel. "So this is what you call the land of the severed boundary. We were never... This is what you call the borderlands in the higher civilization. Because their simulations at the higher levels failed, they were purged by the combined decree of the Heavenly Dao and the God Realm. It is essentially a dumping ground for the remnants of these discarded small worlds. Due to its unique nature, it has slipped past the surveillance of the current Heavenly Dao, yet it remains bound by the most fundamental laws of existence." My eyes twitched involuntarily. 4 million failed simulations have gathered hundreds of millions of humans, hundreds of millions of demons, and hundreds of millions of beasts, all packaged and disposed of. The 4 million failed simulations have processed hundreds of millions of people, hundreds of millions of demons, and hundreds of millions of beasts, all in the eyes of the Heavenly Dao. We are nothing more than mere sets of data. I suddenly recalled the points of light scattered across the river of fate in the God Realm. To me, every flickering light that was extinguished represented a life that had ceased to be. But to those great deities sipping tea above, it was merely an annoying sequence of data and failed calculations. I opened my mouth to ask, then why do you remain here? I can do nothing. I can only wander through this heap of refuse, watching every fragment decay and rot, though occasionally things fall into this place. Like you, I once thought only the remnants that slipped through the cracks, when the Heavenly Dao conducted its purges, would fall into this realm. I never expected to see someone still alive. Still alive? My existence is also something they wish to erase. Then what do you intend to do? You possess that brush, and you have been marked as a dangerous anomaly. If you continue to hide, the Heavenly Dao will eventually track you down and erase you. Do you intend to follow in the footsteps of your predecessor, to sever the thread of fate and forge a new order across the heavens? Or will you hide in some dark corner, watching the scenery, while others are wiped out, generation after generation? There was no reproach in his voice, only a calm and steady narration of facts. My mouth hung agape. Following my consistent principle of seeking the Tao, there was no need to deliberate. The obvious choice was to flee. According to my steadfast principles regarding the Tao, this matter required no thought. Naturally, I would hide. I have always been a bystander, possessing neither the temperament of a savior, nor the desire to act as a trailblazer. Let the Heavenly Tao do as it pleases. As long as it does not tread upon my toes, who would be willing to risk their life against it? However, the problem is that several faces suddenly flickered through my mind, refusing to be ignored. Wang Xiaoquan, the blacksmith of Fangxi village, and that foolish boy Ye Fan from Linyuan village. Liu Ruyan, gasping for breath in the dark tavern. My grand disciple, clutching the jade pendant in the cold palace, and the young prince I pulled from his mother's womb. Su Ying kowtowing like a ghost before the study door. Zhao Long, gritting his teeth while reciting the art of war. Little Black, who has remained quietly by my side for these past few years. The peach trees I watered on the desolate path, and the monkey who danced with his staff. Sun Wukong tugging at my sleeve. The one who ascended to the heavenly court to wreak havoc in the celestial palace. They were all like fragile threads wrapped tightly around me. According to the calculations of the Heavenly Dao, I am a dangerous point of origin. Those at the ends of those threads are all variables that must be purged. I remained silent for a long time, then asked if I were to flee, would the Heavenly Dao spare them? No. The purge strategy of the Heavenly Dao has always been to strike simultaneously at both the source and the end. As long as these threads remain connected to you, it will not spare anyone, unless you personally sever all karma. And what does that entail? Slaughtering everyone you have ever come into contact with. A chill ran down Su Chen's spine, and in his mind the image of Yi Fan's tombstone flashed. The silhouette of Su Ying kneeling before the study, and the clear eyes of Little Black, suppressing a murderous intent. And not far from there, Sun Wukong hugging a stone, foolishly gazing at me. A faint smirk curled upon my lips. Are you mocking me? Do you not wish to? Why ask such an obvious question? Listen closely. You have only two paths before you. The first path, put away the fan. Conceal your cultivation. Cease all attempts at a breakthrough, and touch no more of the great Tao. Adopt the posture of a true mortal, remaining beneath the gaze of the Heavenly Dao, and eke out an existence until the middle of the universe's lifespan. The second path, continue your ascent, but you must forge a path that lies above the Heavenly Dao, or perhaps beyond it entirely. Only when you are no longer a variable, existing outside the system of this Heavenly Dao, will it be unable to use its own laws to erase you. In other words, you become another clever mouse, playing a game of hide and seek, or you must become a new Heavenly Dao yourself. That is one way to understand it. But know this, there is no third path. I subconsciously touched Lao Bai at my waist. The fan was cold to the touch, yet it trembled slightly beneath my fingertips. I raised my voice and asked, you seem to understand this fan very well. It is not the fan itself, but what this fan represents. It lies beyond the causality of all things. The Heavenly Dao is merely a collection of causality. The Heavenly Dao is merely a collection of causality. Yet this fan originates from a place far beyond that. What else lies beyond? You carry more than just a fan upon your person. You also possess that thing. The aura radiating from it is so foul that even the Heavenly Dao finds it an eyesore. As you spoke, a familiar interface manifested within my mind. The longevity system, displaying a list of skills cultivated to their zenith, even those belonging to the ultra-ancient gods. A sudden chill crawled up my spine. Where exactly did this thing come from? I looked up at the stone tablet and asked, are you familiar with this system? I know a little. A long time ago, within a certain fragment of a high-level plane, I sensed similar fluctuations. It is not a product of this world, nor is it a tool of the God realm or the Heavenly Dao. In my view, it appears as though someone is using you. Using this tether that is you. To probe the Heavenly Dao. To probe karma. to probe the fan, and to probe the ancient scripts they failed to complete in eras past. You mean to say the original masters of the fan? Did you truly believe the fan grew at your waist by birthright? I was momentarily speechless. The longevity system, a white gaze from the Heavenly Dao. So, the blessing of longevity that I had always imagined, in the eyes of others, may be nothing more than a specimen for a long-term project. In the eyes of others, may be nothing more than a specimen for a long-term project. I raised my head to gaze at the shattered sky, and then spoke. So has this specimen, myself, finally escaped the cage of the experiment? That is essentially how one might interpret it. Your golden core formation at the Eastern Sea caused ripples in space and time, leading the Heavenly Dao to lock onto you completely. This time it has truly taken action. It was even more severe than when the world was split asunder. Had you not used the fan to narrowly escape at the last moment, there would not have been a single fragment of you left. I gingerly touched the bone that felt as if it had nearly shattered, and replied, well, my fortune remains quite favorable. Do you truly believe it is merely fortune? Nothing you possess is a result of mere coincidence. He paused for a moment, as if sensing that speaking further would violate certain restrictions. His voice suddenly became indistinct in an instant. I have already said too much. Because you are a fellow wielder of the fan, I shall grant you a supplemental reward. The fissures on the stone tablet suddenly began to shift rapidly, as if something were swimming within them. The next moment, a tiny point of light flew out from the cracks and struck directly between my brows. My vision darkened, and immediately afterward, a vast array of fragmented images flooded into my mind. It was a vision of immense, unparalleled grandeur. Countless bands of light intertwined to form a river. The water of this river was not liquid, but composed of shimmering specks of light. The water of this river was not liquid, but composed of shimmering specks of light. Every single speck of light was a recorded fragment of history. I saw the eyes of the Heavenly Dao observing coldly, saw the deities of the divine realm drinking tea and playing chess above the long river, and saw one of the gods in that assembly turn toward an inconspicuous point of light within the river, and gently trace a line through it. At that instant, the entire river surged with ripples. Countless tributaries changed their course, mountains and rivers shifted color, and the destiny of the world was altered entirely. Thereafter, someone dissatisfied with such tyrannical and arbitrary rewriting of the rules, brandished a fan. With a single sweep, the river was cleaved in two, the divine realm trembled, and the Heavenly Dao flew into a rage. Countless worlds marked as sources of contamination were engulfed by flames and incinerated into ash. In a forgotten corner, a feeble, lingering consciousness watched silently as its own world vanished. The scenery shifted, transforming into cold symbols and figures. Subject: variable detected. The great Dao's will of a certain minor world reacted violently to the sweeping influence of the fan wielder's actions. The conclusion is that under extreme pressure, the projected leap will manifest as a failure. The processing scheme for the light and shadow surfaces gradually faded into obscurity. My consciousness returned to the stone steel. Cold sweat drenched my brow and I spoke. This is the synthesis of your world books. Am I being treated as a test subject? The cracks upon the stone steel slowly began to stabilize. That will spoke, mentioning the system within you. The cracks upon the stone steel slowly began to stabilize. That will spoke, claiming the system, the fan, and the hostility of the Heavenly Dao were nothing more than a continuing experiment. The only difference this time is that they have employed more complex conditions, a longer duration. And you are one of the core variables in this experiment. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to appear composed. I opened my mouth and asked, so is my current choice to continue serving as their lab rat, or to shatter this laboratory to pieces? I have no right to decide for you. I can only tell you this: you cannot escape. Either you choose to withdraw from this grand game, severing yourself from the system and the fan, returning to the trajectory of an ordinary person, or you must find a way to ensure you are no longer merely a chess piece for others to wager with. Naturally, the second path will lead to a swifter death. I remained silent for a long time, then suddenly laughed, saying, tell me, do I look like the type of person who would grit their teeth and cripple their own golden finger? You do not. Very well then. That is simply how I am. I will always choose to cultivate in obscurity rather than seek conflict. But asking me to castrate my own potential, that is an impossibility. Therefore I will continue to lay low, but once I hid in the shadows, praying that the Heavenly Dao would not notice my existence. Now I must find a way to exploit the loopholes within its book of rules. After all, having been a test subject for my entire life, having spent my life as a mere lab rat, I might as well eventually take control and replace the one conducting the experiment. The stone steel remained silent, listening, and as it offered no reply, the smile gradually faded from my face. I stood straight, performing a formal bow to it, and spoke, thank you. At the very least, you pulled me out from among those deluded demons. and helped me see the hidden corners beneath the table. I do not claim that I will avenge this world. I am not that noble, nor do I have the luxury of such sentiments. But if one day I truly reach that pinnacle, I shall, in passing, mend this fragmented realm. The stele remained somber for a long time. Deep within the water crevice, a faint glimmer of light seemed to appear, flickering before vanishing once more. A consciousness spoke. I hope that by then you are still alive. That depends on whether the patience of the Heavenly Dao is sufficient. Will it be able to wait for a lowly snail like me to crawl to its doorstep? Furthermore, what I gave you just now was not merely memories, but also a small fragment of the Heavenly Dao's operational log. Study it carefully. Perhaps that is where you will find the loophole you seek. As the words faded, the cracks on the stone steel suddenly expanded violently, like a net being torn asunder, spreading rapidly across the entire surface. With a crisp sound of shattering, the stone steel abruptly crumbled into a cluster of gray light, vanishing into thin air in the blink of an eye. The entire Forbidden Realm was gripped by an invisible gale. The fragments began to collapse, and the system immediately manifested. System notification. The current area, the Forbidden Realm, will collapse completely in 1 incense stick of time. The current area, the Forbidden Realm, will collapse completely in 1 incense stick of time. Recommendation. The host is advised to evacuate immediately. Master. In the distance, Sun Wukong brandished his staff in a panic. The stone beneath its feet began to fracture at the edges. Fragments scattered into the depths of the gray, swirling mist. I surged upward, spiritual light flashing beneath my feet. I stepped upon the White Elder and arrived directly before it. I seized it, hoisting it up like a helpless chick, and commanded, "Hold on tight. We must return to see what form the heavens have reduced those people to." Return where? I had barely uttered a single word. I suddenly froze. The heavens were vast and obscured, filled with countless worlds. At first, I had leaped aimlessly to a forgotten corner of the Eastern Sea. If I were to leap blindly again, even the spirits would not know where I might land. Just as I was troubled, the system, perceiving its host's emotional fluctuations, thoughtfully prompted a selection menu. Would you like to activate the spatial leap guidance mode? Suggestion. Requires 1 world diary fragment. What is the meaning of a guided leap? The host may utilize a portion of a world diary fragment as a coordinate. By opening an anchor through the remnant information flow, you may leap to the timeline of the corresponding world, or to a nearby branch timeline. Available anchors for this selection. 1. The Great Yan Holy Capital during the era of the Ye Dynasty. 2. The Royal Library during the reign of the Heavenly Saint Empress. 3. A period near the excavation of the Eastern Sea Wilderness. 4. Period near the excavation of the Eastern Sea Wilderness. Names both familiar and distant emerged one after another. I was stunned for a moment. The Heavenly Saint Empress, the library, Yi Jing, these were all things of the past. Furthermore, the system spoke of timelines or branch timelines. In other words, even if I were to return, it might not necessarily be the original timeline. Gaze swept across these options, finally coming to rest upon an inconspicuous coordinate. It was also the final days of the Imperial Dynasty. In the twilight of the mortal realm's imperial capital, the Imperial Dynasty was destined to fall. Even if I were to rescue a young prince from the cold palace and place him on the throne to become an eternal emperor, he would eventually face his downfall. This is the script the Heavenly Dao enjoys watching. I smiled and choose this path. At the very least, it is better than being blown to smithereens on some desolate island in the Eastern Sea. Confirmed. Consuming the World Diary fragment to initiate a spatial leap. Mode. Designated route. Notification confirmed, I said, tucking Sun Wukong into my tunic, while gripping Laobai tightly with my other hand. Before the words could fade, Laobai's white-faced mask clicked open. A brilliant white light surged from the valley, enveloping both me and the monkey. The crumbling land retreated rapidly from my sight, as great shards tumbled into a bottomless abyss. In the final moments, I caught sight of the edge of the drifting fragments, where a tiny faint spark of light flickered and vanished. That was the secret the stone tablet had been guarding all along. I saw on the edge of those drifting fragments an infinitesimal ray of light flare and disappear. That was the very thing the stone tablet had left behind. I wonder when we shall ever see it again. The cycles of the world shifted like the pages of a book. When I opened my eyes once more, the first thing to greet me was a scent I knew all too well. The stench of blood and the acrid smell of smoke and fire, mingled with the grit of dust, rising amidst the chaotic clamor of a frantic crowd. Sun Wukong poked his head out from my tunic and sneezed, nearly choking on the thick air before asking, "Who set off such an explosion?" I lowered my gaze to look beneath my feet. A street consumed by ruined houses, billowing black smoke, and panicked figures scattering in every direction. In the distance stands a towering fortress. The city wall stands tall and imposing. Upon the ramparts hangs a dragon banner embroidered with the character Yi. At this moment, the flag snaps violently, whipped about by the fires of war. Below the wall, weapons clash and the roar of battle cries reaches toward the heavens. The city gate is thrown wide open, and an army clad in black armor charges frantically into the city. Amidst the flash of blades and the spray of blood, the host has arrived at the Yi clan, the sunset of the imperial dynasty, the imperial capital. At this very moment, the Yi imperial dynasty is facing the most severe foreign invasion in its history. A foreign invasion coupled with natural disaster, a cataclysmic event. I look up at the sky. Black clouds churn, intertwined with lightning. Yet these arcs of lightning are no ordinary strikes. Every bolt that descends carries an incredibly strange sensation. It does not strike the flesh, but rather seeks to pierce through the body to strike an invisible thread. In that instant, those struck by the lightning do not die immediately. Striking an invisible thread, in that moment, those struck by the lightning do not die immediately. Instead, they stand dazed in place, the light fading from their eyes, as if their very souls were being drained away. A moment later, these people slowly collapse, their bodies turning to ash, leaving not even a trace behind. My heart sinks as the system provides an explanation, the purging of the mortal realm. The Heavenly Dao is manifesting through the descent of heavenly tribulations. Where is it deemed that the presence of successors poses a high risk? The primary target at present is the Yi Imperial clan, a portion of martial grandmasters and cultivators as well. So you possess such murderous intent even toward my disciples and their descendants? My eyelid twitches. I had only intended to observe, perhaps even find a corner to open a tea house, and incidentally watch how the Yi Imperial dynasty met its end. But seeing this now, the Heavenly Dao is preparing for a final move, intending to scrub the bloodline of the Yi Imperial clan clean, ensuring every force once connected to me is annihilated, leaving not a single fragment behind. Master, have we once again stumbled into a grand catastrophe? Indeed, this time the Heavenly Dao has acted personally, confiscating the assets of our Yi family ancestors. Saying this, I raised my hand and rubbed my face. The system notification for the disguise skill activated. Wrinkles appeared. The corners of my eyes sagged. The bridge of my nose flattened slightly, and the corners of my mouth drooped. I transformed from a youth of roughly 20 years into a man in a long robe, a middle-aged scholar with a slightly hunched back. I transformed from a youth of roughly 20 years into a man in a long robe, a middle-aged scholar with a slightly hunched back. Very well, Wukong. From now on your name is Xiao Sun. Remember, we are refugees fleeing from the countryside. Our fields back home were flooded. My parents perished on the road, and now we are entering the city to seek distant relatives. Is that clear? And what about yourself? Master, you mean me? My name is Gu Chengsheng. Yes, after all, this name sounds very fitting for living in seclusion. Having said that, I walked toward the glow of the fire. Toward the city, toward that branch of the Yi family's ancestral vines about to be severed by lightning. I approached, the firelight casting shadows on my face, the heat wave hitting me. The city gate had already been breached, and the Blackhorn army poured in like ants swarming over fire. The city guards were pushed back, retreating steadily. The houses on both sides of the street were either engulfed in flames or had their doors tightly bolted. Occasionally, a few daring souls would peek out, but were quickly forced back by the stray arrows. I led Xiao Sun into the panicked crowd. Following the flow of the people, we pushed our way into the city. Mr. Gu, hurry. Hurry. Amidst the chaos, someone shouted urgently, pulling their elders and children into a narrow alleyway. To call this a conflict would be an understatement. It was in truth a large-scale massacre. The Black Armor Army did not pillage for wealth or capture hostages for ransom. Instead, they specifically targeted those dressed with a touch of elegance. They focused their blades particularly on those wearing fine silks and carrying jade ornaments. My eyes flickered over the corpses scattered across the ground. On their garments, I could faintly discern the crest of the Yi clan. They were members of a secondary branch of the noble house. No sooner had they appeared than a peculiar bolt of lightning descended from the heavens. Immediately afterward, the Black Armor soldiers moved in to deliver the finishing blow. The mortal soldiers worked in tandem with the heavenly tribulation lightning to cleanse the earth of its people. The mortal soldiers worked in tandem with the heavenly tribulation lightning to cleanse the earth of its people. This purge was carried out with a level of cold efficiency reminiscent of the modern era. My system let out a faint cynical laugh. Sun Wukong gripped the hem of my robes tightly. His eyes were filled with terror, yet he gritted his teeth, refusing to make a sound. Among the monkeys, he was considered the most courageous. Yet, this scene was far beyond the scope of his imagination. I shielded him with one hand while my mind raced, analyzing the situation. The final days of the Yi dynasty, a foreign invasion, and the descent of a heavenly tribulation. The equipment of the Black Armor Army bore no resemblance to the style of the Yi clan. Rather, it possessed the cold, rigid disposition of elite sect warriors. And upon their banners, a black flag fluttered in the wind. Embroidered upon it was a remarkably simple pattern. A single eye, with a horizontal scar running across the iris, the Heavenly Sword Bureau, one of the enforcement agencies of the Heavenly Dao in the mortal realm. They operated under the pretense of acting on behalf of the heavens to monitor the world. In reality, they were a terrestrial execution force tasked with the systematic purging of humanity. Beside the Heavenly Sword Bureau, a dilapidated tea house had been smashed in half. Tea sets lay shattered on the floor, with hot tea spilling everywhere. The shopkeeper cowered beneath the table, trembling and muttering incoherently. A black armor captain of the Heavenly Sword Bureau walked past. He did not even glance down, simply drawing his blade to a bolt of gray-white lightning descended in an instant, piercing through the shopkeeper's body, leaving his eyes void of life. The cries trapped in his throat were cut short. Before he could even utter a sound, his entire existence seemed to be erased, dissolving into dust. Before he could even utter a sound, his entire existence seemed to be erased, dissolving into dust. The captain of the Black Armor Guard sheathed his blade, his expression unchanging, devoid of joy or rage as he continued his advance. I quietly asked the system in my mind, what was the identity of that man? He was an advisor to the sect, bestowed with an imperial title by the royal family. Several years ago, he had contact with the reading organization, mentioned in the host's memories, and was marked by the Heavenly Dao as a vessel carrying the seeds of forbidden knowledge. This Heavenly Dao truly is a ruthless executioner. The advance of the Black Armor Guard was swift, taking less time than the burning of an incense stick. The main street, stretching from the city gate to the outskirts of the royal palace, had completely fallen under their control. All side streets were blocked, leaving only a few paths open for those attempting to flee. Though it was not so much fleeing as it was being herded. Herding the commoners toward a designated area for centralized management, a textbook process of a purge. Master, where are we going? Naturally, to witness the spectacle. But wouldn't going over there be no different from seeking death? Rest assured, your master is a man capable of both combat and deception. My greatest talent is knowing how to bend with the wind. Now that the winds are blowing so fiercely, if we do not seize this opportunity to soar, there may come a day when the wind dies down. And even if you wish to fly, you will have no gale to carry you. The monkey-like child nodded, appearing to understand yet remaining puzzled. I turned into an alley on the left. It appeared to be an ordinary, unremarkable passage. The Black Armor Guard had already established checkpoints in the vicinity. 3 or 4 soldiers blocked the mouth of the alley, spears in hand, their gazes cold. No passage forward. Turn back. He cast a glance at me, seeing my plain attire and the scrawny monkey-like child at my side, and did not pay us much mind. My plain attire and the scrawny monkey-like child at my side, he did not pay us much mind, merely waving his hand to drive us toward the gathering crowd. Honorable sirs, my family members are at the end of the alley ahead. They are old, and walking is difficult for them. This humble one fears he may be caught in the crossfire of the war, and wishes to bring him to safety. I would never dare to impede your official duties, my lord. I only ask for a brief moment, hoping you might grant me leniency. Stop stalling and get out of here at once. Logically speaking, with my current frail mortal form, forcing my way in would surely lead to my own undoing. I had no intention of confronting them head-on. It is merely that my tongue, from the days of schooling pupils and deceiving princes, all the way to swindling gods and ghosts, has been honed to a truly high level of expertise. My lords, I am Gu Changsheng, a scholar of the Kangxian texts since my youth, and having heard that the Heavenly Sword Bureau acts on behalf of the heavens, I have always held you in high esteem. To witness your imposing presence today is truly an honor I deeply admire. As I spoke, I withdrew several cloth bundles from my robe. They appeared to contain mere trinkets, but in truth, they held a small amount of tribulation lightning powder I had just refined, a substance I synthesized after observing the strange structure of the lightning bolts earlier. It was a makeshift tool, designed to briefly interfere with the Bureau's positioning artifacts, preventing us from being struck by accidental lightning. What gibberish are you spouting? Get lost, he barked before I could finish. My wrist flicked, and with natural fluidity, I slipped the cloth bundle into his hand. The skills of a seasoned beggar, that supreme technique of the slick palm, were pushed to their absolute limit in that moment, smooth and effortless, making it impossible for anyone to detect. The captain of the Black Armor Guard instinctively tightened his fingers, the sensation of the bundle confirming to him that there was something solid within. A strange glint flickered in the corner of his eyes, and the pressure in his grip subconsciously loosened. A strange glint flickered in the corner of his eyes, and the pressure in his grip subconsciously loosened. I have a query that troubles me. It is said the Heavenly Sword Bureau acts on behalf of the heavens, yet regarding the lightning that fell that day, which part was the mandate of heaven, and which was the whim of man? How do you esteemed lords discern between the two? These words carried no hint of provocation, nor were they overtly flattering. They were merely the curiosity of a man of letters. The Black Armor Captain furrowed his brows, and found himself looking up at the roiling black clouds gathering in the sky. We are merely following orders to maintain order. Whether it be the punishment of the heavens or the hands of men, whether it is an empire ordained by the will of heaven, or the destination where the hearts of the people gather. Are you massacring this city today to cleanse it on behalf of the Heavenly Dao, or merely to pave the way for those above? Every word was spoken softly, yet they pierced deep into the bottom of his heart, striking the very place he dared not touch. In an instant his complexion turned ghastly. A black-armored soldier nearby grew anxious. "Captain, do not listen to his nonsense." Before the words had fully left his lips, crack, a streak of gray-white lightning had fully gathered in the mid-air. It was striking directly toward the space above our alleyway. My eyes darted to the side, catching the intricate, subtle runes hidden within the lightning. For a fleeting moment, the world seemed to slow to a crawl, the path of calligraphy, a single stroke of righteous energy. My heart stirred, and my fingertips trembled slightly. From my sleeve, I drew the prepared talisman card, touched a fingertip to my lips to moisten it, and swiftly wrote the character for cover upon the talisman. The stroke was completed, the ink still wet. The character on the talisman suddenly blazed with golden light. The stroke was completed, the ink still wet. The character on the talisman suddenly blazed with golden light, leaping off the surface of the paper, transforming into a hazy golden character, rising to meet the lightning and colliding head-on. The flash and the golden character struck as if the lightning had hit a soft cushion. What was initially a direct strike, in that very moment, shifted off course, as if its vision had been obscured by something. The 3 cloth bundles I had just pushed onto the black-armored captain were instinctively tucked into his chest. A suppression spell began to quietly diffuse. With thence lightning's perspective, this alleyway, the hidden spatial runes suddenly warped, temporarily shifting from a prime target for purging into an insignificant, unnecessary area. The lightning missed its mark by half a foot, crashing down onto a different street instead. In that moment, a shrill scream echoed from afar. Before the captain of the black armor regained his senses, cold sweat drenching his brow as he reached up to touch the spot where the lightning bolt had narrowly grazed him. Moments ago, the air still crackled with residual energy, and his fingertips felt numb. He turned to look at me, but the obscure characters I had inscribed were veiled within the lines of text. It was not a particularly profound display of skill. I have simply read many books and learned that certain words possess the power to shield one from the wind and rain. You act on behalf of the heavens. Surely, shielding a few commoners from the rain cannot be considered defying the heavens' will? The captain of the black armor swallowed hard, his throat bobbing. He gazed at the corpses, strewn across the street, reduced to ash by the lightning. He then looked down at the bundle of cloth, still warm, tucked against his chest. A look of profound conflict flickered in his eyes. You have only half an incense stick of time. Should you delay by even a moment more, I will be unable to spare your life. Begone. In the next moment, he regained his cold, detached expression, raised his hand, and bellowed to the crowd behind us, "Advance." His features hardened once more into a mask of indifference. He gestured sharply, shouting to the masses behind us, "Forward! Assemble at the Eastern Market. None are to scatter." I cupped my hands in a gesture of respect toward him. I then pulled Xiao Sun deep into the shadows of the alleyway. Sun could no longer contain his curiosity and finally whispered, "Master, just now you spoke to him like that. Were you not afraid that he would simply strike you down?" I was not afraid. I was not merely questioning him. I was helping him find a justification for his own actions. Men always prefer to live within justifications they deem righteous. Give him a reason that allows him to persuade himself, and he will turn a blind eye, allowing you to keep your life. Then, what did you write upon that bamboo slip? How could it possibly provide any defense? It was but a single character of ancient script. Heaven and earth possess a grand righteous spirit, while written words possess a minor power of concealment, serving as a catalyst for humanity. By obscuring his vision through the rhythm of the lines, he was momentarily unable to perceive who stood before him. What is a catalyst? That is something you shall understand in time. I offered this explanation to a monkey. Regarding the treasures of modern civilization, the depths of the alley remained relatively quiet, with a few people occasionally peering out in terror. Seeing that we were dressed like ordinary people, they did not harbor much suspicion, so I navigated the winding paths toward the Imperial City. That was the location of the Imperial Palace. Logically speaking, as the heart of this entire Heavenly Dao fragment, the cleansing would surely begin with the Dragon Vein. To expose the imperial power of this branch and eradicate it completely. This was one of the origins of the Yi family's lineage. It was right there that I spent my time in the cold palace all those years ago, along with that Sanwei Shu manuscript and the young prince I carried out with me. How many years have passed? The descendants of that branch have branched out into countless leaves and stems. How many years have passed? The descendants of that branch have branched out into countless leaves and stems. This time the Heavenly Dao is acting, prepared to wipe them all out in a single stroke. I must go and see for myself. To see that tree. Is there in the end any branch or leaf left worth saving, to be taken as a graft and planted elsewhere? The winding, crooked alley finally led out of this residential area. From a distance, I could already see the towering walls of the imperial city. Above the ramparts, thunder and lightning churned violently. A massive glowing protective formation enveloped the exterior of the imperial city. That is the great nation-protecting formation, accumulated by the Yi family's imperial court over hundreds of years. Yet at this moment, the great formation is being relentlessly scorched by that streak of gray-white lightning. The flickering formation runes clearly show that it can no longer hold for much longer. Outside the imperial city, the Blackhorn army has surrounded the perimeter, tight as a wedge. They do not act as they did in the residential district. They are not rushing in to slaughter, but standing still, waiting outside. Waiting for what? Waiting for the Heavenly Dao to finish purging the variables within, so they may enter to clean up the remnants. I halted my steps behind a large tree, observing that great nation protecting formation with keen eyes. Within the array, a few familiar patterns flickered. That was something I designed for the young prince back then, a variation of a minor defensive formation meant to protect the cold palace. I never expected that after all these years, that small toy of mine would be perfected and replicated by others, eventually becoming the foundation for the Yi Imperial Court's great nation-protecting formation. In a sense, this great formation could be considered a successor to my own work. Master, how are we going to get inside? Sun Wukong clung to the tree trunk, peering outside with eyes filled with both curiosity and tension. Sun Wukong clung to the tree trunk, peering outside with eyes filled with both curiosity and tension. Entering through the main gate is certainly out of the question. As for the dog hole, I scanned the ground with my gaze, then looked up at the sky, continuing, the dog hole is gone as well. The National Guardian formation has sealed off both the heavens and the earth. The only remaining gap is to follow the path of the high-voltage lines. What do you mean by high voltage? It refers to the conduit through which lightning descends. By sheer coincidence, I possess a lightning-repelling device. Mister, I do not wish to be electrocuted. Rest assured, this is a lightning avoidance charm I have just deduced. It is a version tailored specifically for monkeys. As long as you do not wag your tail erratically, you will not be struck. I retrieved a small, pre-refined talisman from my robes, then slapped it firmly onto its forehead. Sun Wukong touched the talisman on its forehead with a look of suspicion. It nodded, then opened its mouth to ask, then what about us? Master, I have you. Having said that, I took a deep breath, and stomped my foot heavily against the ground. Boom, the floor tiles beneath my feet shuddered, and an intricate network of runes radiated outward beneath the earth. By borrowing the momentum of the reversed formation carved into the forest stones, I channeled a portion of the National Guardian formation's lightning power, causing the swirling gray-white thunderclouds above to suddenly converge. Several massive bolts of lightning coalesced into a single stream, focusing their strike on a point far from the imperial city. This was the design of the Yi family, used to reclaim the power of heavenly thunder at the formation's junction. My stomp had merely shifted the path of this junction. It was originally positioned in the center of the great palace, now shifted to a small circle in the air. I grabbed Sun Wukong with one hand, gripped the old man firmly with the other, and with a light tap of my toes, my entire being shot forward like a released blade. With one hand, I hoisted Sun Wukong. Clasping Old Bai firmly with the other, I tapped my toes against the ground, and my entire body launched forth like a drawn sword, soaring upward from the earth. Lightning erupted directly above our heads. Silver snakes danced wildly in the eyes of others. To them, we were nothing more than specks of dust caught in the chaotic gale. Yet in my eyes, those streams of lightning were clearly defined conduits of celestial energy. The formation of the stars, the path of spatial manipulation, local distortion, the path of script, the logic of formations, the path of array techniques, and the art of traversing them. 4 distinct skills erupted simultaneously in the blink of an eye. My body continuously adjusted in mid-air, as if weaving through an invisible web. Sun Wukong was tucked tightly under my arm, clinging for dear life, not daring to open his eyes. Just as he attempted to cry out, I struck a pressure point on his throat with a single finger, leaving him only able to emit a muffled, choked sound. Bolts of lightning grazed our scalps, leaving the acrid scent of charred hair in the air. A moment of distraction would have meant being reduced to nothingness. Fortunately, having spent years tempering myself within lightning, I had grown accustomed to it like a hearth fire. My senses were honed to a razor's edge. Master, we aren't going to die here, are we? The monkey's voice echoed within my mind. I recalled then that he had cultivated a trace of demonic power. He was now capable of communicating through divine sense. I replied within my thoughts. Today, those destined to perish are the ones already inscribed by the Heavenly Dao. In the ledger of death, our names are absent, or even if they were written, I possess the brush to strike them out myself. Our names are not in that book, or even if they were, I would simply strike them out. As soon as I finished speaking, my step became weightless, and we pierced through the final barrier of the Great National Defense Array. I landed upon the roof of a secondary palace within the Imperial grounds. The sounds of weeping and frantic screaming echoed ceaselessly from within the hall. The Imperial Palace had already been reduced to ruins. Palace maids cowered in the corners, while nobles and high-ranking officials outside the main hall were in utter chaos. Bolts of lightning occasionally pierced through the dome, striking down key targets or officials. As more died in various directions, I caught a familiar trace of aura. That aura carried a faint scent of the bloodline, belonging to the little prince I had once kept in the cold palace years ago. Carrying the monkey, I leapt down in a different direction, bypassing several palace walls and evading the gazes of guards and spies, finally landing on the roof of an unremarkable little courtyard. A humble wooden plaque hung above the entrance of the courtyard. I was very familiar with this place, Sudatong. The cold palace from those years ago was not far from here, and now, this Sudatong. I slid silently from the rooftop down to the window. Peering inside, I saw a group of people gathered around a young man. There was trembling fear and incessant weeping. The young man wore imperial dragon robes. His face was deathly pale, the veins on his forehead bulging, and his eyes burned with an unprecedented hatred. He looked to be not yet 30 years of age, and between his brows there remained a faint resemblance to that little prince from long ago. Behind him, an old eunuch knelt on the ground with hair as white as snow, clutching something tightly in his hand. A piece of jade pendant, worn so smooth that its carvings were no longer visible. My pupils constricted slightly. In his hand he clutched a piece of jade pendant, worn so smooth that its carvings were no longer visible. My pupils constricted slightly. That pendant was the piece of jade I had left for the little girl back then. The Emperor, someone broke the stifling silence. The Black Army has broken through. Even the Great Protector cannot withstand the Heavenly Thunder. The Heavenly Thunder does not distinguish between friend or foe. It spares not even our Yi family bloodline. Silence, all of you, hold your tongues. The Emperor before me suddenly stood up, kicked the official sprawling onto the ground, his eyes bloodshot. Pointing at the lightning above the ceiling, he gritted his teeth and snarled, "Do you think I do not know? The heavens wish to destroy my Yi clan. The heavens wish to destroy my Yi clan. I shall stand against the heavens." He turned, snatched the sword from the hand of the nearby guard in one swift motion. It was an ordinary-looking iron sword, yet engraved upon its blade was an incredibly intricate artifact pattern. That runic pattern possessed a truly ancient and miraculous power. As a master blacksmith, I recognized it at a single glance. It was something I had once carved on a whim years ago. It was a variant of the sword technique Yi Fan once practiced. The descendants of Yi Fan are still performing that very technique of mine. The Emperor gripped the sword tightly, tilted his head toward the roof, and roared in fury. "Where is the Heavenly Dao?" A roll of thunder echoed, seemingly in response to his roar. He tilted his head back and laughed, his laughter filled with absolute resolve, and declared, "If the Heavenly Dao truly has eyes, then strike me down today. If the Heavenly Dao has no eyes, then I, Yemo, shall be the first to challenge the heavens in this world. Then I, Yemo, shall be the first to hold the heavens and the earth accountable." Everyone in the room was stunned into silence. These words were no longer merely treasonous. They were a direct invitation to be erased from the river of time. The swirling gray-white thunderclouds in the sky seemed to pause for a heartbeat, as if shaken by his cry. The next second, a bolt of lightning, several times larger than the previous ones, descended abruptly from the clouds, aiming directly for the roof of the Suda Hall. Standing outside the window, I cursed under my breath. It actually responded. "Master, what should I do?" What should I do? What should I do? I channeled my strength and spun rapidly. Logically speaking, this juncture was the destined end of the Yi imperial lineage. The Heavenly Dao's Great Purge mandate was explicitly clear. It must be rooted out completely. If I were to intervene, it would be no different than confronting the Great Purge program head-on. But if I did not act, this lineage, which began in that dilapidated house within the cold palace long ago, would perish. And back then, when I looked at the child in the arms of the honorable lady, my heart softened once. If I stand by now and watch this bloodline be severed by lightning, forget it, since the experimental list has already been plastered with countless warning labels. Adding one more will not make a difference. Old Bai soared upward with a sharp whistle, his fan suddenly snapping open in midair. If using the Tao of writing to paint a concealed character before could only provide minimal cover, this time I intended to use Old Bai's karmic script against the Heavenly Dao, essentially forcing a system shutdown and restart. I am about to swing this fan, and the resulting commotion will be immense. Cling to me tightly, and under no circumstances should you look around. Why must you not look around? I fear your Taoist heart may collapse. The monkey shuddered. You must cling to me tightly, and under no circumstances look around. Why must you not look around? I fear your Taoist heart may collapse. The monkey shuddered, then obediently reached out to wrap its tail around my waist, gripping me tightly with both hands. I took a deep breath, and the ribs of Old Bai trembled slightly as the phantasm of mountains and rivers slowly manifested upon the fan's surface. Unlike the era when I first mastered this great momentum several hundred years ago, Old Bai now bore an incredibly faint gray water stain upon his surface. This was the lingering result from our time in the Boundary Lands, altered by the touch of the alien world. Within that crack, light faintly rippled. Old Bai, authority of the natal divine artifact, Tao of wind at a high level, Tao of space at a high level, Tao of karma at a rudimentary level. Is it possible to release a localized karmic causal event? Low configuration version. Low configuration version. The very name sounds secure enough. Confirming range 1. The Hall of Virtuous Karma and the karmic pathways within. 2. A sector of the Great National Protection Array within the Imperial Capital. 3. The system is attempting to calibrate the precise coordinates to ensure the collateral damage does not affect the entire world. I narrow my eyes and speak in a low voice. 1 and 2. Simultaneously sever the core connection of this sector. Completely sever the core conduit of that lightning strike. This is not the entirety of the Yi family's providence. Later, when you possess the capability, feel free to summon Heavenly Tribulation lightning to strike as you please. Confirm release. Confirming this, I grip the folding fan tightly, my arm trembling as I unleash the strike. The phantom image of mountains and rivers on the surface of the fan warps slightly, and a faint gray light shoots forth from the ribs of the fan. A faint gray light shoots forth from the ribs of the fan. It is invisible to the naked eye, leaving only a faint, fractured ripple in the fabric of space. That fracture coincidentally carves a path directly through the center, extending from the thundercloud down to the roof of the Dedu Hall. Crack, the towering pillar of lightning descends. Midway through its descent, it suddenly collides with an invisible barrier. This barrier does not merely obstruct, it cleaves. The core thread meant to guide the lightning bolt has been abruptly severed. The intended destination, the Dedu Hall, has vanished in the blink of an eye at the microscopic level. The Heavenly Dao's program momentarily fails to locate its target. The lightning, as if having lost its mark, swirls in midair for a moment, suddenly veers off course and with a thunderous roar, slams into an empty courtyard on the far side of the Imperial Palace. In an instant, that empty courtyard is reduced to ash. Even the ancient locust tree within the yard explodes into charred, black splinters. The tiles on the roof of the Dedu Hall rattle violently, shaking with a clattering sound, yet they remain unpierced. Everyone in the room is left in a daze. The Emperor, clutching his sword, who had already squeezed his eyes shut, waiting for the lightning tribulation to descend. He waits for 1 beat, beats, 3 beats, but the expected heavenly lightning does not strike his head. I am still alive, my hair is still intact. He opens his eyes in a stiff mechanical motion, instinctively touching his face. He stares up in bewilderment to see a few stray tiles falling from the roof, and a fissure cracking along the ceiling beams. The thunder continues to rumble, but it has fallen far from this chamber. In that moment, a surge of complex emotions floods his eyes. If one were to say that Yang Jian's defiance of the heavens just moments ago was an act of desperate recklessness, if one were to say that Yang Jian's defiance of the heavens just moments ago was an act of desperate recklessness, then at this very moment, something within the depths of his heart was quietly held back, preventing him from shattering completely. The heavens do not wish to destroy me. Or perhaps, had he suddenly remembered something? He turned his head abruptly to look at the old eunuch kneeling on the ground and asked, "Eunuch Fu, what you recited just now was that the protection mantra left behind by that nameless scholar." Replying to your majesty, this servant only recited a phrase from the archives of that scholar, which the retired emperor once spoke of, saying that the Heavenly Dao is like a book, and the human heart is like the characters within. To shelter oneself from the driving rain and winds, one must first understand the characters. This servant only knows how to recite this one passage. Just now, I was so overcome with fear of death that I repeated it several times by mistake. The emperor stared intently at the jade pendant. The carvings upon the jade, which had long since faded, suddenly emitted an incredibly faint glimmer under the reflection of the light. Those were the small characters I had carved with my own hands years ago, gifted by Gu to granddaughter. To the eyes of most, these characters were no longer legible, leaving behind only a few faint marks. However, a minute connection still existed between the essence of these characters and myself. That strike just now. When I severed the causal link of the ancient thunder, I inadvertently followed this fragile thread and placed a bypass marker on this particular path. So that is how it was, I murmured softly from atop the roof. The cleansing of the Heavenly Dao is in the end nothing more than a program. I murmured softly from atop the roof. The cleansing of the Heavenly Dao is in the end a program rather than a sentient being. No matter how powerful a program may be, as long as you input a few lines of code, it must obediently. Master, will the heavens be angered by this? Undoubtedly. This time it is merely a localized disconnection. At most, it will record another unauthorized interference error against me. Given the opportunity, it will certainly seek to settle the score with interest in the future. However, I've long been inscribed on its permanent blacklist. What difference does one more error or one less make? Sun Wukong pondered this and found the logic sound. He felt a measure of relief. Shi Tu Lao Bai leaped lightly from the rooftop, descending into a secluded corner cast in shadow. That previous strike of his fan did not merely save the lives of those within this room. It had incidentally pierced a small fissure in the imperial palace. Several connection points of the great nation-protecting formation had been severed by me, forced by the manifestation of the Heavenly Dao. The tribulation lightning, in its current state, cannot strike its target with precision, offering those inside the palace a brief moment to catch their breath. I gently pushed open the side door of the Suda Hall and quietly stepped inside. Those within the room remained immersed in a state of shock and terror after narrowly escaping death, and for the moment they had not noticed the arrival of another figure. The sound of that cough was not loud, yet it carried a peculiar piercing quality that drowned out the weeping and shouting, driving straight into the ears of everyone present. The Emperor started, turning his head abruptly, his gaze falling upon the man in gray robes standing at the door. That middle-aged scholar stood with his hands behind his back on the threshold, appearing much like a failed master weathered by the storms of life, speaking in times of chaos, witnessing an emperor bold enough to roar at the heavens like this. Gu Changsheng pays his respects to your majesty. Gu Changsheng pays his respects to your majesty. Inside the Suda Hall, the silence was so profound that one could hear even the falling of a needle. Everyone was stunned, and the emperor was the first to react. His hand tightened around the hilt of his sword, his gaze vigilant and complex as he asked, "Who are you? I do not recall ever granting you an audience. If you intend to kill me, it would be a simple task. Why waste so many useless words?" "Kill you? I have come all this way, traveling such a great distance, only to strike you down and leave? That would be a poor investment. I have always been one to calculate carefully." This sudden turn of events made the atmosphere in the room shift. Those who were on the verge of laughter were immediately silenced by a sense of surreal absurdity. The Emperor stared at me for a long moment, then his gaze suddenly flickered, landing on the jade pendant partially exposed at my waist. That was something I had intentionally revealed before entering. The shape of that jade pendant was almost identical to the one held by the old eunuch beside him, only the color was slightly deeper. The Emperor blurted out, "Where did you obtain this piece of jade?" This piece of jade, many years ago, a noble personage imprisoned in the cold palace gifted it to a nameless physician passing by. He said that if any descendant were to face misfortune in the future, presenting this jade could serve as a testament to our bond. "Do you recognize this jade?" I turned my gaze toward the old eunuch. The old eunuch's eyes immediately turned crimson. He crawled on his knees, inching his way toward me, and with trembling hands, reached out to take the jade pendant. However, the jade pendant in his grasp suddenly emitted a faint light, as if it were recognizing its master. "Your Majesty, when I served the late retired emperor years ago, I once saw a jade pendant exactly like this one. I once saw a jade pendant exactly like this one," he repeated. It was the very piece the retired emperor brought out from the cold palace. He spoke of it as a life-saving grace. That nameless gentleman saved the life of the late emperor in the cold palace all those years ago. He left this piece of jade behind, saying that when the day came for the dynasty's fate to reach its end, someone would inevitably arrive bearing this token. The emperor's fingers trembled slightly. He stared at me, his eyes filled with a frenzied conflict of shock, skepticism, and longing. He spoke, asking, "Are you that very gentleman? Your eyes are keener than those of your ancestor. But when your ancestor met me, I was much younger than I am now." The emperor's throat constricted, and the emotions in his eyes surged like a tide. In this very moment, there was so much he longed to ask. They want to ask if I am an immortal, ask why I have only arrived now, and ask if I can salvage this desperate situation. But in the end, he suppressed those words, choosing to ask only the most crucial question. "How much can you truly achieve?" "What I can do is very limited. I cannot drag the heavens down from their throne, nor can I strike off the heads of those black-horned soldiers for you. What I can do now is help you preserve a flicker of life for the Yi family bloodline, and help ensure that the very concept of the Yi family leaves a path for itself in this world." The emperor remained silent, his grip on his sword slowly loosening. Then he let out a bitter laugh and spoke. "I never believed in the heavens. Even when chased by heavenly lightning, I never cared. But since you have appeared here today, even if I were to be pursued by heavenly lightning again, I would not care. But since you have appeared here today, I shall place my faith in you. You are the final path the heavens have bestowed upon me. I am not a gift from the heavens. I have come to stand in the way of heaven itself. As these words left my lips, the faces of those in the room turned deathly pale. The old eunuch collapsed to the ground in terror. Yet, the emperor suddenly burst into laughter, a laugh filled with a sense of relief, as if he were finally unburdened. He spoke. I trust you, just as the retired emperor did all those years ago. He trusted you when you acted as a midwife for him. It would be best not to speak of that matter of midwifery outside these walls. I have worked quite hard to cultivate this semblance of an immortal's bearing, and with a single sentence, you have utterly ruined it. That laughter blossomed briefly within the duck court, only to be quickly drowned out. I set aside my smile and spoke with solemnity. Your Majesty, you now face two choices. Either you lead a portion of the Yi family bloodline to withdraw from the imperial city, from this day forward abandoning worldly affairs to live a humble fleeting existence in some remote corner like any common clan. Or you remain here, this Hesper path of questioning the heavens, to see if you can truly tear a piece of flesh from the feet of the Heavenly Dao. How many can actually leave this place? Not even 1 in 10. You will not get far. The Heavenly Sword Monastery has blockaded every exit of the outer city and all major routes. Furthermore, the Heavenly Dao's Purge Protocol has marked this entire region of yours. As long as you bear the identity of the Yi Imperial clan, you will remain high priority targets wherever you go. So if you choose to retreat, I must intervene. Therefore, if you choose to retreat, I must cleanse your lineage of these marks and erase the ties to the Yi Imperial identity, temporarily purging it from your descendants to wash away your status and recast you as commoners. In this way, the legacy of the Yi family will not be severed. It will simply no longer exist under the guise of an imperial clan. You will live among the common folk under various other surnames, becoming nothing more than stories within books and legends. That is the first path. As for the second path, continue as emperor, continue bearing the name Yi, and continue to gamble against the Heavenly Dao upon this very land, knowing that you may die and your children may perish. Your descendants may not meet a favorable end, but this bloodline of yours will become the banner for this world to rise up against the Heavenly Dao. Even if in the end the banner is consumed by fire and the pole is snapped and the charred fabric falls into the mud, there will still be those who pick it up. Remembering that it bears the name Yi, the room fell into a deathly silence, every gaze locked upon the emperor's face. Sun Wukong, tucked within my robes, struggled to contain his agitation. Li Ni thought to herself, my master will certainly choose to become the emperor, because just now, when master praised him, he almost broke into a smile. This monkey's power of observation is truly peerless. The emperor remained silent for a long time, eventually speaking in a slow, deliberate tone. Master Gu, if you were in my position, what would you choose? I would choose the first path, because I fear death. Throughout my life, I have always cherished my own life. I have no desire to compete for glory. When it is time to hide, I hide. When it is time to feign ignorance, I feign ignorance. Throughout my life, I have always cherished my own life. I have no desire to compete for glory. When it is time to hide, I hide. When it is time to feign ignorance, I feign ignorance. Had the Heavenly Dao not held a blade to my throat this time, I would likely still be on some island in the East Sea right now, teaching a monkey how to wield a staff. Master, the monkey has already learned to use the staff very well. Do not interrupt. Therefore, I am ill-suited for the second path. My heart is not dark enough, my life is not hard enough, and I am not sufficiently insane. However, your cry of questioning the heavens earlier has already decided that you no longer have the luxury of choosing the first path. You are the dragon cast into the cauldron. You must either overturn the pot or be consumed by the flames yourself. Upon hearing this, the emperor suddenly laughed, a smile that held the profound clarity of one who had already foreseen this outcome. He spoke slowly. Master Gu, that I have lived to see you today is my greatest fortune. I have lacked the strength to preserve the entire Yi clan's bloodline. In that case, let me be the final emperor of the Yi clan, and also the first emperor in this world, to dare to face the Heavenly Dao and defy it. Honorable Master, I choose the second path. Everyone in the room dared not even draw a full breath. Lao Tsai prostrated himself on the ground, his shoulders trembling slightly. Though it was unclear whether he was weeping or laughing, I sighed softly. Very well then. If you choose the second path, I shall clear the first path for you. What do you mean by that? I mean, if you intend to engage in a life-or-death struggle against the Heavenly Dao out in the open, there will always be someone in the shadows quietly preparing a way of retreat for you. Do you think I came here merely to shout a few words on your behalf, Your Majesty? The Emperor was stunned. Here. Merely to shout a few words on your behalf, Your Majesty? The Emperor was stunned, then offered a bitter smile, and replied, Then I shall entrust the descendants of the Yi family to you, sir. Rest assured, I have never taken the act of accepting disciples too seriously. By entrusting them to me like this, you are merely binding a few more strings to my person, though I suppose I am already bound regardless. The thunder in the sky suddenly intensified, as if it had just detected some form of violation against the natural laws. The Heavenly Dao's purge protocol began to recalibrate. Outside the Great Protector Array, the captains of the Black Horn Army from the Heavenly Oversight Bureau looked up in unison, sensing a subtle, oppressive warning. Host, the local manifestation of the Earth's essence you just deployed, has been flagged by the Heavenly Dao as an anomaly. The danger assessment of the Heavenly Dao has been elevated from high danger to extreme danger. Do you wish to unlock the choices of the immortal quest? It has finally arrived. I cast a glance at the mission notification appearing within my vision. Main quest, choice of the immortal eye. Choice A, the sharpened edge. Withdraw from the world's center and remain in seclusion for at least 300 years. Effect. The probability of the host being directly hunted down decreases by 60%. However, the probability of those connected to the host being purged will skyrocket. Support the variable groups in completing their enlightenment. Establish a local firewall for the host. The host's short-term state will fall into an extremely perilous position, yet it may open a temporary safe zone. The host's short-term state will fall into an extremely perilous position, yet it may open a temporary safe zone. Provide a foundation for future development, inspecting the current variable groups. 1. The Yi Imperial Clan. 2. The Redding Society. 3. The Virtuous Demon Sect. 4. The Artifact Refining Sect. 5. Make your choice. System, you truly leave me no option. You are forcing me to become the villain. Are you mad? I stared at these two choices and cursed internally once more. Choosing B is the most suited to my nature. Hiding in the shadows for 300 years is nothing compared to my lifespan. I shall wait 300 years until the Heavenly Dao clears out these wretched tribulations, and only then will I emerge to tell stories to the descendants of future generations. But as my gaze swept across everyone in the room, I recalled the people from before, the predecessors tied to the host, whose probability of being purged has skyrocketed. This string of text is truly an eyesore. I asked the system internally, if I choose B, will you change the mission to the Immortal's Choice Part 2 to force my hand again? No, you have chosen B. All consequences of the choice shall be borne by the host alone. This system is only responsible for providing lifespan and techniques. You may live until the very end of the universe, though by then you may be the only one left. A specimen of survival. You are certainly honest. This system will not lie to the host. Very well. The first step has already been taken, and no matter how one circles back, there is no turning away now. I choose B. Confirmed. Confirmed. Selection B has been locked. I choose B. Confirmation. Confirmation. Selection has been locked. The current world has been designated as a testing ground, integrating the variable groups to construct a localized causality firewall, reducing the purge efficiency of the Heavenly Dao. Reward, unlocking the introductory level of the Great Dao. The host will be marked as a priority target for elimination. You tattered system. You don't even provide a sliver of substance with your rewards. Unlocking the introductory level of the Heavenly Dao. Host, please remain rational. Within the system of the Heavenly Dao, there are no more than 3 beings who dare to directly interfere with causality. The introductory level is already a high-ranking tier. Fair enough. Previously, when I swung my blade to sever the river of causality, that was quite literally nothing more than frantic hacking. What I must do now is learn to strike with precision based on that chaotic foundation. Majesty, it is about to begin. I shall be guided by you, sir. Do not speak with such heavy formalities. I am no ancestor of yours, nor can I command you. At most, I am merely a strategist with a penchant for ill omens. The storm clouds above the imperial capital are beginning to press down closer to the earth. The Heavenly Dao is adjusting its parameters. Outside the great defense array of the kingdom, the 49 flags of the Celestial Observation Bureau began adjusting their battle formation under the instructions of the mysterious figure, tearing a breach in the encirclement of the Black Horn Army, aiming directly at the weakest point of the Yi family's defenses. That is the secret division of the Scholarly Society. My Snrihard, evidently, this purge by the Heavenly Dao is not only targeting the Yi family's imperial authority, but is also taking the opportunity to sweep away the Scholarly Society and the demonic sect, those very seeds of causality. Not only is it targeting the Yi family's imperial authority, but it also intends to dispose of the Scholarly Society and the demonic sect, those seeds of causality, at the same time. Master Gu, these variables that you speak of, I have seen them in the secret archives of the Immortal Emperor, the Poison Reader Association, the Virtuous Demon Sect, the Artifact Refining Sect. You have a Grand Master ancestor revered through generations. Can they truly help you achieve anything? It is about helping you. You must first help yourself stand firm. Otherwise, you will die today. The foundation I have just laid here has collapsed before it could even be completed. Where are the troops of your Yi clan? There are 20,000 Imperial Guards remaining within the inner city, and 30,000 defense troops in the outer city. But the Heavenly Supervision Bureau, your black-armored soldiers are veteran elites, and I possess the divine protection of the Heavenly Dao. If my children charge in, they are simply throwing their lives away. And what if they die? You have only just taken on the mantle of an emperor. An emperor exists to serve others, not himself. You must become the shelter that shields the world from wind and rain. Those who only concern themselves with hoarding wealth are destined to become nothing but scattered bones. In the emperor's eyes, a flicker of reluctance and sorrow emerged. Finally, he gritted his teeth, nodded, and shouted, "Where are you? Issue my imperial decree. The entire inner-city Imperial Guard is to sally forth and engage the black-armored army. Anyone who retreats shall be executed, and their families shall be compensated. I will share life and death with them." Guard Meng looked up. In his eyes were fear and hesitation, but also a surging will to fight. The atmosphere inside and outside the Suda Hall shifted in an instant. Had you continued to use the soldiers in the Imperial Palace to shield you today, I would not have helped you at all. Since you are prepared to stand at the front, I shall widen the path for you. Since you are prepared to stand at the front, I have one final request to make of you. If I were to perish in this chaos today, I beseech you, sir, to strike my name from the Heavenly Dao's list of purges. Rest assured, your defiant cry has elevated you from a target for erasure to one whose legacy is eternally recorded. Even the Heavenly Dao cannot completely eradicate a man of your stature. While it may claim your mortal body and lifespan, it shall never erase the story you have written. I shall preserve your memory within the annals of history, in paintings, and in the hearts of the people. This is the greatest firewall of human causality that I can bestow upon you. I offer you my deepest gratitude, sir. The Emperor gazed at me with profound intensity. He cast aside his blade, clasping his hands in a formal bow of respect before me. Thunderous clouds roiled violently over the imperial palace of the Yi clan. As the Black Guard formed their ranks and the common folk cried out, in a dimension invisible to mortal eyes, the very threads of causality began to shift their alignment. The regional branch of the Reading Association received a missive from the anonymous Sir. The elder of the demonic sect watched the lightning-charged clouds and let out a heavy sigh. From this day forth, all those who seek to save themselves shall stand as one. Must it truly come to this point? The old ancestor of the Qi refining sect sensed a violent tremor emanating from his furnace. It was the radiance emitted by a fragment of the world's chronicle. He raised his gaze toward the heavens and whispered, "Grandmaster, so you have finally decided to take action." Countless hidden factions began to stir. The world, like a clockwork mechanism that had been jammed for eons, began to rotate in reverse. I stood at the threshold of the tea house, clutching my tattered fan as I watched the storm clouds descend. Come forth. Is it not your intent to purge all variables? Then I shall act as a beacon for these variables. I have erected a small shelter. Let us see just how torrential the reign of your Heavenly Dao truly is. I shall act as a beacon for these variables. I have erected a small shelter. Let us see just how torrential the reign of your Heavenly Dao truly is. In some distant, invisible, and transcendent realm, a cold azure gaze observed everything from high above. The eye of the Heavenly Dao witnessed the fan's shadow sweep out from the palace roof, observing the slender gray thread being severed by the fan's strike. It possessed no emotions, no fury, only a cold, calculated assessment of a dangerous variable, evaluating the level of authority to be elevated. Current behavior is interfering with the local purge program. A zone of variable convergence has been created, prioritizing elimination. At the same time, from a far greater height, an entity with an obscured face seemed to watch this spectacle and chuckled softly. Yet another philanthropist has begun to set up camp. The Heavenly Dao child still lacks memories. As the experiment continued, he reached out and lightly tapped the void. A vibration, nearly impossible to detect, rippled through the depths of my consciousness. A faint hushed notification emerged. Great Dao of Karma. Initiation progress, 1%. Passive skill observer of threads unlocked. Host may now briefly glimpse the trajectory of certain causal threads. Finally, I narrowed my eyes and looked upward. Those dense threads began to offer a lesson of truly profound caliber. Little Wukong, nestled in my arms, quietly raised its head, watching the light that flickered across my face in that fleeting moment. It did not fully understand what the Heavenly Dao was, nor what karma meant, but it vaguely sensed that from this day forward, its master, who usually preferred to remain hidden and cautious, seemed to have taken a step that could not easily be retracted, and this world, too, would gradually become vastly different because of this single sweep of the fan. The Lianqi sect was in chaos, for because of that manifestation of Taoist energy, The sect master had rung the heaven-questioning bell, which had gathered dust for 3,000 years, deep into the night. All 36 elders were mobilized simultaneously, turning the East Sea upside down, all because the shattered sword I had flicked aside so carelessly had caused a commotion that was truly far too great. With golden light piercing the heavens and spiritual energy surging in reverse, such a bizarre phenomenon in a remote place like the East Sea. It was exactly like lighting a 1,000-watt bulb in the dead of night. It would be difficult for anyone not to notice. Run, Laobai, hurry toward the crowded areas. The more mundane and populated, the better. At that moment, I delivered a swift kick to Laobai's rear. Although this creature was a massive striped white tiger, having consumed more than its fair share of my medicinal elixirs, and despite having attained sapience, its bones still harbored a lazy nature. It let out a roar, seemingly protesting my cowardly retreat after having caused such a stir, yet the speed with which it fled, as if it had greased the soles of its paws, was anything but slow. Transforming into a streak of light, it vanished hundreds of miles away in the blink of an eye. It was not a matter of cowardice, but rather the reality of this long, arduous path toward immortality. Caution is the key to longevity. That immortal pill granted me an endless lifespan, but it did not render me invulnerable to blades or magic. A colossus of a faction like the artifact refining sect, if they knew a living ancestor existed who could turn scraps into divine artifacts with a casual wave of his hand, they would surely drag me back to worship as a mascot. Or worse, would they slice me open for research? I dared not gamble, nor did I wish to test the limits of human greed. In my first 3 years of wandering, I had already witnessed far too much of it. The wind hissed in my ears as mountains and rivers retreated beneath us at a dizzying speed. Turning back to look toward the eastern sea, the faint sound of a bell pierced through the clouds, ancient and resonant. That was the heaven-questioning bell of the artifact refining sect. It is only rung for matters of sect-wide extinction or events of earth-shattering importance. It seems the young man for whom I mended the sword has finally arrived, and he has stirred up quite a commotion. Let them make as much noise as they desire. The louder the chaos, the better. After all, there are countless people in this world who bear the surname Jiang. They would never dream in their wildest fantasies that the old man selling wooden figurines, hiding among the mortals, is none other than me. I stroked the coarse, uneven beard I had grown on my chin, felt the corners of my eyes crease with wrinkles, and heard a rhythmic, crisp cracking from the bones within my body. My stature slumped, and my eyes, once clear and piercing, turned cloudy and dull. This was a bone-shrinking technique I had learned from a wandering con artist during my travels. The art itself was not particularly profound, but it was more than enough to deceive those arrogant cultivators, for they would never deign. 3 months later, the late autumn rain in Yuzhou city of the mortal realm always brought a bone-chilling cold. It was not as violent as the waves of the sea, but instead wove together into a delicate mesh, shrouding the entire ancient city in a misty drizzle, while the washed bluestone paths gleamed, reflecting the flickering lanterns of the shops on both sides. It carried a distinct flavor of the mortal world's hustle and bustle. At the end of a modest bluestone alley in the southern part of the city, a small shop named Suiwanjai stood with its door slightly ajar. A wooden sign hung before the entrance, the handwriting upon it so crooked that anyone could tell it was not written by an educated man, specializing in repairing pots and dishes and selling wooden sculptures. I sat by the doorway, holding an unusual carving knife in my hand, dancing across a piece of lightning-struck oak wood that was half charred. Old Bai had now shrunk to the size of a domestic cat, his entire body curled up beside the charcoal brazier at my feet, warming himself, occasionally letting out a contented purr. Who could have imagined that this seemingly harmless plump white cat, 3 months ago in the Eastern Sea, swallowed a great demon in a single gulp? A nascent soul stage expert, tap tap tap. The rhythmic sound of the carving knife shaving away wood splinters blended into the pattering of the drizzling rain, bringing a strange sense of tranquility. The piece of wood before me had tangled grains, dead and stiff. An ordinary carpenter would have thrown it away long ago, but in my eyes these tangled wood grains resembled the intertwined and unyielding threads of karma. A notification panel flashed faintly across my retina. Physical observation. Carving experience +1 plun. I blew away the wood shavings. Watching the wooden sculpture gradually take shape in my hands, my gaze remained as calm as a dried-up well. It was the shape of a sword. It lacked a sharp edge, and the blade itself was blunt. Yet, if the elders of the artifact refining sect were present, they would surely be horrified to discover that this casually carved wooden sword contained a Dao charm deeper than even a top-grade spiritual artifact. This was the state of returning to simplicity, concealing all sharpness within the wrinkles of time. Yi Fan, I muttered softly. A nostalgic smile curled the corner of my mouth, but the knife in my hand did not pause. Understood. Recently, every tea house in the city has been buzzing with news that a major event has shaken the cultivation world. 36 elders of the Lianqi sect have emerged simultaneously, turning the East Sea upside down in search of a master. A reclusive expert, surnamed Jiang, who could craft peerless spirit artifacts with a mere flick of his hand. It is said they have even posted a bounty. Anyone who provides a lead shall be rewarded with 10,000 spirit stones, and granted the status of an outer sect disciple. The world only knows of Yitiandi, whose single sword strike cleaved the ancient earth, and whose mastery of artifact forging is unrivaled under the heavens. But who could have known that 2,000 years ago, in that dilapidated smithy in the western village, Yifan was nothing more than a snot-nosed brat who lacked the strength to even operate the bellows. The broken sword that the Lianqi sect reveres as a legendary ancestral treasure was actually forged by Yifan when he was just beginning to learn the trade. Because he was playful and failed to quench it properly, it ended up as a piece of scrap metal. Back then, I found it to be in the way and intended to toss it into the pile of iron waste, which caused little Yifan to wail and insist that he be allowed to keep it. It was the first sword of his life. At that time, the boy was only as tall as my knee, his face smeared with soot, and snot running into his mouth. He clung to my leg for dear life, refusing to let go. He shouted, "Master, once I become powerful in the future, this sword will become a divine artifact, and I will use it to protect you." You fool. I shook my head, my fingers gently stroking the rough grain of the wooden statue. To cherish a piece of scrap metal as a treasure for 2,000 years. You truly do not fear being ridiculed by future generations. That day at the East Sea, I helped his descendant repair the sword, not just out of convenience, but because I saw that child in him. There was a glimmer of the young Yifan in his gaze, and in a moment of weakness, I decided to fulfill the bond of master and apprentice we shared all those years ago. The karmic debt is settled, the ties to the mortal world are severed. As for those in the cultivation world who seek to find me to apprentice or beg for weapons, or even those who wish to kill me and seize my treasures, in my eyes, they are nothing more than buzzing flies passing by my ears throughout these endless drifting years. "Shopkeeper, how much for this statue?" A crisp voice interrupted my thoughts. Standing at the door was a young girl dressed in a pale yellow silk dress, holding an oil paper umbrella. Her hair was slightly damp, and she opened her eyes wide, curiously gazing at the wooden sword in my hand. Judging by her attire, she must be the young mistress of some prestigious noble house in this Yuzhou city. Perhaps she is merely strolling through the streets to escape the rain and glancing around out of curiosity. I do not raise my head. The carving knife in my hand continues to move with unwavering precision. Wood shavings fall like rain, yet nothing is for sale. "What kind of business do you run if you refuse to sell your goods?" The young woman seems unconvinced. She stamps her foot in frustration, splashing a few droplets of muddy water and staining the hem of her skirt. Finally, I cease my work, casting a faint, indifferent glance at her from beneath my eyelids. At that very moment, the young woman feels as though she has been pierced by a gale from the primordial era. An inexplicable sense of panic causes her to instinctively recoil half a step, the oil paper umbrella in her hand tilting precariously to the side, yet the sensation vanishes as quickly as it arrived. Before her stands only a middle-aged carpenter, looking entirely ordinary, perhaps even somewhat disheveled. These are merely pieces of wood I carved for amusement. I casually toss a wooden sword, imbued with supreme sword intent, the kind that could incite bloody turmoil if placed within the cultivation world, directly into the scrap basket at my feet, mixing it among a pile of shavings and waste wood. Then, I reach out to take an item from the shelf behind me, a small duck carved in a crooked, uneven manner. I offer it to her. "If you wish to buy something, buy this." 3 copper coins. The young woman is left stunned. She looks at the exquisitely sharp and beautiful wooden sword, resting brilliantly amidst the rubbish, then looks at the bizarrely ugly duck, with a neck so crooked it is almost disjointed, her expression one of someone staring at an utter fool. Are you ill in the head? That one is clearly so beautiful." She points at the scrap basket. "That piece is inauspicious. Its killing intent is too heavy, and it is prone to drawing blood." I reach into my robe and pull out a tattered piece of cloth. I wipe the carving knife, saying, "This duck is auspicious. It can ward off evil spirits within your chambers, and ensure that you enjoy your meals." The young lady was amused by my serious yet nonsensical sales pitch. Surely she had never encountered anyone who conducted business in such a manner. Yet perhaps because that duck lived such a remarkable life, she actually fished out 3 copper coins and slapped them firmly onto the door frame. 3 coins it is. This young lady shall buy it. If I find that my appetite does not improve, I shall return to smash your shop to pieces. I picked up the 3 coins from the ground and carefully blew the dust off them. Tucking them deep into my robe, I walked away leisurely. "I shall not see you out." The young lady cursed the duck and the turtle amidst the clamor before turning to leave, resembling a proud young peacock. "Old Bai, we have enough money to buy baked cakes tonight." I patted Old Bai on the head. The cat at my feet rolled its eyes in disdain and let out a meow. as if protesting. How could a dignified demon king have fallen to such a state that he must rely on cheap baked cakes? And to make matters worse, the kind that costs only 3 copper coins? I paid it no mind, merely lifting my gaze to look at the rain outside the door. Having lived for an eternity, the most difficult things to attain are not earth-shattering feats, but the simple scent of human life. To be able to haggle with someone over 3 copper coins. Cultivators discard their 7 emotions and 6 desires in pursuit of immortality, unaware that this swirling mortal world is the greatest crucible of all. I am both within the furnace and outside of it. I recited a silent command to the system. A transparent status window appeared. Host Jashian. Lifespan, infinite, status of god-slaying techniques, erhu virtuoso, master beggar, expert carver. Proficiency, 999. The distance to unlocking the next life skill, Dao incarnation, was now but a sliver of experience away. Gazing at that number 999, I took a deep breath, picked up my carving knife, and reached into the scrap basket to retrieve a palm-sized piece of wood. This time I did not intend to carve a sword, nor did I intend to carve a dragon or a phoenix. I gazed at the rain outside the window, memories of 2,000 years ago surfacing in my mind. That afternoon in the western village, there was never such a lingering, dismal autumn rain. There was only the ceaseless, sweltering drone of cicadas. Little Yi Fan was barefoot, feeling for river snails in the water. The drunkard, Li Ti Niu, was sleeping in the shade of a tree, while I, for the sake of an evening meal of coarse rice, was sweating profusely as I swung a heavy blade. The carving knife in my hand descended, without a moment of hesitation. Then another. Wood shavings fell like white snow, gradually revealing a hunched figure. Carrying old man's wine gourd, it took shape upon the wood. That spirit, those bleary drunken eyes, were exactly like my master Li Tinu from those years long ago. I sighed softly. Li Tinu was merely a mortal who had perished over 900 years ago. The grass on his grave had grown and withered, cycle after cycle. Eventually, even the mound itself was leveled into farmland. Yet, I still remember the first lesson he taught me when he instructed me in the art of smithing. Iron, he had said, is exceptionally hard, but fire is soft. You must use the soft to wear down the hard. That is what we call true mastery. As the final stroke of the knife descended, the system interface suddenly trembled. Carving skill has reached Grandmaster perfection. Host's state of mind fluctuated. Special epiphany triggered. 5-month trace. New skill unlocked. Painting path. 1 mortal grade painting brush. 10 sheets of Schwann paper. There were no celestial phenomena descending from the heavens, nor was there any sudden surge in cultivation base. I merely felt as though the carving knife in my hand had become an extension of my own arm. Every living thing in this world, with just a single glance, could now have its true essence captured within the wood. Yet, to me, these things are not as practical as the steamed bun I bought for 3 copper coins. I put the carving knife away. I gazed at the Li Ti Nu figurine, no larger than a thumb, resting silently in the palm of my hand for a long moment. Afterward, I placed it upon the highest shelf. Tucked away in the most humble corner, where several other wooden carvings were already displayed, there was a young, snot-nosed Yi Fan, and a swordsman exuding intense killing intent, yet possessing eyes of remarkable clarity. He was a friend I met 500 years ago, and beside him, a girl clad in bright red wedding robes, her face stained with tears. She was the neighbor's daughter from 1,000 years past. Every wooden carving represented a period of time that had long since faded away. I'm a tomb guardian, watching over a past that only I remember. The rain gradually subsided as dusk settled. At the end of the alley, the rhythmic chopping of the old coal seller's knife echoed, accompanied by the fragrant scent of food drifting from afar. I stood up and stretched my body, my bones cracking in protest. Let's go, old boy, time to close shop and head to Wonger Masi's place to buy some flatbread. I hear he prepared braised pig's head today. If we arrive late, there won't even be a drop of broth left. Upon hearing the mention of pig's head, old boy's eyes lit up immediately, abandoning all pretense of sleep. In a single bound he dashed outside, his speed far surpassing that of a desperate retreat. I locked the door of the Suiwon studio and flipped the wooden sign, revealing the inscription on the reverse side. Closed for the day. With hands clasped behind my back, I strolled leisurely along the rain-slicked bluestone path. As I passed by the notice board at the entrance of the alley, I saw several martial artists gathered around, pointing and discussing. Have you heard the news? The Liangqi sect has staked everything they have this time. Whoever can find that senior Jiang will be granted entry to the library pavilion to choose any cultivation manual they desire. Forget it. Do you really think we could find such a reclusive expert? They say he is an old monster who has lived for 10,000 years, capable of flying through the heavens and traversing the earth. Ordinary mortals like us cannot even hope to reach the heels of such a figure. That is true, but I heard that this senior Jiang possesses 3 heads and 6 arms, stands 8 feet tall, with eyes as large as copper bells. I stood hidden among the crowd, listening for a moment, and could not help but laugh out loud. 3 heads and 6 arms, eyes as large as copper bells. Am I truly that hideous? Old man, what are you laughing at? A burly man carrying a broadsword turned his head and glared at me fiercely. I clasped my hands in a humble salute, my expression innocent. Nothing at all. I simply thought this portrait was drawn quite grandly. This is no mere mortal, this is a door guardian deity. What would a small-time merchant like you know? This is called a solemn Dharma manifestation. Move along, do not block us from reading the notice. The burly man snorted coldly, but I did not take offense. I chuckled softly and stepped aside, thinking, solemn Dharma manifestation is it? Let them worship those statues of clay and carved wood in the temples if they wish. The true deity at this moment was busy calculating how to trick old Bai into giving up that piece of fatty meat for me to eat. And so the days passed, one by one. My small shop in Wuzhou City remained open, hanging on by a thread between life and death. Every day I maintained the habit of carving 3 wooden statues without fail. If I was in a good mood, I would display them for sale. If not, I would toss them into the brazier as firewood. The young girl in the yellow dress had once purchased one of those statues. Only later did I learn that her name was Lin Wan Air, the youngest daughter of the city lord. She would often come by every half a month or so. She rarely bought anything, spending most of her time complaining to me. Uncle Zhang, my father is forcing me to marry again. I heard he is the son of a high-ranking official in the capital. It is absolutely vexing. Why has this cat of yours grown so fat? Did it steal fish from my kitchen again? Uncle Zhang, do you know how to carve statues of people? Can you engrave a piece for me? It must be different from the others. Make it look like a wandering swordswoman. I responded with a perfunctory nod, my mind elsewhere. My hands were busy grinding the cinnabar ink I had just acquired, while the carving tools lay nearby, newly brought into play. I found the art of painting far more intriguing than that of engraving. The splash of ink across mountains and waters, the deliberate use of negative space, each stroke held a profound artistic conception. Lin Wanner, though somewhat boisterous, brought a certain vitality to this humble shop. I looked at the young girl, much like observing a delicate flower striving to bloom in the spring breeze. I knew that one day she would grow up, marry, and eventually depart. In the end, she would be much like the bluestone path at the mouth of this alley. Even as the passing years wore away its edges, I would still be sitting here, painting my paintings and carving my wooden sculptures. And then, one day arrived, where snow fell in heavy, swirling sheets. It was not Lin Wanner who appeared, but a squad of armored cavalry, clad in black and wielding razor-sharp weapons. Their arrival trampled the thick layer of snow at the entrance of the alley. The thunder of hooves shattered the stillness of the dawn. The knight in the lead, draped in a scholar's robe and a long sword girded at his waist, possessed a countenance of ice. He reined in his horse before the door of Suiwan Pavilion, his gaze sweeping across the dilapidated shop like a bolt of lightning. I was sitting beside the hearth, my hand gripping a brush whose bristles were frayed and tattered, working on a sheet of low-quality rice paper. I was painting a sparrow searching for sustenance amidst the snow. Old Bai's ear stood upright in alarm, a low guttural growl emanating from its throat. "Are you shopkeeper Jiang?" The robed knight dismounted. His actions were respectful, yet his tone carried an undeniable arrogance. I did not lift my head. The tip of my brush touched the ink, then lightly dotted the eye of the sparrow. Repairs for pots and bowls are to the left. Those seeking wooden carvings go to the right. If you are looking for someone to step out, turn left. I will not be seeing you off. The robed knight furrowed his brows, took a step forward, and pulled a gleaming gold medallion from his breast, slamming it onto the table with a sharp thud. An entwining dragon was carved upon the medallion, its coils surging with such intensity that a faint ripple of spiritual energy could be felt. I come by the decree of His Majesty to summon the extraordinary talents and sages of the realm. Word has reached us that shopkeeper Jiang possesses carving skills that reached the pinnacle of perfection. You are hereby summoned to the capital to restore the longevity statue for the Empress Dowager, imperial power of the mortal realm. The brush in my hand faltered for a moment. I have successfully evaded the cultivators of the refinement sect, yet I cannot escape the entangling webs of imperial authority. It seems the imperial guard who recently frequented my shop to purchase wooden carvings has already departed. I decline his request with a faint, indifferent tone. This commoner possesses only meager skills. I only carve cats and dogs, and cannot perform restorations. Where is the Buddha statue? My lord, I suggest you return the way you came. The expression of the armored cavalier darkened as his hand tightened around the hilt of his sword. Shopkeeper Jiang, this is an imperial decree, not a negotiation. Every inch of land under these heavens belongs to the emperor. If you dare to defy this decree, this tiny workshop of yours shall be reduced to rubble. Are you threatening me? I lifted my head, my clouded eyes peering past him toward the sky filled with heavy falling snow outside the door. If this were 5 years ago, or perhaps even earlier, this man would already be a corpse. Lao Bai would only need one snap of his jaws to sever his head clean off. But now I am merely a down-and-out carpenter in Jiangning City, Wuzhou. Lao Bai, do not move, I whispered, holding back the restless beast. Killing mortals is simple, but the threads of karma are like a spider's web. Once entangled, there is no escape. The more one struggles, the tighter the web constricts. Kill this cavalry unit, and an entire army will descend upon this place. Annihilate that army, and the Imperial Preceptor's cultivators will be summoned to intervene. It is an endless cycle. Truly, it is a situation difficult to guard against. Forget it. I let out a long sigh, set down my carving chisel, stood up slowly, and brushed the sawdust from my clothes. It is for the Empress Dowager's Buddhist ceremony, is it not? Then this commoner shall make the trip. However, I must state my terms plainly to avoid any future grievances. I have always been a man who works at a sluggish, idle pace. If I happen to delay the Empress Dowager's birthday celebration, do not come looking to blame me. The killing intent in the cavalier's eyes instantly vanished, replaced by a cold, detached expression. As long as Boss Jiang is willing to depart, all concerns are easily addressed. The carriage is already waiting at the mouth of the alley. Please, I said as I retreated back into the house. I packed a few simple sets of clothing, along with my carving tools and the brush I am most accustomed to using. Before leaving, I cast a glance at the wooden statue of Li Tengu perched on the highest shelf. It seems I must relocate once again. Master, I whispered, cradling Lao Bai in my arms, before locking the door behind me. As for this sign indicating we are closed for the day, I fear it shall remain hung for a long time to come. The carriage wheels rolled over the thick snow, leaving 2 deep tracks in their wake. I lifted the curtain to take one final look. This was Wu City, the place where I have resided for the past several months. Atop the city walls, a figure draped in pale yellow robes was sprinting toward me, breathless, waving something in their hand. It was Lin Wanner, calling out, Uncle Zhang, where are you headed on this journey? You still haven't finished carving the statue of the swordswoman for me. The winter wind was too fierce. Her voice was shattered and scattered by the gale. I let the curtain fall, offering no reply. When people meet, there is no need for prior acquaintance. When they part, there is no need to speak of taking care. This journey to the capital is likely another dream within the mortal realm. Only, I do not know how long this particular dream will endure. Meanwhile, on the distant path of cultivation, the search for the books of the refinement sect continues unabated. The legend of that master craftsman is slowly fermenting into something far greater, a gathering storm. And I, the one caught in the eye of this storm, was shivering in the carriage at this moment, haggling with the armored guard over the ineffective heating stove. I spoke up. My good sir, the quality of this charcoal is abysmal. It produces nothing but smoke. Could you provide some silver-threaded charcoal instead? If these old bones of mine freeze to death, who will carve the Buddha statue for the Empress Dowager? Shen Lian, commander of the Imperial Guards. I only learned his name during our journey. He was as cold and unyielding as his name suggested. The corners of his mouth twitched as if he were fighting the urge to draw his blade upon me, but he managed to restrain himself in the end. He roared to his attendants outside, "Go and make the exchange. Exchange for the highest quality silver charcoal for Master Jiang." As the carriage rolled forward once again, the temperature inside finally became more comfortable, no longer stifling with the scent of smoke and fire, replaced only by the faint fragrance of pine wood. Old Bai rested his head on my knee, drooling in his deep slumber. Shen Lian sat opposite me, his back straight as a rod, resembling a spear forever poised to strike. He stared at me for a long moment, surely struggling to comprehend the situation. Why would the Empress Dowager exhaust so much effort, even resorting to the Qianlong command, just to invite a carpenter who constantly haggles over price? Boss Jiang, Shenlian suddenly spoke, his voice low. Once we enter the capital, it will not be like Yuzhou. The rules within the palace are strict, and there are many nobles. With that temperament of yours, if you do not learn to exercise some restraint, you might find yourself entering the city, but never leaving it alive. I sat there, lost in thought while holding the unfinished wood carving of a sparrow. Hearing this, I lifted my eyelids. Is Commander Shen showing concern for me? I am merely concerned that you might implicate me. Shen Lian replied coldly, the Empress Dowager's birthday is approaching. If the longevity Buddha statue is not repaired in time, both you and I shall face execution. Execution? I touched my neck. This head has been firmly rooted to my shoulders for thousands of years. In the past, there were a few times I came close to losing it, such as when that mad sword cultivator appeared 2,000 years ago, or during the heavenly tribulation 1,500 years prior. But if a mortal wishes to sever my head, the blade in their hand had better be hard enough. Rest assured, I said with a smile, folding up the drawing. Though I am lazy by nature, my craftsmanship is adequate. As long as I am well fed and provided with sufficient materials, the Buddha statue will be repaired. Shen Lian snorted coldly, closing his eyes and refusing to pay me any more mind. Outside the window, the wintry winds grew increasingly fierce. I lifted a corner of the curtain to gaze at the white snow swirling across the sky. This snowfall is just as heavy as the one 500 years ago. That year, I also rode a carriage into the capital, but at that time I was merely an itinerant physician, invited by the emperor to cure his so-called immortality. What was that emperor's name again? Was it Zhao Ji or Zhao Wan? I do not remember clearly. I only recall that as he died, he gripped my hand tightly, asking if immortals truly existed in this world. I told him they did, but they were beyond his sight. The journey lasted for more than half a month. And when the majestic silhouette of the capital appeared on the horizon, the snow finally ceased. The brilliant sunset light fell upon the black city walls like scattered snow, exuding an air of somber, killing intent. We have arrived. Shenyan opened his wide and exhaled a long breath. The carriage did not enter through the main gate, but instead turned into a remote side entrance. After winding through various paths, it finally stopped before a secluded courtyard. This place was very close to the imperial palace. Upon looking up, one could see the red-walled, gold-tiled palace complex, resembling a colossal beast lying in wait. Boss Sashing, you will stay here for the next few days. Beyond this courtyard, you are not permitted to go anywhere. Shen Lian jumped off the carriage and tossed my luggage, which was really just a bundle and a cat, to the guards standing nearby. I cradled Lao Bai as I stepped down and stretched my limbs. This courtyard was not bad. Though a bit remote, it possessed a certain tranquility. In the corner of the courtyard stood an ancient plum tree, currently in full vibrant bloom. Where is the Buddha statue? Be impatient, Shen Lian looked at me. Tonight you should bathe and change your robes first. Tomorrow morning, someone will naturally lead you to see the Buddha statue. Remember well to keep both your tongue and your cat in check. Having said this, he left 2 guards to stand watch at the main gate. He himself departed in a hurry. Being released from duty, I found myself relieved to enjoy a moment of leisure. The dinner was quite lavish, featuring the capital's specialty roast duck, accompanied by a jar of aged Newer Hong wine. Lao Bai ate until its mouth was smeared with grease. I too drank until a light, swaying intoxication took hold. Lao Bai, I said, sitting beneath the plum tree while gazing at the waning moon in the sky. Tell me, why are mortals always so obsessed with longevity? When the days stretch on for too long, life itself becomes quite dull. There was not even a soul left with whom I could reminisce about the snowfall of that year. Lao Bai licked its claws, paying me no mind. It must surely believe that as long as there is meat to eat, the length of one's life is of little consequence. In the dead of the silent night, I lay upon an unfamiliar bed, listening to the rhythmic striking of the watchman's clapper beyond the wall. The weather is dry and the air is parched. Be wary of fire. This sound seemed to pierce through the ages, merging the Chang'an of 1,000 years ago with the Lin'an of 5 centuries past. Early the next morning, Shen Lian arrived, clad in a brand new uniform of the embroidered uniform guard. The shuchuch blade at his waist was polished to a brilliant sheen. We departed, passing through layers of palace gates, traversing the seemingly endless imperial path. The eunuchs and palace maids all stepped aside to bow as they caught sight of Shen Lian, yet their gazes lingered on me, with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. A plain-clothed man carrying a cat. No matter how one looked at it, he did not appear to be someone worthy of entering the palace. At last we arrived at a side hall known as the Changsheng Hall. The hall doors were sealed shut, surrounded by guards wielding spears, and a thick, heavy scent of incense wafted from the cracks in the door, intermingled with a faint putrid aura that I found all too familiar. Her Majesty the Empress Dowager arrives, a shrill voice proclaimed. I turned to see a group of people surrounding an elderly woman, dressed in opulent robes, approaching us. She had maintained her appearance remarkably well. Although her hair had turned silver, her skin remained smooth and delicate, yet within those eyes lingered a profound, deep-seated fear of death. Is this the carpenter? The Empress Dowager halted her steps, her demeanor one of cold condescension. She looked me up and down. Indeed, Your Majesty, Shenlin replied, kneeling before her. This is the carpenter from the Suiwan studio in Yuzhou, the man rumored to possess craftsmanship that defies heaven and earth. I did not kneel. In the world of cultivation, even a great expert at the tribulation transcendence stage must address me with respect, calling me fellow Taoist. As for these worldly customs and formalities, I discarded them 1,000 years ago. The surrounding eunuchs were about to shout, but the Empress Dowager waved them off. Those who possess true ability are naturally entitled to a degree of arrogance. I will not hold this against you, she said, looking at me with a tone of urgency. As long as you can restore my Buddha statue and ensure my longevity continues, I will grant you mountains of gold and silver and bestow upon you high rank and great wealth. But if you fail to restore it, she did not finish, but the murderous intent in her eyes spoke for itself. Let me see the item first. I spoke indifferently. The palace doors were pushed open, revealing a Buddha statue carved from wood, half a person tall, enshrined in the center of the hall. It was a statue of the medicine Buddha, with compassionate eyes and hands held in a meditative mudra. However, right between the brows of the Buddha statue lay a jagged, violent crack. It stretched downward all the way to the chest, as if someone had slashed it with a blade, severing its vitality. I stepped forward and reached out to touch the material of the Buddha statue. A faint, icy sensation traveled through my fingertips. This was soulwood, born in the extreme north. It blooms once every 3,000 years and bears fruit once every 3,000 years. The wood was as hard as iron yet as light as a feather. In the cultivation world, it is a supreme material used for crafting substitutes and puppets. Here in the mortal realm, this object could indeed extend one's lifespan, for it naturally carries a trace of spiritual energy. Yet, what astonished me was not the material, but the carving technique used on this Buddha statue. This style of blade work was far too familiar. Every strike of the knife, every bit of pressure applied to the contours, and even the inconspicuous cloud character mark hidden deep within the folds of the Buddha's robes, all of it made the image of a young man surface in my mind. That was 1,000 years ago, while I was on a painted pleasure boat in Jiangnan. I encountered a young carpenter. His name was Yun Qi, a child who had been bullied so severely he could only hide in the boat, gnawing on steamed buns. Seeing his plight, I took pity on him and showed him the dragon-head boat I had carved over 3 days and 3 nights. Though he could not speak, his eyes were incredibly bright. Later, after I had departed, I heard he had become the chief sculptor for the imperial court of the Great Chu dynasty, honored as the Saint of Wood. So it was you, was it? I stared at the Buddha statue. A complex surge of emotion rose within my heart. This Buddha statue was clearly crafted using the blade techniques Yun Si mimicked from me all those years ago. To carve it, even if he only captured 3 parts of my essence, was enough to be considered a masterpiece in the eyes of mere mortals. Well? Can it be repaired? The Empress Dowager's voice sounded from behind me, carrying a trace of trembling. This crack did not appear on its own. It was the result of a backlash. The greedy mortal attempted to steal spiritual energy and usurp heavenly secrets to forcibly extend their lifespan. This soul-gathering wood has endured too much of the Empress Dowager's avarice. Eventually, unable to bear the burden, it fractured. It can be repaired. I withdrew my hand, turned, and looked at the Empress Dowager with composure. However, this Buddha statue cracked because it has borne the weight of too many unfulfilled desires. If the Empress Dowager wishes for it to be restored to its former state, she must agree to one condition. What condition? During the restoration process, aside from me, no one is permitted to set foot in this palace. That includes you, Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager hesitated for a brief moment, but finally she gritted her teeth and nodded. Very well, I shall yield to your demands. As long as you can restore it perfectly, I will grant you anything. I grant you 7 days. The main doors shall be sealed. Inside the palace, only Lao Bai and I remained, along with the cracked Buddha statue, the light dim and the candles flickering. Old friend, we meet again. I patted the shoulder of the Buddha statue, much like one would stroke the head of that mute youth from years past. To restore soul-gathering wood is a task beyond the reach of mortals. But in my eyes, it is merely a trivial display of skill. The divine wood essence art within the system, combined with my grandmaster-level carving talent, was already itching for action. Yet, I was in no hurry to begin. I found a meditation cushion and sat down, then drew a carving knife from my robe to inspect it in my hand. Lao Bai, tell me, if this lad Yun Si were to know that his prized work was being restored by me, would he jump for joy, or would he crawl? Old Bai let out a yawn, leaped onto the altar, and planted himself firmly beside the incense burner. His tail swept casually across the face of the Buddha statue. Smiled, choosing not to exert any spiritual energy, nor did I employ any earth-shattering techniques. I simply took a piece of agarwood I had found on the road from my sleeve, ground it into a fine powder, and mixed it with my own saliva. In truth, I added a drop of diluted longevity blood. I fashioned it into a type of adhesive. While this trace of longevity blood could not grant one immortality, it was more than sufficient to restore the damaged spiritual essence. The following days passed in a very disciplined rhythm. Each morning, I would wake to practice 2 forms of Tai Chi. At noon, I dined on the delicacies delivered by the imperial kitchen. It must be said, the culinary skills of these imperial chefs are truly refined, far superior to that fellow Wang Yima from Yuzhou City. By the afternoon, I would begin the delicate work of carving. I was not merely filling the cracks. Since these were the manifestations of karmic backlash, I had to follow the grain of the wood to excise those lingering obsessions completely. The engraving blade in my hand traced the edges of the fissures, whittling away at them bit by bit. Each stroke of the blade brought away a microscopic sliver of wood, black in color and emitting a pungent charred odor. These were the wretched karmic burdens from the Empress Dowager's entire life. Outside the hall, people paced restlessly every day. I knew it was Shenlian along with the imperial physicians and ministers. They were all waiting to witness my failure, or perhaps waiting to collect my corpse. On the night of the 4th day, a heavy downpour descended. Thunder rumbled across the sky. Lightning tore through the veil of night. The windows of the Changshang Hall rattled violently against the gale. I was currently in the process of polishing. Suddenly, a strange faint sound emanated from the roof of the hall, so subtle it resembled the landing of a falling leaf upon the tiles. Yet to ears that have listened to the winds and rains for thousands of years, it resonated like a thunderclap. A rat has entered, and it is no ordinary vermin. Since you have already arrived, why not come down and share a cup of tea? I did not turn my head, remaining focused on refining the corner of the Buddha statue's mouth. There was a moment of silence from the rafters, followed by a dark shadow swooping down like an eagle upon its prey, a cold light flashing in its hand as it struck directly toward my back. It was killing intent, pure unadulterated intent, devoid of the slightest hesitation. Mei Lao Bai, who had been sleeping on the altar, suddenly bristled, yet it did not move, for it knew the caliber of this lowly ant. There was no need for it to intervene. I sighed softly, and the carving knife in my hand swept gently behind me. With a crisp, metallic clash, the dagger held by the dark figure was blocked by the simple wood-carving knife I used for my craft. The shadow was visibly stunned, using the momentum to somersault backward and land firmly 3 zhang away from me, clad in night traveler's garb, revealing only eyes as ferocious as a wolf's. "Who are you?" the shadow demanded in a tense voice. He was truly terrified. He was a top 10 assassin of the underworld, and this master technique of a guaranteed kill had been blocked by a mere carpenter. I turned around, brushing the dust off my carving knife. Who I am is of no consequence. What matters is that this Buddha statue has yet to be repaired. If you were to damage it, it would be quite a nuisance for me. There are those who have offered 10,000 taels of gold for your life, along with the fragments of this Buddha statue. Gui Ying gave a cold laugh. Though slightly startled, he did not believe a mere carpenter could truly escape his grasp. "Old man, be sensible and get out of here. I might yet leave your corpse intact, along with that 10,000 taels of gold. It seems the waters in this palace are deeper than I had imagined. There are those who do not wish for the Empress Dowager to attain longevity, or perhaps more accurately, those who do not wish for this Buddha statue to be finished. 10,000 taels of gold," I clicked my tongue. "That is indeed no small sum. It is a pity that the thing I despise most is giving up halfway. If you wish to die," Gui Ying said no more. His figure flickered, transforming into 3 afterimages, each striking in turn toward my throat, my heart, and my lower abdomen with blinding speed. In the mortal martial world, he would truly deserve the title of a top-tier expert, but in my eyes his movements were as slow as a flickering lantern. I could not even be bothered to stand. With a light flick of my finger, the carving knife in my hand flew outward. There was no heaven-shaking brilliance, nor was there any sound of tearing wind. The carving knife moved as gracefully as a swimming fish. It pierced through the 3 afterimages and struck Gui Ying's waist with pinpoint accuracy. Then, it carried his entire body backward with a thud, pinning him firmly against the large red pillar in the hall. Gui Ying struggled desperately, but he realized that his strength had been completely drained, leaving him unable to move in the slightest. The ordinary carving knife now acted like a nail. Like a divine needle, I raised my index finger to my lips, signaling for silence. "If you awaken the spirit within this Buddha statue, you will meet a miserable end." I stood up, walked before him, and retrieved the carving knife. Mei Ying collapsed onto the floor like a heap of mud, panting violently, his eyes filled with terror as he gazed at me. "A man or a demon? I am a carpenter." I wiped the knife clean and spoke. "Tell your employer that I will not accept this commission. And furthermore, the next time you send someone, ensure they possess at least a shred of courtesy." Having said that, I delivered a kick that sent him flying all the way to the hall's main entrance. Gui Ying, as if granted a reprieve from death, scrambled and tumbled out through the window, vanishing into the rainy night in the blink of an eye. I closed the window and shook my head. The youth of today truly lack any measure of patience. I turned back to look at the Buddha statue. After this brief struggle, the final stage of the statue, the unsightly water stains that were once present have vanished without a trace, replaced by faint patterns resembling fish scales. Far from marring the beauty of the Buddha statue, they have added an air of profound mystery and antiquity. More importantly, during the restoration process, I inscribed a miniature spirit-gathering array within the statue. Though this array is the most fundamental formation in the world of cultivation, in the mortal realm, it is capable of drawing upon the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. It will nourish the body of whoever wears it. The Empress Dowager's ailment is in essence a sickness of the heart, compounded by the frailty of her advanced age. While this formation cannot grant her eternal life, allowing her to live for another 3 years without illness or pain is well within its capabilities. Consider this repayment for the meals she has provided me over these past few days. I put away my carving tools, brushing off my hands with a sense of satisfaction. At that moment, the system interface materialized, displaying restoration of the soul-hiding wooden Buddha statue complete. Successfully gained 5,000 experience points. Life skill, carving, has leveled up. Returning to simplicity activated. New task triggered. Portray the 100 aspects of the Imperial Palace. Reward, undisclosed. The 100 aspects of the Imperial Palace. I stepped toward the desk and spread out a sheet of Schwan paper. I recalled everything I had seen and heard within the palace over the past few days. The greed of the Empress Dowager, the blind loyalty of Shenlian, the apathy of the palace maids, and the viciousness of the assassin from earlier. Each scene flashed through my mind in succession. I lifted my brush, soaked it in ink, and danced across the paper as if wielding a dragon. This time, I was not painting any specific individual, but rather a colossal palace shrouded beneath dark, oppressive clouds. The majestic and ornate palace exuded an icy, malevolent aura. In the corner of this palace stood a tiny sparrow, head bowed, pecking at grains of rice on the ground, turning a blind eye to the grandeur and terror surrounding it. Such is the nature of all living beings, and so it is with me. On the 7th day, the main hall doors were flung open, and the sunlight poured in. The gloom of the past few days dissipated as the Empress Dowager, guided by her attendants, stepped inside with trembling steps. Upon seeing the Buddha statue, perfect as it was in the beginning and now faintly radiating a gentle glow, she stood frozen in place. Immediately after, 2 rows of murky tears flowed from her eyes. It is done. It is truly done. She fell to her knees upon the prayer mat with a thud, kowtowing repeatedly before the Buddha statue. It was as if it were her own parents reborn before her. Shenlian stood to the side, watching me in complete astonishment. He had already mentally prepared himself for the possibility that I might flee, or that I might fail. Yet he never expected that a carpenter who appeared so unremarkable would truly create such a miracle. The Empress Dowager rose to her feet, grabbing my hand in a state of great agitation. Her grip was so forceful it was frightening. She declared that she would grant me anything I desired. How about I appoint you as the Imperial Preceptor? I shall reward you with 10,000 acres of fertile land. I withdrew my hand with a calm, steady expression. Your Majesty, this humble commoner is but a crude man. I cannot bear such immense wealth and status. I pointed toward the bundle in the corner. The Buddha statue is restored. It is time for this commoner to return. My shop in Yuzhou City is still open, and there's a wooden carving waiting for me back home, unfinished. The Empress Dowager was stunned. Will you just leave like this? Does the splendor of this capital not hold even the slightest appeal for you? I smiled. Through the wide-open palace gates, I gazed at the clear blue sky, watching a bird glide gracefully over the high palace walls. Your Majesty, these palace walls are too high. They block the wind, and this commoner has grown accustomed to the winds and rains of the world beyond. Very well. The Empress Dowager remained silent for a long time, before finally letting out a sigh, a flicker of loneliness flashing in her eyes. So be it. A master of such caliber naturally acts differently from common folk. Shenlian, escort Master Zhang out. I shall see Master Zhang off. As we departed the Imperial Palace, Shenlian escorted me all the way to the city gate. He handed me a heavy bundle. This is a reward from the Empress Dowager, along with a small token of my own gratitude. Shenlian looked at me, his gaze holding a hint of complexity. Mr. Zhang, you have caused offense many times before. This capital truly is not suited for you. I accepted the bundle, weighing it slightly in my hand. It was undoubtedly filled with gold and silver. Many thanks. I turned and climbed into the carriage that had been waiting outside the city. It was, of course, a common carriage hired for travel, not one belonging to the palace. Old Bai leaped onto the roof of the carriage, basking lazily in the sun. Mr. Jiang, Shenlian suddenly called out to me. Shall we meet again? I turned my head to look at him. This young commander still bore a trace of youthful spirit between his brows, one not yet worn away by the grinding of officialdom. Much like myself in those years, if fate wills it, we shall meet again. I waved my hand, and the carriage slowly set into motion, its wheels rolling steadily toward the south. I leaned back against the interior of the carriage and opened the bundle Shenlian had given me. Beyond the banknotes and silver, there was a token, the command medallion of a Jinyue commander. It grants authority over officials of a higher rank. This lad. I shook my head with a smile, casually tossing the medallion into the clutter of miscellaneous items to rest alongside that wooden statue of Li Tianyu. This trip to the capital was merely a minor interlude in my long and arduous existence. Having finished the Buddha statue, painted a portrait, and secured a generous sum for my retirement, I checked the system interface. The task portrait of the 100 palaces appeared as completed, unlocking a new life skill, medical arts, initiation 0%. I was momentarily stunned, then let out a silent, bitter laugh. Was 500 years of practice as a quack not enough? Is the system intent on forcing me back into my old profession? Very well, once I return home, I shall hang a sign right next to the Suiyuan studio, advertising my services in curing incurable diseases. After all, so long as no one dies, anything else can be managed. The carriage traveled further away. The capital behind me faded into a hazy silhouette beneath the setting sun. I thought of the soul concealing technique hidden within that Buddha statue. It should hold for another 2 or 3 years. 3 years from now, when the Empress Dowager passes away, that Buddha statue will likely crack apart. Such is its fate, and such is the fate of the Empress Dowager. As for me, I remained on the road, listening to the wheels grinding against the gravel. The tender sprouts emerge from the withered grass along the path. Spring is approaching once again. I wonder if the young maiden, Lin Warner, in Yuzhou City has already been wed. This has been a long journey home. The snow in the capital transformed into incessant, drizzling rain by the time I reached Jiangnan. The carriage journey lasted for 3 full months. When I stood once more at the entrance of the familiar bluestone alley in the southern part of Yuzhou City, the evening glow had already filled the sky. The old coal merchant who used to stay at the alley entrance was nowhere to be seen. In his place was a young woman selling osmanthus cakes. She held a nursing infant in her arms, watching as the child reached out to catch the falling willow catkins. The ancient locust tree still leaned over as it always had, though its canopy seemed to have grown even wider. Shielded from the light that obscured half the alley, I reached out to touch the padlock on the door of the Suiyuan studio. A thick layer of green patina had coated the bronze lock, a testament left behind by the passage of time. With a slight turn of the key and a bit of force, the rusted lock clicked open. Pushing the door ajar, a stale, musty scent, mingled with the fragrance of sawdust, greeted me. Everything inside remained exactly as it was when I had departed. Only the layer of dust silently recounted the 3 years that had passed. Indeed, I had spent over half a year in the capital, more than a year traveling, and time spent lingering in various scenic towns to paint landscapes along the way. This journey back and forth had spanned 3 years of wind and hardship. To me, 3 years is nothing more than the blink of an eye or a brief nap. But for a mortal, 3 years isn't change, a great many things. Xiao Bai leaped from my chest, familiar with the layout, and darted onto the floorboards, disturbing a nest. The bird was building its home. It seemed quite content with this old, dusty corner, stretching its body in total satisfaction. It then collapsed onto the soft cushion it had once favored above all else. Even though the cushion's original color was no longer discernible, I set down my luggage, rolled up my sleeves, and began to tidy up, fetching water, sweeping the floors, wiping the windows. The life of a mortal is just like this, filled with trivial, repetitive tasks. Yet I thoroughly enjoy this repetition. With every sweep of the broom and every wringing of the cloth, the movement technique stats on my system interface. It twitched ever so slightly, in a way that was nearly imperceptible. The great Tao is simplistic, and all paths lead to the same source. After tidying up the shop, I retrieved the wooden sign meant for our day off. After a moment of contemplation, picked up my carving knife and added 2 lines of text to the bottom of the sign. Specializing in difficult and miscellaneous ailments, sprains and injuries. Consultation fees are at your discretion. No payment if the cure fails. Having embarked on the path of the healing Tao, I had to carry myself like a true physician. I hung the wooden sign outside, placed a reclining chair by the entrance, brewed a pot of pre-King Longjing tea I had purchased on the road, and began another cycle of waiting for a rabbit to strike the tree. For the first half-month, business was desolate. After all, who would believe that a carpenter had suddenly become a master physician? Neighbors passing by would stop to greet me, taking the opportunity to trade a few jesting remarks. Ba Zhong, you've returned? Did you strike it rich in the capital this time? Uncle Zhong, this career change of yours is quite drastic. Just 2 years ago you were a carpenter, and now you are practicing medicine to save the world. I would always smile squinty-eyed in response, saying one must avoid starvation after all. I couldn't make a living in the capital, so I had to come back here to scrape together a meal. One day, the wife of Wang Er from next door suffered a back injury, and the pain was so severe she could not get out of bed. The medicine prices at Huichen Hall in the city were exorbitant, and with no other options, Wang Er decided to treat a dead horse as if it were alive and invited me over. I did not use any expensive herbs. I simply massaged a few vital acupuncture points on her back for a short while, taking the opportunity to channel a faint trace of incredibly weak, life-sustaining spiritual energy to clear her congested meridians. Within the time it takes to brew a cup of tea, the old woman was able to get off the bed and walk. She even chased a chicken that had crushed its own eggs all across the yard. It's a miracle, Zhang Chenyi, you are a god. Wang arrived, carrying a basket of eggs and 2 caddies of pork. He expressed his gratitude 1,000 times over. From that day forward, the threshold of Suiyuan Studio became bustling with activity, whether it was a minor cold, a cough, or a sprained limb. There were even those who came begging for secret prescriptions to conceive a son. I turned no one away. I took their pulses, examined their tongues, and wrote prescriptions for each patient's body. Appeared before my eyes like a complex and exquisite design. Where there was stagnation, where there was weakness, and where there were unwanted obstructions, all were immediately apparent at a single glance. The notification sounds from the system interface also became more frequent, cured the common cold successfully. Medical experience points increased by 10. Reconnected the fractured bone successfully. Medical experience points increased by 50. Researched a new medicinal elixir. A sudden flash of spiritual inspiration ignited. Medical experience points increased by 100. The days passed by like flowing water. My medical expertise grew increasingly refined. My reputation continued to spread, yet I remained anchored to this small shop, seeing only 10 patients each day. The remaining time was spent sitting at the threshold, carving wood or painting. Old Bai still lay on his back, sleeping beside the stove, only opening his eyes occasionally to stare at a passerby for a brief moment, his gaze revealing the faint, bloodthirsty glint of a predator. Another spring arrived, and as the peach blossoms reached their peak, an honored guest stepped into the shop. She was a woman adorned in traditional wedding robes. The deep crimson dress, embroidered with golden phoenixes, highlighted a face as radiant and delicate as the peach blossoms themselves, though a trace of redness and swelling lingered in her eyes. Uncle Jiang stood at the doorway, carrying a jar of wine in his hand. It has been a long time. I set down the medical text in my hand and looked up. The woman before me had long since shed the innocence of her youth, blossoming into a charming and graceful beauty, yet I recognized her at a single glance. She was the little girl who once held 3 copper coins to buy a duck. Lin Huani, Miss Huani. I smiled. Is this wedding feast I see? Lin Huani stepped into the house, placed the wine jar on the table, and spoke with some hesitation. Brother. Uncle, I came to visit you after 3 years of absence. You have become quite a stranger. The young girl who once dared to scold me for being ill, who dared to haggle with me, had finally been tamed by these stifling worldly conventions. And for whom? Is it still the son of that high-ranking official in the city? I asked casually, rising to pour her a cup of tea. It is not. Lin Yuan shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. It is the second young master of the Li estate in the East City. My father says the Li family has wealth, and I have reached the proper age. I can no longer delay. I fell silent. The Li family of the East City. I had heard of them. The second young master was a notorious spendthrift, a man who frequented brothels day and night. He was by no means a suitable husband, yet such was her fate, and the fate of countless mortal women. I am merely a passerby. I could cure her illness, but I could not change her destiny. Uncle Jiang, Lin Yuan raised her head, her eyes looking toward me with a flicker of anticipation. That wooden statue of the heroine you promised me 3 years ago. Do you still intend to honor it? I was momentarily taken aback. The memories rushed back to 3 years ago, to that early morning when snowflakes filled the sky. The silhouette of her, waving from the city wall, remains etched in my mind. I nodded and turned to walk toward the cabinet behind me. Reaching for the very top shelf, several wooden statues were placed there. Aside from Li Shenu, there was one depicting a figure in a cloak, holding a long sword, a heroine in a heroic stance. I had carved it late one night in the capital, inspired by memory, yet I had never brought it out until now. I took the wooden statue down, wrapped it in a piece of red cloth, and handed it to her. Take this as a gift for your upcoming marriage. Lin Yuan accepted the wooden statue. Her hand trembled slightly as she unveiled the red cloth, gazing at the carving that captured her likeness with breathtaking realism. At last, the tears she had restrained began to fall. Thank you. Thank you, Uncle Jiang. She wept for a time, wiped away her tears, and offered me a deep, respectful bow. Uncle Jiang, I must leave now. In the future, I will no longer be able to visit you often. To be wed as a main wife is to be confined within the deep guarded walls of a palace. It is difficult to find the freedom to appear in public again. Go then, I said, waving my hand, offering no further words. Live well. Lin Huani departed, cradling the wooden statue in her arms. She vanished into the curtain of rain at the end of the alley. A jar of wine she had forgotten remained, sitting lonesomely on the table. That evening, I broke the clay seal and poured myself a drink. It was a top-tier Noor Hong, aged for many years. The wine was fragrant, yet deeply bitter. Old Bai, care for a sip? I poured a bowl and placed it upon the ground. Old Bai leaned in, sniffed it, then turned its tail in disdain. It consumed only spirit spring water and would not touch this mundane, earthly wine. I offered a self-deprecating smile and continued to drink alone. Is this what it truly means to attain immortality? To watch those I hold dear grow depart and eventually leave this world behind. Lin Huani was merely the beginning. There will be others. A Zhang Huani, a Li Huani, and eventually I shall bid farewell to them all. In the end, there will only remain this house, these wooden carvings, and a mind overflowing with memories. That night I drank until I was intoxicated, and in my dreams I returned to Fanghe village. Li Tianyu, that old drunkard, was waving his hoe and scolding me for my laziness. Little Yifan with a snotty nose stood nearby, smiling foolishly. 2 months after Lin Huani's marriage, a strange event occurred in Wuzhou City. It began with a well on the west side of the city running completely dry. Soon after, those who had consumed the well water began suffering from high fevers that refused to break, with dark spots sprouting upon their skin, resembling a strange form of mold. Within a few days, this strange ailment had begun to spread throughout the city. The physicians at Huishun Hall were at their wits' end. Labeling it a plague, they sealed off the western district, leaving the populace in a state of panic. That evening, just as I was preparing to close shop, a figure cloaked entirely in black stumbled through the entrance. "Save me," the voice rasped, sounding like sandpaper scraping against a table. I caught him, but before I could even check his pulse, I was struck by a foul, overwhelming stench. As I pulled back his hood, my pupils contracted in shock. His face was covered in jagged black veins that seemed to writhe like living creatures. This was no mortal plague, this was corpse poison. Furthermore, it was the black killing corpse poison, a hallmark of the cultivation world. It is a technique usually only practiced by the disciples of the corpse refinement sect. "Are you a cultivator?" I asked, my voice dropping to a low, serious tone. Placing 2 fingers on his pulse, I found his meridian flow in chaotic disarray, with a faint trace of true essence struggling against the devouring poison. He was merely a minor chi refining stage cultivator, likely having entered the path of immortality not long ago. A loose cultivator. "I have spirit stones." Then trembled uncontrollably. He pulled 2 low-grade spirit stones from his robes. With a distant gaze, I ignored the spirit stones, focusing instead on the black veins spreading across his face. "Where did you encounter the source of this?" Outside the city, there is a graveyard and an ancient tomb." Before he could finish his sentence, he lost consciousness. My brow furrowed deeply. There is indeed a graveyard outside the city of Wuzhou. I have known that place for centuries, and it has always remained undisturbed. How could an ancient tomb filled with corpse poison suddenly manifest there? Could an evil cultivator be passing through, using this place to hone their craft? Regardless of the cause, if this corpse poison were to fully erupt, all several 100,000 citizens of Wuzhou City would likely be reduced to mindless corpses. This would include Lin Schwanner, who has only recently been married. It would also include old Wang, who sells flatbread, and the infants who have yet to grow up. How troublesome, I sighed, tossing him onto the bed in the back room. Do not consume him. Consuming humans of this nature is poisonous. Lao Bai glanced at the poisoned man on the bed, his expression filled with disdain before he turned over to continue sleeping. I walked over to the medicine cabinet and retrieved several medicinal ingredients: realgar, vinegar, sticky rice, and a piece of lightning-struck wood that I had kept hidden. These were merely mundane items, but combined with a trace of my spiritual energy, they were sufficient to suppress this low-level corpse poison. That night, the lights of Suiwon Pavilion burned bright until dawn. I brewed a large pot of black viscous medicine, forced him to consume it, and used silver needles to seal his 8 extraordinary meridians, compelling all the corpse poison within his body to gather in one place. By the time the sky brightened and the man awoke, the black veins on his face had faded by more than half. Although he remained extremely weak, his fragile life had been saved. Many thanks to the senior for saving my life. The man was quite sharp. Knowing that a common physician could never have cured this type of corpse poison, he attempted to kneel, saying this junior Zhongsan is merely a rogue cultivator. "Stop," I interrupted him. "I am merely a physician running a medicine shop. I care nothing for titles such as senior or junior." He was startled, realizing that 2 spirit stones would be the appropriate payment. Shisan was stunned for a moment, then immediately understood my implication. He hurriedly placed the spirit stones on the table, not daring to speak further. High-level experts always have their peculiar habits. What is the situation regarding the ancient tomb outside the city? As I withdrew the silver needles, I asked him distractedly. Zhongsan swallowed hard, his voice still trembling with fear. This junior heard rumors that a divine glow had appeared at that location. Believing that some extraordinary treasure had manifested, I went there to try my luck. Who would have thought that upon arrival, I would discover it was not an ancient tomb at all, but a sealed land for cultivating corpses? The seal has weakened. Corpse energy is leaking out. This junior only inhaled a single breath and nearly lost my life. A land for cultivating corpses. I fell into deep contemplation for a moment. This insidious, harmful damage is a calamity left behind from several centuries, or perhaps even a millennium ago. Very well, you may go, but engrave my words into your memory. Once you step past this door, do not speak of my intervention to anyone. Claim instead that your own vitality allowed you to survive. Yes, this junior understands. Zhongsan offered 1,000 thanks before departing, scurrying away faster than a rabbit. I stood at the threshold and gazed toward the west side of the city. High in this, a cluster of black malevolent energy was faintly coalescing. It was a clear omen that a miasma of corpses was about to erupt. Such things are invisible to the mortal eyes of ordinary men, but to me it appeared like a keen blade hanging directly over the city of Qingyu. "Old Bai," I called out over my shoulder. "We are working overtime tonight." Upon hearing the words overtime, Old Bai's ears drooped, looking entirely unwilling. I will make you red braised meatballs when we return. 10 meatballs, the deal was struck. As Qingyu City descended into slumber, a lean figure and a white cat slipped soundlessly over the city walls, rushing toward the graveyard on the outskirts. Deathly silence blanketed the graveyard. Not even the chirping of insects could be heard. The air was thick with a nauseating, putrid stench. At the center of the graveyard lay a sinkhole, a massive pit from which black corpse miasma churned and surged incessantly. The surrounding vegetation had long since withered, reduced to black ash. The resentment here was stifling. I stood at the edge of the pit and peered down into the darkness, which was so deep its bottom could not be discerned. It felt as though countless blood-red eyes were staring back at me. The system console flashed a warning. High-risk environment detected. Millennium Corpse raising hall. Immediate evacuation advised. I smiled. If this were 5 years ago, shortly after I had consumed the immortal elixir, I would have undoubtedly turned on my heel and fled. But now I reached into my robes and withdrew my carving knife. This blade has carved rotten wood, consecrated Buddha statues, and slain assassins. It is high time it tasted the essence of a millennium-old Jiangshi. Old Bai, ensure not a single one escapes. For the sake of the meatballs, Old Bai's body swelled in an instant, transforming into a magnificent and awe-inspiring white tiger. With a light roar, he took his position at the mouth of the pit. As the majestic pressure of a divine beast radiated outward, the surges of corpse miasma, which had been stirring violently, were momentarily forced to recede. I lunged, leaping directly into the pit. Darkness, an endless suffocating darkness, yet I could see with absolute clarity. This pit was in truth a colossal underground cavern, housing hundreds of coffins packed closely together. These coffins are arranged according to a specific formation. All the yin energy is converging toward the blood-red stone coffin in the center. A deep, rhythmic thumping echoes from within the stone coffin, the sound of a heartbeat. Each beat causes the surrounding debris and gravel to cascade downward. Something is about to transpire. Should this creature escape, even a golden core cultivator would find it troublesome, let alone the common folk of Yuzhou City. I step before the stone coffin, not rushing to strike. Instead, I circle it twice, as if admiring a work of art. The craftsmanship is not half bad. Blood spirit stone. It is a waste to use such material for a coffin. After offering my critique, I raise the carving knife in my hand and activate the divine carving technique. I do not intend to destroy this coffin, rather I intend to refine it. The inscriptions on this coffin form a yin gathering array. By modifying a few strokes, I shall transform it into a spirit dispersing array. The massive entity within will then be starved of yin energy, rendering it nothing more than a withered husk. The carving blade flashes across the stone. Sparks fly like arrows, for the blood spirit stone is naturally incredibly resilient, yet under my blade it yields as easily as tofu. The entity within the coffin seems to sense the encroaching danger, and begins to struggle frantically. The sound of fingernails clawing against the stone is chilling, followed by an inhuman roar that pierces through the coffin, vibrating with such intensity that it leaves my eardrums ringing. Too noisy, I mutter, frowning. I press my left hand firmly against the coffin lid. The everlasting spirit power within my body surges forth, forcefully suppressing the entity within, as my right hand maneuvers the blade with blinding speed. Stone dust swirls through the air. After the time it takes to finish a cup of tea, the final strike descends, and the formation trembled as the gathering yin energy suddenly reversed, dispersing toward the four corners of the earth. The frantic struggling within the coffin grew weaker and weaker, finally fading into a cry of bitter unwillingness before sinking into absolute silence. With a wave of my hand, I brushed the stone dust from my palms and casually carved a small piece of blood spirit stone from the corner of the coffin. After prying it loose, I mused that this would make an excellent seal. Just as I was preparing to depart, the corner of my eye caught sight of a skeleton in the depths of the cave. The remains were clad in tattered Taoist robes, with a cloth pouch clutched tightly in its hand. It seemed to be another unfortunate cultivator. It had clearly been dead for quite some time. I walked over and picked up the cloth pouch. It was a spatial bag. Upon a sweep of my divine sense, I found the restriction had long since lost its potency. Inside, apart from a pile of low-grade spirit stones and a few bottles of useless medicinal pills, there was only a book titled Qing Neng Jing. It appeared to be a mundane medical text. Wait, as I opened it to inspect the contents, my eyes brightened. This was no ordinary medical manual. It was the inheritance of a renowned medicinal cultivator. To cultivate through medicine and heal the world, though its raw power cannot match that of a sword cultivator, its true strength lies in its ability to endure. It seems this trip was not in vain. I tucked the Qing Neng Jing into my tunic and cupped my hands toward the skeleton, saying, "Senior, I gratefully accept your inheritance. In return, I shall see that you are laid to rest properly." I buried the remains, erected a blank tombstone, and then led Old Bai, returning to Yuzhou City under the cover of night. By the following day, the plague within the city had vanished miraculously. Those who had been afflicted merely felt as though they had just awoken from a deep sleep. After breaking into a foul-smelling sweat, their illnesses were completely cured. The physicians of Huichun Hall loudly proclaimed that a bodhisattva had manifested to grant them salvation. But only I knew that the bodhisattva was currently hiding in the back room of Suiwan Pavilion, gnawing on a braised meatball, while deeply engrossed in the study of that Qing Ning Jing. Studying the Thane Nang manual increased my medical experience by 500, and my mastery has leveled up. I have ascended to the level of proficiency in this skill. With the spirit energy now manifesting as needles, my life has returned to a state of peace. Yet I know this tranquility is merely temporary, because inside that storage pouch I discovered a jade token. Engraved upon the token is a ferocious skull, the symbol of the great demonic sect, the Corpse Yin sect. The deceased Taoist was evidently a traitor to the Corpse Yin sect. He likely stole this Thon Nang manual and fled, taking the manual with him. I cast the token into the charcoal brazier to burn it to ashes. As long as I do not admit to it, who could possibly know it was my doing? I am but a minor physician, treating minor injuries in Yuzhou City, nothing more. Spring passes and autumn arrives. In the blink of an eye, 5 years have gone by, and the ancient scholar tree in front of Suiwan House has grown even larger. I have grown a long beard, appearing more and more like an elderly master of traditional medicine, with a sage-like demeanor. Old Wang passed away last year. He died in his sleep, departing with great serenity. I saw him off on his final journey. Lin Wanner returned once with her child to visit. It was her son. He looked clever and adorable, though she herself appeared somewhat weary. Being a daughter-in-law in a wealthy family is far from easy, but when she saw me, she still offered a sweet smile. Grandfather Jiang. This child is named Li Nian. Please give him a nickname. Being called Grandfather Jiang, it seems I have reached the status of an elder. I bestowed upon the child the nickname Ping An. Seeking no wealth or status, I ask only for peace. That year, a shocking piece of news arrived from the immortal realm. Yi Fan, the ancestor of the refinement sect, had manifested his spirit. He issued a decree ordering the entire sect to cease all efforts to track down the mysterious senior Jiang, and instead honor him as their hidden ancestor. All disciples of the refinement sect, upon seeing the hidden ancestor, it shall be as if they were seeing the celestial emperor Yi himself, and they must perform the grand ceremony of 3 bows and 9 kowtows. When I heard this news, I was in the middle of performing cupping therapy on an old beggar. This Yi Fan still loves to stir up a commotion as much as ever. I grunted, steadying the cupping jar in my hand as I placed it firmly onto the beggar's back. Divine Dr. Jiang, what did you say? The old beggar asked, drifting in and out of consciousness. It is nothing. I am merely saying that you have been afflicted by severe cold energy. You should cease sleeping under the bridge. I patted his back, and the months drifted by slowly, until one night, amidst a storm of snow and wind, a youth arrived, covered in blood. He stood before the gate of the Destiny Pavilion. He carried a broken sword, his gaze both unyielding and filled with despair. He wore the attire of the Lianqi sect. Save me. The youth collapsed before the door, his hand tightly clutching a shattered piece of jade. Engraved upon that jade fragment was the character Jiang. It was a parting gift I had given to little Yi Fan 2,000 years ago, and it was the only token of our connection. I let out a sigh, gazing up at the sky filled with swirling white snow. Old Bai, close the doors, we shall receive no more guests tonight. Yet I knew that this door could no longer be kept shut. On the long road to immortality, the descendants of old acquaintances will always follow the threads of karma to one's doorstep. Since there is no escaping it, I might as well treat his wounds and see what comes of it. Regardless, with my current medical skills, even if the King of Hell himself came to claim a soul, he would have to ask if the silver needles in my hands agreed to it first. This was a karmic bond that had endured for 2,000 years. The youth lay fallen in the snow, his veins flowing with the blood of Yi Fan. I pulled him inside the house. The shattered jade fragment rolled across the floor, emitting a cold, crisp sound. Old Bai trotted over and sniffed him. This time it did not show a look of disgust, but instead let out a low, mournful whine, as if it too recognized this familiar aura. Old Bai, boil the water. I placed the youth onto the examination bed, and cut away his robes, which were drenched in fresh blood. His wounds were critical. There was a deep laceration on his back that exposed bone. His internal organs were all crushed and displaced, and his dantian was riddled with fissures. His spiritual energy was dissipating rapidly. Had it been anyone else, they would have long since perished, yet this young man managed to rely on his final breath, enduring until this very moment. The people of the Yi clan are truly stubborn to the bone. I shook my head, the silver needles in my hands dancing as I channeled my spiritual energy into them, sealing his entire body with 72 needles. Like mending cracked porcelain, I focused on his vital acupoints, stitching his shattered life force back together, bit by bit. I did not sleep at all that night. The snow outside the window fell heavier and heavier. as if attempting to blanket all the bloodshed in this world. The youth, still in a comatose state, murmured incessantly, "Old man, save me." I sat at the edge of the bed, looking at that youthful yet resolute face. It looked far too familiar, compared to the young Yi Fan of years past, who wept in the smithy of Fangshin village, while vowing to protect his master. They were cast from the same mold. 3 days later, the youth awakened and opened his eyes. What he saw was not the golden pavilions of a cultivation sect, but soot-stained rafters and a large white cat squatting on the floor, drooling as it watched him. "Awake, are you?" I walked in carrying a bowl of jet-black medicinal decoction. "Since you are awake, drink this medicine. It costs 3 high-grade spirit stones. I absolutely do not allow debts." The youth was stunned for a moment, instinctively reaching for his waist, only to find it empty. My jade pendant. His expression shifted drastically as he struggled to rise. "It is right there," I said, pointing to the broken piece of jade on the table. It had been washed clean and placed beside the wooden statue of Li Tianyu. The youth heaved a sigh of relief, though immediately afterward, he looked at me with guarded eyes. "Who are you? Where is this?" He could not sense any fluctuations of spiritual power from me. In his eyes, I was merely an ordinary mortal physician. "I am a doctor. This is the Suiyan Pavilion in Yuzhou City. And who I am is of no importance. What matters is which generation of descendant you are to Yi Fan." I handed the bowl of medicine to him. Clang! The bowl of medicines slipped from the youth's grasp and shattered on the ground. It was completely ruined. His eyes widened in shock as he stared at me. How do you know the true name of our ancestor? You are." He recalled the ancient legends within his sect. He remembered the Dao techniques, the mysterious gun-like weapon, the restored divine sword, and this piece of jade. The ancestral jade, which only reveals its guidance during the moments of life and death for the sect. Junior Dian, 72nd generation direct disciple of the Lianqi sect, pays his respects. Respects to the ancestor. Ignoring his injuries, the youth rolled off the bed, collapsed onto the floor, and knelt down, weeping uncontrollably. "Enough. Do not call me ancestor. It makes me sound like a dead man. Call me Mr. Jiang, or Dr. Jiang instead." I poured another bowl of medicine and placed it on the table. Ye Tian remained kneeling on the floor, afraid to rise, as his tears soaked the ground. "Mr. Jiang, I beg you, please save them. The great elder of the Lianqi sect has colluded with the Shijin sect to assault our sect. My father is besieged, our fellow disciples have suffered heavy casualties, and I risked my life to escape with this half of the ancestral jade." The Xian sect. I frowned slightly. It was that group of restless ghouls again. That damnable Taoist priest I encountered in the graveyard 5 years ago. It seems that was only the beginning. Stand up and speak, then drink your medicine. Members of the Yi family shed blood, not tears. Your ancestor once had embers fall on his feet and did not even wince. Your current state is nothing, I said, helping him to his feet. Yi Tian wiped away his tears, picked up the bowl, and drank the medicine in one gulp. The medicine was bitter, yet he drank it as if it were the sweetest nectar. Because he understood that the person before him was the final hope of the Lianqi sect, a supreme existence from the legends, to whom even the Yi Heaven Emperor would pay the respects of a disciple. In the days that followed, the atmosphere within Suiyuan's studio became somewhat heavy. Ye Tian was recovering from his wounds. His injuries were mending rapidly, for he possessed the foundation of a cultivator after all. Coupled with my miraculous medical skills, it would be difficult for him not to recover. Yet he remained restless, standing at the doorway every day, gazing toward the northern sky. In his hand, he gripped the hilt of a broken sword. That was the sword I had once repaired for him years ago, but it was a pity that it now lay shattered. It had been broken by the great elder, who used the sect's guardian treasure, the heaven-refining furnace of the artifact-refining sect, to crush the heart and blade of his sword. I sat by the door, carving a piece of peach wood in my hands. The killing intent within this sword of yours is too heavy. It is too rigid and thus prone to breaking, much like yourself at this moment. Ye Tian turned around and dropped to his knees before me with a thud. Master Lang, I know I should not disturb your quiet cultivation, but the sect is on the brink of destruction. As the young sect master, how can I be content living a life of hiding? He begged me to teach him, not asking me to take action myself. Because he remembered the ancestral teachings well. Those who have transcended the worldly path must not let mundane affairs disturb their tranquility. He was pleading for guidance. I looked at him. The comprehension of this young man was slightly greater than that of his ancestor, who knew nothing but to cower and weep. I can teach you. Then let us begin with this broken sword. I smiled faintly. The carving knife in my hand came to a halt. I took the broken sword. I used no spiritual energy, nor did I employ any heavenly flames. I merely took out the hammer I used for mending pots and bowls, along with the small hearth I had used for decades. Watch closely, I said, as I pushed the broken sword into the furnace. Ordinary charcoal is fundamentally incapable of melting a spiritual weapon, but under the enhancement of my miraculous forging techniques, the burning coals seem to pulse with a life of their own. The temperature soared in an instant. The forging of iron does not rely on brute strength alone. I folded the red-hot broken blade. The first hammer blow descended, its crisp ring echoing directly into the depths of one's soul. Yu Tian's entire body shuddered. What had he just witnessed? He saw a mundane hammer strike down, and the chaotic patterns of spirit energy within the blade were forcibly realigned by the impact. How could this be? Without the guidance of divine sense, without the infusion of spiritual power, relying solely on physical strength and the ultimate mastery over material manipulation. Clang, clang. I hammered with a steady rhythm, each strike seemingly in harmony with the Heavenly Dao as the system notifications went wild. Teaching refinement mastery experience +100, +100. Special state triggered. Precepts taught through personal example. That Yi Pan established the refinement sect, founded on the principle of pursuing the Tao through the blade, but he had lost his way. He pursued the sharpness of the blade too fervently, forgetting the very foundation of the weapon. The foundation of a blade is inclusion. It must harbor the heavens, the earth, and all living things. A sword is not meant for slaughter, but for bringing order to chaos. I spoke while I forged. My voice was not loud, yet it resonated in Yi Tian's mind like the tolling of a great bell. Half an hour later, a sword that looked entirely brand new sat upon the anvil, no longer displaying the aggressive, jagged sharpness it once possessed. On the contrary, it became plain and unadorned, appearing as nothing more than an ordinary weapon. But in Yi Tian's eyes, this sword was 100 times more terrifying than before, because it seemed as though it had learned to breathe. Take this blade, it is yours by fate, and don't let it be broken again. Repairing it is quite a chore. I tossed the sword to him. Yi Tian lifted the blade, his hands trembling. He could sense that a source of power was sealed within. That was a strand of my sword will. That very night, as Yi Tian reforged his blade, what was meant to happen finally arrived. Deep in the night outside Yuzhou City, dozens of light streaks cut across the dark sky, carrying a sky-piercing aura of slaughter as they dove straight toward the southern city. They were the traders of the refinement sect, accompanied by the experts of the Shiyin sect, comprising 3 nascent soul cultivators and 10 golden core masters. A formation such as this was enough to annihilate any mortal kingdom. Found it. That brat's aura is right here. I heard there is some so-called hidden ancestor lurking here as well. I wish to see exactly what kind of supernatural phantom this is. Arrogant laughter echoed through the sky above the small alleyway, within the confines of Sui Wan's studio. Old Bai yawned, slowly rose to his feet, and shook the dust from his fur. Ye Tian helped Sui Yuan check the surging battle intent in his eyes. Mr. Jiang, please rest. These are the affairs of the weapon refining sect. I shall resolve this myself. I continued reading my book under the lamp. Examining the latter half of the Qingning scripture, I turned a page. Go ahead, but remember not to damage the homes of our neighbors. Auntie Wang still has to sell breakfast tomorrow morning. Yi Tian stepped out with great momentum, a man and a sword facing the demonic cultivators filling the sky. Yi Tian, you dog of the sect, to think you were hiding in this slum. Hovering in midair, an old man clad in the robes of a weapon-refining sect elder looked down from above, his eyes icy and malevolent. He was the Grand Elder, the one who had defected to the rebel faction. Grand Elder, you have colluded with the demonic sect and betrayed your ancestors. Today I shall purge the sect on behalf of all the masters who came before. Ye Tian did not waste words, swinging the long sword in his hand. Delusional. Do you expect to win with that broken sword of yours? The Grand Elder sneered, manifesting the heaven-refining furnace, its maw opening wide to spew black demonic flames, intending to refine Ye Tian along with this entire alleyway. At that very moment, the sword in Ye Tian's hand moved. There were no flashy sword techniques, only a simple direct thrust. Much like the simple strike of a hammer when I forge iron, between heaven and earth, it seemed as though only this sword remained. A surge of sword intent that I had sealed within the blade awakened. There was no earth-shattering explosion, only a silent ripple that swept past, instantly extinguishing the demonic flames filling the sky. The peerless heaven-refining furnace was sliced in two like a piece of tofu, the cut as smooth as a mirror. What? The Grand Elder's eyes bulged in disbelief as he stared at the scrap metal in his hands. Before he could even react, the sword intent had arrived. With a single strike, a head soared into the air. The nascent soul stage cultivator did not even have time to let out a cry before perishing on the spot. The remaining experts of the Corpse Yin sect were terrified out of their wits. What kind of sword technique is this? Flee, flee quickly. The Grand Master has fallen, they are trying to escape. But it was already too late. At some unknown moment, a shadowy figure had appeared on the roof of the Suiwan abode. The colossal white fox, Old Bai, stretched its body, opened its blood-stained maw, and took a gentle breath toward the sky. More than a dozen golden core demonic cultivators, along with the two remaining nascent soul experts, were pulled toward the creature's mouth, unable to resist, like moths drawn to a flame. A refined meal, you say? The battle concluded with such swiftness. It happened so quickly that the neighbors in the alley had not even been awakened. Merely mistaking the disturbance for a rumble of thunder, Yu Tian stood amidst the snowy sky, gazing at the sword in his hand, stunned into silence. He knew this sword was formidable, but he had not imagined it to be this powerful. Was this truly a weapon that Yin Su had forged so casually? Inside, do not just stand there in a daze. Clean the blood off the ground. The smell of copper is too strong. It is disrupting my sleep. My calm voice echoed from within the house. The next morning, Ye Tian departed. With the Suyan sword strapped to his back, he knelt and bowed 3 times, his forehead striking the ground, before the home of his great benefactor. Ye Tian would never forget this grace. Once I have pacified the sect, I shall return to build a golden statue in your honor. I shall burn incense for you day and night. I waved my hand dismissively, tossing him a small parcel. Inside are medicinal salves for your wounds, along with a few peace talismans I have drawn. Use them sparingly. In truth, I had infused the with a casual stroke. He drew a sword talisman, a single sheet capable of parrying a blow from a nascent soul expert. Watching the youth's silhouette recede into the distance, I let out a long sigh. Old Bai, it is time for us to depart as well. Where are we heading? Duzhou City is no longer a place where we can linger. It is said that in Jiangnan there exists a Hanlin Academy, possessing a library of 10,000 volumes. Let us head there and seek a position as a library custodian. I gazed toward the end of the alley. Although the commotion last night was not grand, the fact remains that over a dozen cultivators perished, which will undoubtedly draw the attention of many powerful factions. However, this blacksmith shop can no longer remain open. I rubbed my chin, reflecting on the long, grueling journey of blood, sweat, and tears spent forging iron. I have already grasped enough of the art. It is time to exhibit a bit of this literary aura. Intent of the host detected. Unlocking the 3rd volume. Sound of the Dao. New skills unlocked. Calligraphy, 0-100. Reading, Initia 100. 3 days later, the blacksmith shop was closed, with a seal pasted on the door bearing 4 large characters, departed on a journey. Neighbors in the alley whispered among themselves. Some claimed Jiang Shenyi had struck it rich and gone to enjoy his prosperity. Others insisted he had offended someone powerful and fled in terror. Only Lin Huanyer, the young wife who sold osmanthus cakes, remained silent. She stood before the door, staring at the seal for a long time without uttering a word. Little Ping'an rested in her arms, his hands tightly clutching a small wooden fox that remained unfinished. It was the toy Zhang Ge had given to him before leaving Jiangnan, where the drizzle falls upon the ancient towers. The Hanlin Academy, situated on Hanshan Mountain outside Suzhou City, is a sacred ground in the hearts of scholars. The readers within this realm do not cultivate immortality. They cultivate only the Hao Ran Qi, the breath of noble spirit. That very day, a strange old man appeared at the Academy's scripture repository. He claimed his surname was Jiang, stating he had come to apply for the position of a servant to sweep the courtyard. The supervisor initially intended to refuse, noting the old man's advanced age, but the elder possessed such exquisite calligraphy and requested no wages, asking only for his meals to be provided. Thus, the Kangshu Pavilion gained a new member named Cao Disung, not eccentric named Cao Di. For him, the days drifted by with a slow, rhythmic pace. My daily routine consisted of sweeping fallen leaves. I spent my time dusting bookshelves, retreating into the stacks to read whenever I had a moment of leisure. From classical literature and historical records to unofficial chronicles and miscellaneous journals, there was nothing I did not read. Reading the Analects increased my literary experience by 10 points. Practicing the calligraphy style of Wang Shiji increased my expertise in brushwork by 50 points. Most of the students in the library were ambitious, high-spirited youths. They spoke with great fervor, critiquing the world and pointing out the fate of nations, stirring memories of my own youthful zeal. It reminded me of the vitality of my own mortal years. Among them, a young scholar named Su Yun was the most intriguing. He hailed from a humble background yet possessed exceptional talent, though his temperament was somewhat naive, often making him a target for bullying by the children of wealthy families. That afternoon, as I was sweeping the courtyard, I noticed Su Yun hiding behind a rockery, stealthily wiping away tears. His essay had been torn to pieces, lying scattered and soiled in a puddle of mud. What did it mean to say that an essay is destined by heaven? Masterpieces are born of chance, and while the paper can be destroyed, the spirit within cannot be crushed. I approached him and picked up the mud-stained essay. Su Yun looked up, his eyes red and swollen, staring at me in confusion. They say everything I write is nothing but bitter, cynical drivel, he said. They claim I do not understand the current state of the world. I glanced at the essay. It was written about strategies for flood control. Though the prose was somewhat immature, the underlying vision was profound and far-reaching. It was filled with compassion for the common people. He was truly a promising talent. Do not listen to their nonsense, I told him. Take this back and study it. If you can comprehend its meaning, the world itself can be held in your grasp. I pulled a worn-out brush from my robe and casually scribbled a few words onto the torn paper. Suyun took the paper, his eyes fixing upon the 8 bold characters inscribed there. To establish a heart for heaven and earth, to secure life and destiny for the people. Though the handwriting appeared jagged and rough, it radiated a surging, boundless aura of righteousness. With but a single glance, Suyun felt a thunderous roar echo within his mind, as if a great gate had suddenly been thrown open. The faint, wispy aura of his scholarly cultivation surged instantly under the guidance of these 8 characters, growing exponentially in strength. It transformed into the legendary, formidable spirit of a true scholar. This caused him to look up in shock, only to discover that the old man who had been sweeping the courtyard was nowhere to be seen, leaving behind only fallen leaves scattered across the ground, caught up by the wind as they swirled in the air. For 10 years I have swept the grounds of the Hanlin Academy. Over these 10 years, Suyun transformed from a victim of constant bullying into a renowned official, eventually rising to the rank of prime minister, wielding power that shook the entire imperial court. Every time he returned to the academy, he would come to the library to find me, bringing the finest wine and the highest quality tea. Even after reaching a status of being above all but one, he still maintained the respect of a disciple in my presence. Master Jiang, within the imperial court, where treacherous schemes run rampant, this disciple is weary. Strands of silver had begun to appear at Suyun's temples as he entered middle age. I was holding a cloth, carefully wiping a rare ancient text. I Wenkun replied without even looking up. If you are tired, then rest for a while. Your heart is heavy because it holds far too much. Missing context sentence fragment. Discard those attachments and desires, and you shall find relief. As for the common people of this world, they have their own destinies. Only fulfill what is required of you. To have no shame in your heart, that is the essence of your path. Suyun fell silent for a long moment, then bowed deeply to me. This disciple understands. The following day, Prime Minister Suyun resigned from his post to live in seclusion. He became a humble schoolteacher, and the world was left in shock. Everyone claimed he had gone mad, but I alone knew that he had attained enlightenment. His Confucian path, in that very moment of letting go, truly achieved great completion. Another 50 years passed, and I bid farewell to the old dean, and I bid farewell to Suyun. Old Bai has also grown so old that his teeth have fallen out. Spending even the birds are too lazy to be caught. I have emerged, my hair has turned completely white, and my back has hunched. Yet I remain merely that old man who sweeps the grounds. And today, the library has received a special visitor. It is a young man with a sword strapped to his back. Between his brows one can glimpse the shadow of Yi Tian. He is the junior Yi Gucheng, sect master of the refinement sect. He has come specifically to pay respects to the supreme ancestor. The young man kneels before the entrance of the scripture library, his voice resounding. I, the supreme ancestor, chuckle softly. That child of Yi Tian's bloodline has grown up quite fast. For what purpose have you come? I lean upon my broom and ask with a slow, measured tone. Before my grandfather passed away, he gave me a final instruction. He insisted that I must return this item to the ancestor. Yi Gucheng raises a brocade box with both hands. I open it to reveal the Qing Sui destiny sword inside, alongside half a jade pendant. Yi Tian has passed on. That young boy who once cried out for help in the snowdrifts could ultimately not overcome the passage of time. Even though he was a great nascent soul cultivator, there comes a day when one's lifespan inevitably runs dry. Did he depart with peace in his heart? I ask. He did, senior. My grandfather said the greatest fortune of his entire life was meeting you that year in Yuzhou City. He spent his entire life contemplating the 2 words, follow destiny. And in the end, he finally understood. The corners of Ye Gucheng's eyes redden slightly. I reach out and stroke the body of the blade. Remains as clear and polished as a mirror, only now it lacks a fraction of its former killing intent and possesses a greater sense of composure. That is the sword intent that Yi Tian spent his entire life nurturing. I have accepted the offering. You should return now as well. Do not come here again in the future. I am merely an old man who sweeps the grounds. I am not worthy of such a grand gesture from the likes of you. I closed the brocade box. Ye Gucheng performed a single kowtow, then stood up and took his leave. He knew full well that the old ancestor was issuing an order for him to depart. I cradled the brocade box and sat back down upon the bamboo chair. I have remained seated here for 60 years. Old Bai rubbed its head against me, meowing softly. Master Ye Tian has left as well. In this world, there is now one less person who remembers us. I watched the crimson leaves swirling across the sky as the system interface manifested. Confucian Dao entered. Grandmaster status attained. Skill unlocked. Origin of spontaneity. Current lifespan. Infinity. Longevity, oh longevity. At times I cannot help but wonder, is this a divine blessing or a wretched curse? I have seen one generation after another depart. I watched them grow from wide-eyed children into silver-haired elders. Watched them transform from spirited, confident youths into mere handfuls of dust, while I can only stand upon the banks of the long river of time, a bystander, forever drifting through the ages. It is time to eat. From afar, the clear, melodious voice of the newly arrived young maid called out. I am coming, I replied. I stood up with trembling legs, carried that brocade box, and solemnly placed it in the deepest recess of the bookshelf, a place already crowded with various trinkets. A hammer, a wooden carving of Li Tianyu by Ye Fan, a piece of a demonic beast scale, a manual of the Qingmeng classic, and now this Qing Sui Yuan sword as well. This is the private museum of an immortal, holding the remnants of an entire world. The bells of Hanshan Mountain tolled for another 100 years. Within these 100 years, the Hanlin Academy had changed its dean 7 times. Old Bai had become so aged that it could no longer walk. The majestic aura it once possessed had long since dissipated, making it resemble nothing more than an oversized, shedding white cat. It spent most of its days lying beside my broom, eyes squinted in the sunlight, its breathing as heavy as the bellows of a forge. I too have aged beyond recognition. My teeth have all fallen out. I carved a set of dentures for myself from wood. They crunch loudly whenever I bite into a hard steamed bun. The students within the academy have changed from one generation to the next. No one knows how long I have been at the library. They only know that since the time of their great-grandfather, there has always been an old man sweeping the floors here. They call me Old Zhang. That day the color of the sky felt peculiar. It was not covered in black clouds, but rather a shade of blood red. The entire heavens appeared as if they had been flayed, revealing vibrant fresh flesh, a sensation of stifling oppression. Descended from the 9 heavens. It caused the beasts on Hanshan Mountain to tremble in terror. The sky was collapsing, so I set aside the broom in my hand and looked up at the system interface, flashing frantically across my retina. Warning. Warning. Multidimensional entity detected. World-ending spiritual energy fluctuations detected. Host is advised to flee immediately. Flee immediately. Flee, you say? I glanced down at my feet. Old Bai was struggling to open his eyes. This little fellow can barely even roll over right now. Where could I possibly take him to escape? Moreover, under this vast sky, all land belongs to the heavens. Regardless, the sky itself has already collapsed. Where else is there a place of refuge? The cultivation world has fallen. This is not a descriptive adjective, it is a statement of fact. It is said that at the shores of the East Sea, the tides have reversed, and the island where the refining sect was located has sunk directly into the ocean. It is said that atop Kunlun Peak, the immortal sound sect had barely begun to rejoice before a massive hand descended from the heavens, crushing them into a pulp of flesh and bone. Countless cultivators fell like dumplings dropped into a pot, plummeting from the sky as fresh blood stained the rivers red. Every 10,000 years, the upper realm opens the heavenly gate to harvest the accumulated spiritual energy and fortune of the lower realm. In the eyes of those aloof immortals, common mortals are but ants, and cultivators are merely leeks waiting to be reaped, perhaps only slightly more succulent than the rest. A streak of light slammed heavily before the mountain gate of the Hanlin Academy. As the dust settled, a figure drenched in blood was revealed. It was a young female sword cultivator clutching a newborn infant to her chest. Her garments were so tattered they were beyond recognition. But I recognized that sword. It was the King Suiyuan sword. Although it was chipped in 3 places, and the blade was covered in fractures, I still knew it well. Seeing me emerge from the library pavilion, the female sword cultivator pleaded for her life, her eyes filled with utter despair. She did not know who I was. She was simply acting on instinct, desperate to entrust the child in her arms, to anyone who remained alive. Before I could even approach, a jet-black chain plummeted from the sky. In an instant it pierced through the chest of the female sword cultivator. Fresh blood sprayed forth, staining the pristine white stone steps of the academy. You run quite fast for a mere rat. A mocking laugh echoed from the void above. A man clad in black gold battle armor stepped through the empty air, slowly descending. Behind him hovered a blood-red halo, radiating a terrifying aura that would drive even great vehicle stage cultivators to despair. An upper realm true immortal. The female sword cultivator collapsed into a pool of blood, her hands still instinctively shielding the infant. The child wailed, a shrill and mournful sound. The true immortal landed, not deigning to glance at the corpse but staring fixedly at the baby. An innate Dao physique, hump. To think such a impoverished lower realm could give birth to this constitution. It will serve well to refine to a Dao origin pill. He reached out, and a suction force manifested from the void, intending to draw the child into his palm. The students and scholars of the academy turned pale with fear, collapsing to the ground. Before a power of this magnitude, their so-called noble righteous chi felt truly fragile. Sigh, a weary age sigh suddenly echoed across the plaza. The suction force was abruptly shattered. The true immortal was slightly taken aback, turning his head toward the library pavilion. Standing before the pavilion doors was a hunched old man, holding a broom in his hand. At his feet lay an old cat gasping for its final breaths. From where did such an old master emerge? Tranton frowned, waving his hand nonchalantly, releasing a gale of sword chi capable of leveling the entire Hansun mountain range. To him, this was nothing more than swatting a fly. I felt no anger, and I did not even lift my head to look at that incoming gale. I merely gazed down at the fallen leaves on the ground and the blood-stained fish upon the steps. It has all become dirty, I murmured to myself. The broom in my hand swept lightly through the air. The sound of the sweeping was soft and mundane, exactly as it was every morning. It was the same sound as me sweeping away fallen leaves. But as this sound resonated, that terrifying roaring gale was gripped by an invisible hand, erased instantly without a trace. And with it, the stench of blood in the sky was swept away entirely. Dongtu Chantian's pupils constricted sharply, and he finally looked at me directly. You have some measure of skill. Are you the guardian beast of this realm? Are you in the soul formation or tribulation transcending stage? I did not bother to respond to him. I stepped toward the body of the female sword cultivator and lifted the child who was still wailing loudly. The moment the infant was in my arms, it went silent, opening its eyes wide to gaze at me. Chuckling, this child truly has an innocent soul, much like the little Yi fan I took in years ago. Laobak, it seems our retirement has come to an end. I placed the child upon Laobak's back. Laobak grunted twice and miraculously it stood up. Although its forelimbs were trembling, within those murky aged eyes, a fierce glint erupted once more. Old man, this seed is speaking to you. The true immortal flew into a rage. A mere ant from the lower realms dared to ignore him. Whoosh! He summoned a massive seal, which expanded rapidly against the wind, transforming into a gargantuan object 1,000 feet in size. Bearing an aura of absolute destruction, it descended, aimed squarely at the Han Shan Academy. This was the true immortal energy of the heaven-turning seal. The students within the academy closed their eyes in sheer despair. I let out a sigh, leaned my broom against the wall, and pulled a worn-out calligraphy used for decades from my robes. I then retrieved a piece of yellowed parchment from my sleeve. You lot coming down from above possess no sense of decorum. I slowly unfurled the parchment, for this place is a sanctuary for reading. It requires silence, so I lifted my brush. I dipped it in ink, though in truth I drew upon the very dust suspended in the air. As the brush descended, it embodied the great Dao. Sage-level skill activated. Words become law activated. Dao harmonizing skill activated. Drawing a circle as a prison activated. Calligraphy Dao iron lines and silver hooks activated. I wrote the character stillness upon the paper. As the stroke landed, heaven and earth fell into absolute silence. The heaven-turning seal, bearing the weight of 10,000 armies, was brought to a sudden halt, as if a pause button had been pressed. It remained frozen in mid-air, hovering merely 3 feet above the academy's roof. The sinister smirk on the true immortal's face froze in place. He realized with horror that he could no longer move. It was not merely his body, his immortal energy, his divine soul, and even his very thoughts had slowed to a crawl. The surrounding space had hardened like solidified amber, and he was nothing more than an insect trapped within it. What kind of law is this? He roared madly in the depths of his mind. Is this truly the lower realm? Damn it, this is supposed to be the lower realm. This level of mastery over the laws of nature, even an immortal king of the upper realms could scarcely achieve this. I put away my brush. I blew gently upon the ink on the paper. It is finished. The calligraphy is slightly slanted. I looked up at the true immortal, held fast in the air. The library happens to be missing a stone lion at the entrance. I find this armor of yours quite sturdy, and the craftsmanship is not bad at all. I waved my hand dismissively. That high and mighty true immortal was like a wooden marionette, unable to control himself as he plummeted from the sky. No, you cannot. I am a disciple of the Shangqing Palace. The desperate screaming fell abruptly silent. His body rapidly shrank, his skin began to petrify, and his flesh and blood turned into granite. In the blink of an eye, a lifelike statue of a man kneeling in supplication appeared before the library mountain gate, still maintaining a posture of terrified pleading for his life. The system interface appeared. Suppressing an immortal, the host has received an incalculable amount of experience points. The system experienced a data overflow. All professional skills have reached their limit. Detection. The host power has surpassed the capacity limits of this world. The will of the Heavenly Dao is awakening. The Heavenly Dao is awakening. I looked up at the sky. The blood-colored cracks in the firmament were slowly closing, as if even the Heavenly Dao had been intimidated by that recent display. Quickly I closed the gates to preserve the peace. Dean Zhang and the students behind him stood with their mouths agape, their jaws nearly hitting the floor. What was it that they had just witnessed? The old man who had been sweeping the grounds for decades had turned an immortal from the heavens into stone, with a single casual character. I turned around and picked up my broom again. What are you all staring at? Do you not have lessons to study? I glared at them. The ground is filthy already. Clean it up, quickly. A world-ending calamity averted. And so, the grand affair ended with a whimper rather than a roar. The cultivation world suffered catastrophic casualties, its fundamental vitality severely withered. Conversely, Hanshin Academy, thanks to a certain groundskeeper, remained unscathed and miraculously became a new holy ground. Every single day, countless cultivators prostrate themselves before the mountain gate, desperate to pay their respects to that mysterious senior. The true immortal who was turned into a stone statue has become a landmark of the academy. Rumor has it that merely touching it can cure any ailment. Of course, this is merely a fabrication, but I cannot be bothered to correct them. I have no desire to be any sort of savior. I am merely an ordinary person seeking a life of leisure, though as it stands, even such a simple request is no longer within my reach. Late that night, I finished tidying the library, though in truth there was little left to organize. A wooden statue of Li Tianyu, a copy of the Qingning scripture, half a jade pendant, a broom, and that broken Qing Sui Wan sword. Old Bai, can you still walk? I gently patted Old Bai's head. Old Bai struggled to open its eyes, letting out a soft grunt. The flame of its life was flickering out. It had lived for far too long, and no matter how many miraculous elixirs were consumed, the limitations of a mortal lifespan are absolute. Its time had finally come. The child we saved was resting in the cradle, sleeping quite peacefully. I left behind a letter and the Qing Sui Wan sword for the child. On the letter only 4 words were inscribed. Study with diligence. I carried Old Bai just as I had 2,000 years ago, when I carried it as we fled that small forest. Let us go, old friend. I shall take you to see the sea. I took a single step, utilizing the art of shrinking the earth to inches. Hanshin Academy vanished behind us as we reached the coast of the Eastern Sea, the Canghai Santian. The coastline of yesteryear had long since changed its form, and where the refinement section stood, there now lay only an expansive, boundless ocean. I found a clean reef and sat down. The sea breeze whipped through my snow-white hair. Old Bai rested its head upon my knee, its breathing growing weaker with every passing moment. Old Bai said, bringing out the erhu that had accompanied me for several thousand years. Do you remember the first time we met? Back then you even intended to devour me. But I struck you unconscious with a brick. Old Bai's ears twitched as if he were chuckling. Afterwards, we traveled to Fangxi village, where we met Tinyu's master and the young Yi Fan, and later traveled to Wuzhou City, where we encountered Lin Ruani, met Ye Tian and even that person Su Yun, that Empress Dowager, that immortal expert. I spoke while drawing the bow across my erhu. The melancholic melody resonated across the surface of the sea. It was no longer the murderous spring moonlight tune, but a nameless song. Calm and indifferent, it was as if I were conversing with an old friend. Following the rhythm of the melody, Old B's body began to turn translucent, and countless specks of light drifted from him. Dissipating into the heavens and earth, he departed, leaving peacefully, without any pain. Go in peace, I said, stopping the music as a single tear rolled from the corner of my eye. This was the second tear I had shed since attaining immortality. The first was for my parents. Old Bai transformed into a gust of wind, blowing toward the depths of the ocean. I sat alone on the reef. The system interface lit up once more. Host eternal immortality status, current quest. I turned the system off. Dull. It was truly dull. If this immortality cannot be shared with another, it is nothing more than a form of punishment. I gazed out at the endless sea, murmuring to myself. Suddenly, a small ripple disturbed the surface of the water. A tiny sea turtle slowly crawled up onto the reef. It showed no fear of humans, crawling to my feet and stretching its neck to look at me. In those eyes, small as green beans, appeared a sense of familiarity, a laziness paired with a look that was truly infuriating. I was stunned. The small sea turtle rolled its eyes, yet it nodded its head as if it were human. It then opened its mouth and, although no sound escaped, its lip movements clearly spoke a message. I laughed until I was doubled over, laughing until tears streamed down my face. This old man had not truly perished after all, instead reincarnating as a turtle. Then again, turtles are known for their longevity. It certainly suited him. Very well, I shall not let you starve to death. I fished half of a cold steamed bun from my robes, crumbled it into pieces, and fed it to him. From now on, you and I shall truly be like turtles that live for 1,000 or 10,000 years. The sun rose over the village, casting a brilliant golden light across the sea, illuminating the man and the turtle. I stood up and tucked the small turtle into my robes. Let us depart. To where? It is said that in the West, there lies a place called the Great Wilderness. Are you planning to practice shamanism there instead of cultivation? Let us go and see for ourselves. With my hands clasped behind my back, I hummed an unnamed tune. I walked slowly along the coastline, leaving a trail of footprints in the sand behind me, which were quickly washed away by the tide, as if no one had ever walked this earth at all. Some seek fame, others seek fortune and seek immortality. As for me, I am merely a passerby, occasionally practicing the sword, occasionally healing the sick, and occasionally sweeping up the trash, just living a little longer along the way. This